The hoarse cries of soldiers pierce the ears. They are united by one goal, the destruction of the Pale Devil. A man named Knox von Reinhofer is desperately trying to restore peace on Earth. It all began, as always, by a twist of fate. Humans, undead monsters, they all stood before one man. They all had one goal, and to destroy this vile devil. The young man remembers well the words spoken by his once loyal comrade and friend. Although he did not fully understand the meaning of what was said, "You cannot let the devil leave here alive." However, one thing stuck firmly in his memory. At the moment when his friend uttered those ominous words, a tear of sadness slipped from his downcast eyes. The young man went out alone, unafraid of the number of enemies. He bravely attacked the first monster he encountered. The monster was destroyed, and the young man sank to the ground and silently moved aside. The eyes of the former friends met. The distance between them was inexorably shrinking. The young man asked his friend why he had turned against them. What forced Knox von Reinhofer to make a deal with the devil? Why did he decide to betray everyone? His companion smiled and replied that those words reminded him of someone. But was there any point in saying anything when things had gone so far? The young man said that perhaps it made no sense to Knox, but it did to him. Why had he abandoned them? Knox said that if the answer was so important, and if he wanted to end the suffering, then all he had to do was take his life. After all, they both understood perfectly well that there was only one way. The young man replied that if that was his true desire, he would gladly respect it. The young man prepared to attack. Behind him stood the undead knights, ready to support him. Knox put his sword forward and resisted the attackers. The undead were filled with determination and followed their leader. The young man used his unique abilities to control the undead and give them commands. Knox von Reinhofer, swinging his sword, destroyed everyone who came within striking distance. Knox von Reinhofer noticed that his opponent had become significantly stronger. The long-haired young man swung his demonic ball and prepared to strike. His opponent parried the attack, and the young men came face to face. The young man said that if he had to destroy his opponent and hear the report from the undead, then so be it. Why did Knox von Reinhofer turn away from them, leaving behind indelible scars? Why did the one the young man knew so well hide from the world? This duel was expected to be a long one. The young man said that Knox von Reinhofer preferred solitude as his faithful companion. However, a duel implies that one of them will fall on this battlefield. Almost 3 meters from his neck, the ominous edge of the sharpest blade cast shadows on his dark brown hair. It was a dark shadow, the most terrifying shadow that could ever hang over a soul. The blade of the guillotine was ready. The man's gaze was doomed. The people in the square did not understand how it had come to this. What had His Excellency done to deserve such humiliation? The man in the box watched the events unfolding in the square closely. The young people in the square did not understand why they had to keep quiet and not get in the way of the rich. War was raging across the continent. The common people had no choice but to keep quiet and keep a low profile. It was a period of war and strife. With bloodshed erupting here and there across the eastern continent, the conflict simply refused to subside. This led to the downfall of the noble Marva's family, making them one of the last victims of the hellish conflict. Thus, desperate times call for desperate measures. The strong act as they see fit, while the weak are forced to steal to survive. Unlike the strong, the weak are forced to risk their lives every single day. The weak have no choice but to dance with the Grim Reaper and his scythe, a veritable hellgate, where the weak can only await sweet release from their suffering. This was the terrifying picture that the continent had become in those days. The head of the noble house of Sylvestre, the first rival of the house of Marvas, Count Alan de Sylvestre, said he was looking forward to the spectacle. Everyone in the square fell silent. The last seconds of the victim's life were approaching. Everything was ready for the execution on the scaffold. The executioner stood silently, his hands down. Count Alan asked in surprise what this meant. Had he not heard the order to begin? The young man held out his blade and approached the rope he was supposed to cut. The count shouted at the boy not to delay and to cut the rope. The young man raised the blade above his head and stared intently at the spot on the rope where the blade was to fall. The women in the square covered their mouths with their hands to hide their cries. The count rose from his seat with interest. The blade fell and the rope was cut. Such was the dark truth. The sound of human death is no different from the sound of cutting up a carcass in a butcher shop. Drops of scarlet blood splattered the white canvas, forming the outline of the boy's face and completing the gruesome picture of inescapable reality with the distinct smell of iron. According to the cruel cliché of fate, these events will weigh heavily on the young man's shoulders. He had rid the world of Rune von Marvas. The young man severed all ties between his father and his world of the living. That was exactly how it was. He, Leon von Marvas, son of the late Rune von Marvas, was the killer who carried out the sentence on his own father, the head of the family, representative of his noble lineage. As the name suggests, these are not just any aristocrats. They are the pillars of the entire nation. However, as one famous playwright wrote, the head that wears the crown is heavy. Therefore, the burden of power should only be placed on those who are capable of bearing it. The new head of the Marvas family, Leon von Marvas, sat at the head of the table in front of his relatives. One of the participants in the meeting said that the Sylvester sphere of influence was growing day by day. The day when they would openly invade the Marvas lands was not far off. One of those present urged the Lord to strengthen the defenses. Another insisted that the head of the family make a decision immediately. Yet another declared that the time had come for my Lord to give a wise and measured response. Leon von Marvis rose from the table and asked everyone to be quiet. He had to ask those present to be patient a little longer. He needed more time to weigh everything up and analyze it carefully. The members of the Marvis family replied that the matter could not be delayed. The young man left the room and thought that, one way or another, this did not bode well for the once great house of Marvis. After the untimely death of his father, Lord Rune von Marvis, the young man rose to the role of head of the family. He was 14 years old. The house of Marvis, once revered as a powerful family of necromancers, had fallen into obscurity and lost its former glory. Leon von Marvis stood before the portraits of his parents. What would they have done now if they were in his place? The young man understood perfectly well that his questions would remain unanswered. The dead do not speak, and his parents would not share their wisdom with him from the other world. Nevertheless, Leon von Marvis desperately needed guidance. The young man wished with all his heart to restore glory and prosperity to his house. Leon von Marvis looked at the portrait above the door. It was Velen von Marvis, the progenitor and founder of this house, the only necromancer on the continent in his era. It is known that this house first gained recognition after its founder made a name for himself on the battlefield. But even during the founder's heyday, no worthy necromancers appeared in the family. The scale slowly but inevitably tipped toward inevitable decline. In the end, it came to the destruction of his own father. Leon von Marvis entered his father's study. This was where the chronicles of their family were kept. The founder, Velen von Marvis, was almost a legend. With a wave of his hand, he was able to sweep away his enemies like a destructive storm. He summoned waves of undead, forcing them to march inexorably forward. Over time, the western regions submitted to his conquest in just a few months. Rumors spread that Velen von Marvis had made a pact with the demon Marvis and obtained one of the continent's greatest secrets. It was the secret of necromancy from the dreaded Necronomicon. This secret allowed the founder of the family to command death itself in these lands. Leon von Marvis saw the very same Necronomicon lying on the table. It was a priceless relic that had been passed down directly from the founder. It was the very book that had led the House of Marvis to dawn as the only family of necromancers on the entire continent. The young man opened the book and immediately heard someone's voice. The voice told the young head of the family to listen carefully. Leon von Marvis was surprised. What was going on here? Was this a telepathic message sent directly to the head's office, despite the anti-magic field? Leon von Marvis asked who was speaking to him. The voice told the child not to be afraid. He was no enemy to the young man or his loved ones. Leon von Marvis asked on what basis he should believe these words. Suddenly, magical circles appeared behind the young man, and he felt the influence of some unknown force. The next moment, Leon von Marvis found himself in an unknown space. A huge beast appeared before the young man. The young man was not afraid, or at least pretended not to be. Leon von Marvis asked what this place was. The beast replied with surprise, asking if his predecessor had not seen fit to tell him about its existence. The young man clarified whether he was referring to his father, Rune von Marvis. The huge lion confirmed this and said that the man's name was indeed Rune. However, he felt as if the thread connecting them had been severed. He cursed, adding that it was not for nothing that he had been disturbed by the excessive kindness of the Lord of Darkness. He should have understood that his death was approaching. The beast asked whose doing it was. Leon von Marvis replied that it was he, his own son. The beast flew into a rage, and the young man could clearly feel his rapid breathing. The lion growled and said he would ask again. Had the young man really destroyed his sworn contractor? Leon von Marvis firmly stated that it was he who had dealt with his own father. The beast replied that the young man was clearly hiding something. Perhaps the hand that cut the rope was his, but that did not mean he was his father's true killer. Leon von Marvis admitted that this was not the case, and the beast knew it very well. The beast thought that he could leave the young man's despair, which was beyond comprehension for a while. The lion sensed an aura of darkness within this man. It was an all-consuming abyss lurking behind the outer shell. What had this child been through? How could such a reserve of magical power still be hidden in a simple child? The beast looked at the young man and saw all the sorrow and responsibility he carried. Despite his young age, the lion thought it was simply unthinkable. This boy was capable of surpassing even his ancestor. The beast said he wanted to introduce himself. He was Marvis, one of the 72 demons of hell. He was the one who had turned his back on the demonic world and preferred a peaceful existence among humans. He is a loyal friend of Velen von Marvis and a source of knowledge about necromancy, which has become a characteristic art of the Marvis family. Leon von Marvis said that legends are told about this beast. When their progenitor founded the Marvis family, it was Leo who taught him the forbidden art of necromancy. Marvis confirmed this and added that he was indeed that very demon. Although the current him is bound to the Necronomicon, he was once a fearsome demon. Leon von Marvis said that their progenitor often spoke of the Black Lion Marvis and added that necromancy ran in their blood. The young man wondered how it came to be that Marvis left them in the end. Lev was surprised and asked where he got that idea. The young man explained that since the time of their ancestor Velen, the House of Marvis had not produced any necromancers of his caliber. What else could this be but a sign that Marvis had turned his back on them? Lev said he wanted to clarify one thing. The reason why the young man and his family could not wield necromancy to its full power was that they were too weak to provide a suitable vessel. None of them could hold a candle to the brilliant talent that Velen possessed. This was the reason for the decline of the family's glory. Leon von Marvis said he believed Marvis. Lev noticed that the young man had accepted his fate too quickly. Leon von Marvis acknowledged that this was an inevitable outcome for weaklings who suffered one defeat after another in war. Lev asked if that was why the young man had also resigned himself to his father's inevitable death. Leon von Marvis replied with a question. What difference did it make now? There was nothing special about his father's death. However, before Lev finally turned his back on their clan, he would like to ask for one favor. Lev said that he would probably refuse. A favor is an act of kindness in which one party is left with nothing. Any agreement with a demon should be treated as a deal. Leon von Marvis said that in this case, the deal concerned the necromancer's power. After all, Marvis was capable of granting it. Lev asked what the boy wanted with his powers. What was so special about him that he should be granted this gift? Lev wondered if the young man really thought he had the potential to develop the power of a necromancer. Leon von Marvis nodded affirmatively, because if he were untalented, the supreme demon would not have spoken to him at all. They say that an ordinary person loses all their mana and falls into hallucinations just from talking to a demon. And when the demon has had its fill of fun, the person dies. Leon von Marvis added that, considering he was still alive, this could only mean one thing. He had potential. Lev thought that this boy was definitely not without talent and possessed an extraordinary mind. Marvis reminded him that any agreement with a demon should be considered a deal. Leon von Marvis said he would remember that. The young man admitted that he was not so foolish as to believe that he had anything to offer in return. Lev laughed loudly in response and said that was excellent. Marvis added that he was ready to make a deal with the young head of the glorious family of necromancers. Leon von Marvis asked what the great demon would demand from him in return. The beast took on a serious expression and said that he was interested in every part of the young man's being, down to the last detail. Leon von Marvis replied that he was glad to hear it. He was glad that his miserable nature was still worth something. The members of the Marvis family gathered once again at the large table for a general meeting. The speaker said that, as all gentlemen undoubtedly already knew, the current head of the family had only a fraction of the power. This power allowed him to make important decisions that affected their entire house. The man said that in this case, as the uncle and closest blood relative of the head, he would take responsibility for making important decisions directly affecting the future of this house. He would allow everyone present to express their opinion on his proclamation. One of those present said that it would be foolish to object, given the alternative of an immature young man. They could not entrust their fate to a naive child. Confidence was expressed that there was no more worthy candidate for the role of head of the family than Sir Kershel. One of the relatives objected that Lord Leon was the only direct descendant of the previous head. There had never been a precedent in the family for appointing an indirect descendant as head. Another relative said that who cares about precedents when every member of the family is in danger? The army of these robbers from the Sylvester clan was already marching to their doorstep. The man added that he did not blame those present for their doubts about the proper succession. But everyone must understand that choosing an ignorant successor is tantamount to choosing destruction. His only priority is survival. The mustachioed relative was outraged. How could anyone say such a thing? Everyone present had been granted a place at this table by the grace of the former lord. In the name of this family, they were obliged to fight to the last, not bicker like a pack of jackals. Even if the current head had not yet consolidated his power, he would not simply stand aside and watch as his own uncle usurped his rightful inheritance. Kirkel said that this was a firm but amusing opinion. According to him, Leon von Marvis had at least one loyal subject. The mustachioed relative asked what exactly Sir Kershel meant. Kershel replied that such ardently devoted subjects often lack insight, which prevents them from understanding when something is rubbish. Kershel told Pullen to take his wise advice with all clarity. Did he really think that they were all gathered here because Kershel cared about their opinion? Pullen was indignant and asked if everything had been planned in advance. Kershel told Pullen to think carefully, if not for himself, then at least for his family. Kershel added that they had all gathered here for one purpose only, to make a difficult choice between two evils for the good of this house. Kershel also noted that on the path to survival, he only asked that wisdom be allowed to set the course. Pullen thought that he was originally just a pawn in Kershel's game. Lev Marvis said that everything was fine except for one thing. With this change in their agreement, the true extent of his powers would be curtailed. Although Rune was gentle and naive as a contractor, he had a much greater reserve of mana than the young man now had. Leon von Marvis recalled that any demon who made a deal with a human had to drink the contractor's magical power to replenish his reserves. Leon von Marvis asked what he had to do for that. The lion said that there was one wonderful thing, but for now they would spare his mana. With a snap of his fingers, the lion created a cluster of glowing energy in the air. After that, the lion turned into a fluffy little animal. He said that it would be a little difficult for him to maintain his current form. Leon von Marvis noted that the animal looked charming enough to pass off as a pet. The great demon became angry and said that if the young man called him charming one more time, he would decorate his face with his claws and teeth. Leon von Marvis replied that he understood, but that such a prospect would be extremely unpleasant. The lion said that if they understood each other, then they could move on. Leon von Marvis asked if they needed to go somewhere. The demon asked if the young man wanted to gain power comparable to that of his ancestors. The answer was yes. Lev said that if the young man hoped to achieve the same heights, he would need to literally follow in his ancestors' footsteps. Leon von Marvis noted that this sounded logical. Lev stated that in that case, they would head to the hidden shrine of the young man's ancestor. This journey might put their lives at risk. Was the young man ready to go ahead no matter what? Leon von Marvis was surprised and asked why anyone would doubt his determination. The demon replied that he would show him the way if the young man was able to keep up with him. The furry beast and his contractor moved along the forest road in the specified direction. It was the mysterious forest of the Marvis family. The demon said that this forest could well turn out to be an impenetrable labyrinth for those who did not belong to the bloodline. The young man remembered what his father had told him. Only the rightful head of the clan could enter the hidden sanctuary. Marvis noted that none of the young man's predecessors had been able to successfully pass the test in this place. They were unable to meet the fundamental conditions. Only those who possess the purest shade of the attribute of darkness are able to continue on the path to the sanctuary. Until now, no one has been able to fulfill the first condition and make their way through this fog. Leon von Marvis acknowledged that the fog did indeed look quite thick. The fluffy beast confirmed that the trial was beginning. The young man approached the building and began to descend the stairs. The beast told the contractor to be careful. From this moment on, he would receive no help, for this was a test of his fortitude. Marvis added that he had one last piece of advice. Always follow the instructions in the Necronomicon. The Necronomicon would lead the young man to the coveted reward, the power of a necromancer. Green monsters appeared in the dungeon along the young man's path. The armed monsters had a captive, a young girl bound hand and foot. Leon von Marvis used the book and activated it. The book contained instructions on how to maximize the potential of the sacred relic, the Necronomicon. The first was the secret of raising destroyed bodies. Leon von Marvis drew his sword and pulled it out of its sheath. The aggressive monster lunged at the young man with the intention of enslaving him. Leon von Marvis thrust his blade forward. The monster was wounded and, bleeding profusely, fell to the ground. It all happened in a flash. Leon von Marvis said that this would be the first life, and he would continue his actions. The young man remembered his father's advice from childhood. His father had asked what they valued most in the great house of Marvis. The answer was simple: they exalt death itself. All because they were necromancers who commanded the dead. Therefore, they revered death above all else. Young Leon wondered how death could be revered. He believed that necromancers were obliged to take lives, whether they wanted to or not. The child asked, if necromancers want to gain power, like other dark magicians, shouldn't they do otherwise? His father said that Leon had studied his family's history carefully. They were indeed dark magicians and inspired fear in many people around the world. But that didn't mean they had to become heartless villains. His son had to promise one thing. No matter who he encountered in battle, as long as he had the power of life and death in his hands, he had to try to end their lives as gently as possible. Leon von Marvis wondered, should he keep that promise to all his enemies? The bloodthirsty monsters were still in front of the young man. Leon von Marvis was surrounded, and there was no help to be expected. Leon von Marvis knew that he had to aim for the cervical vertebrae with exceptional accuracy. There was no less dangerous way to destroy the enemy. The furry beast thought that this child did not look particularly skilled with a sword, and yet he was striking the spine with incredible accuracy. Was he just lucky, or was it some kind of innate gift? Leon von Marvis thought he had defeated one, but it was more luck than skill. Goblins are cunning and treacherous by nature. Fighting them all at once is definitely not the best solution. Leon von Marvis thought that it was difficult to judge height in the dark. That wasn't the only problem. His vision was fading with every passing second. The young man noticed that one torch went out with the first goblin he destroyed. He had to try to get used to the darkness while he still could. Leon von Marvis decided that instead of fighting his way through the crowd of enemies, he needed to strike and move as accurately as possible. Leon von Marvis put his plan into action, destroying one monster after another. The boy's eyes were getting more and more used to the darkness, and now he could see much more clearly. However, his blade had suffered greatly from the goblin's claws. He couldn't expect much more from a ceremonial blade. Another goblin, which was in close proximity, swung to strike. Leon von Marvis was faster and counterattacked his opponent. The furry beast thought, did he just throw away his weapon? Leon von Marvis jumped aside and rushed for his sword. In an instant, the young man was armed again and extremely dangerous. The next moment, the goblin was pierced through and through. Leon von Marvis left the enemy's body on the ground and, turning around, calmly walked away. The young man approached the captive. The girl remained in the same place where Leon von Marvis had found her. The girl looked at the young man with hope. Leon von Marvis loosened the rope, and the young lady thanked him for saving her. The next moment, Leon von Marvis silently pierced the girl's body with his sword. The young man said that he remembered another piece of wisdom his father had imparted to him, about monsters capable of imitating human appearance, which he had encountered during the Passion on the continent. The girl's eyes really did glow like a monster's. Leon von Marvis said that his father had taught him something else. Those who deceive others by taking advantage of their trust do not deserve a quick death. The young man added that they should experience the same despair and fear that their victims had experienced. To this end, the young man believed that the monster girl could use a little lesson in pain. Kerschel was idly spending time with girls at an entertainment establishment. One of the girls told the Lord that this would be the case. Would anyone object if such a respectable gentleman took charge instead of a completely inexperienced young man? Another girl said that it was simply unbelievable. She would never have thought that Mr. Kerschel would use the Sylvestras to get what he wanted. Making a deal with the enemy to rise to the top is truly a manly thing to do. Kerschel said that the girls were flattering him, although they would have to bow down to the Sylvestri house for a while. However, this was better than serving Leon von Marvis, who would inevitably lead the house to extinction. It would be much better if he took matters into his own hands. Kerschel added that winners are not judged. A relative asked Kerschel what he intended to do with Leon. The people on the estate were still deeply loyal to his father, so removing the boy might be more difficult than Mr. Kerschel thought. Kerschel said there was no need to complicate things. Leon von Marvis was very busy at the moment. It was enough to simply announce his untimely death. The dead do not speak, and their children should not do so either. The relative said that these were wise words. He believes that the last time the deceased spoke was more than 100 years ago, back in the days of the founder, who was skilled in necromancy. The young man proposed a toast to the next full-fledged head of the family, Sir Kirkle. The Marvis family relatives continued to celebrate and have fun. The meeting at the home of the head of the Sylvester family was in full swing. The head suggested that the plan to subjugate the Marvis clan was going smoothly. The young man said that everything was developing according to his instructions. The Grey Cardinal Kerschel von Marvis had, in fact, already taken his place in their plan, which meant that all they had to do was wait for official confirmation from the Imperial Palace for total war. The head said that it would be very foolish of them to assume that he would refrain from a second military campaign just because the first one had ended so recently. This only simplifies their task. The relative said that this would not have been possible without the brilliant strategic thinking of the head of the Sylvester house. The head looked at the photo of the traitor from the Marvis clan and asked again what his name was. Kerschel? Who would have thought that the centuries-old history of House Marvis would come to an end because of a short-sighted traitor? Sylvester said that a delightful night awaited them. Sylvester said that everything must be ready on time. First the father, now the son. He couldn't wait to hear the sweet sounds of despair. Leon von Marvis thought that with the last torch extinguished, nothing could be seen in this place. The young man approached the victim he had destroyed. Was this creature the last of them? Leon von Marvis looked at the torches burning along the walls. The demon lord said it was simply unbelievable. There had never been such insane contractors in his memory. The furry beast, in a fit of excitement, lunged at the young man and knocked him to the ground. Marvis said that although it was a monster in disguise, its human form was indistinguishable. Leon von Marvis still struck it with his sword, barely glancing at it. Leon von Marvis said that from now on, if possible, he would prefer to avoid the entire orc camp. Rumor has it that they despise humans more than any other species. The demon lord said that it was not worth paying attention to. He was curious how the young man knew that the last monster was in league with the others. The young man replied that it was actually quite simple. It was because of the torches. One of them was still burning when the others had already gone out. When they first entered the place, he immediately noticed that the torches were burning a slightly different color than before. The flame was greenish. This immediately aroused some suspicion. Leon von Marvis added that he recognized the shadows of the dead in the flames. As confirmation, with each monster destroyed, these torches went out one by one. At one point, the young man noticed that although he had destroyed all the goblins, not all the torches had gone out. This led him to believe that the last monster was hiding somewhere. At that moment, he approached the girl. As long as this monster was alive, the young man knew he could not go any further. The demon lord looked at Leon von Marvis and saw a frightening composure in this young man. He did not expect a 14-year-old boy to be so quick-witted in such harsh conditions. When someone's life is at stake, it's not so easy to read the situation. It's not easy to act without hesitation. The young man had enough courage and confidence to pierce the young girl's body with his sword. And yet Leon von Marvis did it flawlessly, taking care of all the enemies on his own. There's something more to him than just a good mana reserve. Perhaps this guy even has something very special hidden inside him. The demon lord thought this was very intriguing. The furry beast said that if the young man had passed Velen's first test, then they could move on to the next one. After the test subject took lives, it was necessary to raise the fallen. This moment seemed extremely difficult to our hero. How would he cope with it? The demon lord suggested that the young man look at the goblins he had destroyed. Now he had to direct his mana to his eyes to expand his field of vision. The young man followed the instruction. The demon lord said that the young man would see a thread stretching from each body, leading in an unknown direction. Fluffy added that necromancers call this line the line of death. The young man thought that it was actually a line leading beyond the edge of death. So these threads connect the souls of this world with the other world. The demon lord explained that necromancers separate the lingering souls of the dead from their bodies in order to bring them back to life and breathe them back into their bodies, mixing in a little of their own mana, causing them to rise as undead. The demon lord said he would now demonstrate this principle. The young man saw one of the goblins get to its feet and move toward him. Marva said that this process could be considered a kind of branding. Of course, there are other ways to create zombie puppets, but this is the only method that works with monster bodies. Leon von Marvis looked at the goblin and said that now he understood everything. It was a vivid lesson. Marvis said that now the young man could try it himself. Leon said that before he began, he had one question that had been on his mind for a long time. His predecessor had said that turning a human into an undead creature was much more difficult than turning a monster. The young man asked if the demon lord really thought he could reach a level where he could turn people. Marvis noted that the young man said this as if he would need it soon. The young man agreed with this assumption. The demon lord inquired who this poor fellow was. Leon von Marvis replied in a serious tone that it was Kerschel von Marvis, his only uncle. Meanwhile, Mr. Kerschel continued to waste his time and morally decay in the company of women of easy virtue. Kerschel said that the previous head of the Marvis family was a fool, and yet his life was clearly improving after the death of that head. He believed that this was the natural order of things for a favorite of fortune. His relative agreed and added that he completely agreed with this. All that remained was to take care of the last heir. After that, the burden on Sir Kerschel's shoulders would become much lighter. Kerschel said that dealing with this boy would be easier than easy. Kerschel proposed raising a glass and drinking it dry. He believed that such a momentous occasion was particularly precious and should be celebrated. Suddenly, everything around them shook, and a strange noise was heard outside. What was going on? Kerschel was surprised because this institution was protected by a powerful magical artifact. Something more powerful than the wind was needed to shake the entire building. Kerschel told the girls to be quiet and ensure complete silence. Kerschel von Marvis declared that there was an intruder. He said that no living soul dared to attempt to take his life on the grounds of this estate. Leon von Marvis suddenly appeared and asked where his grandfather got such confidence. The young man was filled with determination. Kerschel asked, could it be that a young representative of the oppressed family had appeared here? The man waved his hand and armed servants appeared behind him. Leon von Marvis said that it was very kind of his uncle to finally acknowledge him. Kerschel said he saw no reason for such a late visit, especially without warning. Did the young man have some urgent business with him? Leon von Marvis said that was a rather strange question. Did the lord of the lands need permission to visit a subordinate who was not even really a vassal? Should he really have to give advance notice for his convenience? Kerschel acknowledged that a worthy lord had no need for such courtesy, but they both knew that the young man was far from worthy. Kerschel asked if Leon was afraid that his position as head of the family would be taken away from him. However, it was too late. His hapless father would no longer come to his aid. Leon von Marvis admitted that from now on, he was responsible for his own safety. Kerschel asked what his newfound wisdom had to say about him showing up here alone. It was foolish to come unless he had a spare life in his pocket. Leon von Marvis said that it was foolish of his uncle to assume that he had come alone. Kerschel asked in surprise what the young man was talking about. There was no one else around except this boy. However, Kerschel suddenly sensed that something was wrong. It wasn't just magic, it was dark magic. He remembered that feeling. He felt an abyss, much more immense than that familiar to ordinary people. His uncle couldn't believe it. Had his nephew really summoned the undead? And indeed, the summoned goblins appeared. Leon von Marvis said that his uncle was not mistaken this time. How would he get out of this now? Kerschel asked the only correct question. How is this possible? Even this young man's father was incapable of such a thing. Leon inquired what was wrong. The House of Marvis had regained its power over necromancy. Kerschel ordered his guards to deal with this vile mischief. The guards immediately attacked the goblins, but dealing with them was not so easy. The summoned monsters put up fierce resistance and began to overwhelm the guards. The guards were confused. Were these undead really that strong? Kerschel was also confused, and a look of fear even appeared on his face. Kerschel thought that this was far beyond the ordinary. Unless his eyes were deceiving him, this boy had mastered the art of necromancy. He had to take control of the situation. The man decided to use his unique abilities. A magical dark sphere formed in Kerschel's hand, made of a cluster of energy and mana. The man asked what this boy had done to create this parody of the founder's power. Leon von Marvis asked in surprise, is it really so strange that the head of the Marvis clan can control the undead? Kerschel said that this was nonsense. The art of necromancy had long been lost. It had sunk into oblivion. Even the former head had not been able to use it during his lifetime. Kerschel asked if the young man really wanted him to believe that the useless offspring of the former head was somehow different. He had no intention of participating in this charade. Leon said that his uncle was so stubbornly unwilling to believe it that he left him no choice. He would now provide proof. However, his uncle had made an extremely foolish choice. Leon von Marvis waved his hand, and the undead, obeying, moved toward their opponent. Kerschel shouted that he would destroy them all and threw a dark ball at the undead. There was a powerful explosion, and the monsters were blown away by the shockwave. When the smoke cleared after the explosion, it became clear that the undead had suffered physical damage. However, the monsters remained on their feet. This was further proof that these creatures were truly undead. Kerschel called the guards for help, ordering them to drive the monsters away from him. Kerschel continued to throw dark balls at the undead, but even after the explosions, the monsters remained standing. The old man didn't like to admit it, but his magic skills were only slightly above beginner level. Kerschel said that the young man would regret such treachery. The treacherous traitor thought that after this, he would not get off so easily. The goblin approached Kerschel and plunged his blade straight into his chest. Blood spurted everywhere. Bleeding and losing strength, Kerschel asked the young man how he dared to go against his own flesh and blood. There would be no forgiveness for him. Leon von Marvus said that he remembered a treatise on the history of the continent that he had studied with his father. There are victors and vanquished, and hindsight always coolly separates these two concepts with the passage of time. Kerschel was indignant. Was the young man trying to lecture him? Leon von Marvus said that a man as emotionless as he was still had to comprehend the true meaning of this treatise. The young man added that even now he understood something from it. Leon understood that forgiveness is the privilege of the victor. Leon von Marvus noted that his uncle had once been in the position of the victor. He considered himself to be such when he stabbed his father in the back and saved his own skin. However, times change. Kerschel ordered the boy to shut his mouth and not say such things again. Leon von Marvus said that he would not wish Sir Kerschel von Marvus a happy journey, and on the contrary hoped that he would suffer at every turn. The young man promised to cherish the day when he crushed his uncle. As punishment, he would take away his hope for tomorrow. The monsters attacked Kerschel in a single burst. Leon von Marvus said that he was carrying out the sentence on behalf of the head of the Marvus clan, and that his uncle would not be forgiven. The demon lord Marvus said that this young man was indeed abnormal, as he had expected. Kerschel was destroyed. The furry beast wondered how the newly minted necromancer could master this power so well on his first try. From the outside, it looked like he had been commanding the undead for at least 10 years. Leon von Marvus told the demon lord that he had a funny idea. The members of the Marvus family were waiting for their leader at the table in the conference room. One of those present asked why another meeting was being held at such short notice and why Sir Kerschel had summoned them all together again. Those present could only guess. The bald relative acknowledged that an urgent council meeting was a serious matter. Something had definitely happened. Could it be news of a sudden attack by the House of Sylvester? That would certainly be inappropriate, given the complete chaos within their own family. The relative said he found it hard to believe that House Sylvester would be bold enough to violate the recent agreement between the two great families. Besides, the resumption of war requires the official approval of His Majesty. In any case, all they can do is wait. All doubts will be dispelled as soon as Sir Kerschel takes the lead. Suddenly, the young heir, Leon von Marvus, entered the room. The young man silently made his way to the head of the Marvus family. Everyone present expressed surprise. What does this mean? After all, they thought that Sir Kerschel had arranged the meeting. Why, then, had the young gentleman come? Had he decided to challenge his uncle as the rightful heir? Leon von Marvus asked those present if they had expected to see his uncle in this place. Unfortunately, Kerschel would not be able to attend the meeting. He was unable to do so. Sitting down in the head seat, Leon von Marvus said that Kerschel had died suddenly. Those present expressed even greater surprise. What had happened to Sir Kerschel? Leon von Marvus explained that Kerschel had fallen by his hand. The young man looked sternly at everyone present and asked if he had answered their question. Did they have any more questions? A relative said indignantly that if what the young man had said was true, he insisted on a more detailed explanation. How could the young man justify killing the oldest member of the Marvus clan council at a time when they had just buried his predecessor? Even if the young man was the head of the clan, he was still accountable to them. Leon von Marvus announced that Kerschel von Marvus was a traitor. Everyone looked at the young man in fear. Leon von Marvus said that the traitor had not only renounced his father by giving important information to the enemy, House Sylvester, he also intended to usurp his legitimate right as heir to the clan. For this, he received his deserved punishment. Leon von Marvus said that something was unclear to him. Despite the compelling reasons for the immediate execution of the traitor, everyone present was eagerly trying to defend his honor. The relative thought that the request to attend the meeting must have come from Sir Kerschel. Why was he still nowhere to be seen? This clearly indicated that he had been killed after all. The bald relative was surprised. How could Kerschel have allowed himself to be killed by a very young boy? However, now is not the time to worry about Kerschel. If the young gentleman managed to destroy Kerschel somehow, without giving orders to a single soul, then he is definitely powerful. The man rose from his seat and said that he had no idea about this. How dare Kerschel commit such a terrible crime? Another relative tried to assure the young man that they had nothing to do with it. How could they have known that Kerschel was plotting such vile intrigues? Leon von Marvus called for silence. The young man said that their statements might not be false, but they did not absolve them of guilt for a serious crime, a crime of negligence in relation to the conspiracy under the roof of this house. The relative thought that this boy had fooled them all. The bald man asked if there was any irrefutable evidence of Kerschel's guilt. Was Sir Kerschel really a traitor? If no evidence was presented, then the young heir had dealt with an innocent man. Leon von Marvus said that everyone present reacted exactly as someone more perceptive than he had predicted. The relatives asked who this perceptive person was. A fluffy beast appeared on Leon von Marvus' shoulder, the demon lord. The young man said he would provide evidence if they wanted it. He would allow them to demonstrate his uncle's betrayal. Leon declared that as the legitimate son of the Marvus family, he was appealing to a lost soul. Out of nowhere, undead creatures appeared. Armed monsters. Everyone understood that this was a spell to summon the dead. But how could the young man do this? Another undead creature appeared before everyone, Kerschel von Marvus. His relative wondered if the young man had discovered the forgotten art of their family. Leon von Marvus opened the book and asked if Kerschel would confess to what he had done here and now, before he lost what remained of his sanity. The relative asked Leon how this was possible. The young man replied that he was beginning to tire of this question. What was so shocking about it when necromancy was a hereditary craft of the Marvus family? The relative was frightened and shouted that they must flee and save themselves. However, neither of them managed to escape. In the next moment, the relative's head was blown to pieces. The surviving relative fell to his knees and begged for forgiveness. The frightened relative looked up and stared at the young man. Leon von Marvus looked at his frightened relative and said that the meeting was not over yet. Those present must listen to the head of the family until he had said everything he wanted to say. The undead Kerschel von Marvus began to rage, showing everyone that he was no longer human. Leon von Marvus repeated his question. Was there a single person present who had no idea about Kerschel's misdeeds? Kerschel declared that all those who had served the former head of the house had turned against him. Every last one of them. None of them were unaware of his duplicity. A frightened relative kneeling on the floor begged Lord Leon for mercy. Other relatives also swore to repent for their sins. The bald man asked for a chance to prove his loyalty to the Lord. However, a monster was already looming over each of them. While the monsters did their work, Leon von Marvus stood near the book and read the spell. Leon said that by the power given to him as head of the clan, he declared to this council that the dark art of necromancy had returned to them. Leon von Marvus looked around. The traitors were finished. The young man decided that he still needed to find Sir Pullen. At that moment, someone came around the corner. The assistant, hiding behind the curtain, reported that Pullen had been sent to prison for inciting rebellion. Leon von Marvus ordered the young man to show him the way. The head of the family stopped and said that the young man could run away if he wanted to. However, he could not guarantee the consequences. The servants were paralyzed with fear and had no intention of running away. Leon assumed that they would make a sensible decision. The head of the family, Sylvester, received a letter from the messenger. Sylvester read the message and said that even the Empire had turned its back on the Marvus family. The assistant noted that apart from the deeds of their ancestor, this family had nothing to boast about. Their capital and labor force were simply laughable. Sylvester noted that they had even less of the former than the latter. Either way, they were proceeding as originally planned. Sylvester said that they would finally bring the House of Marvus to its knees next month. A noble war would break out. Sylvester asked his assistant about the latest request. The assistant said he was ready to confirm it without a shadow of a doubt. Sylvester inquired, "Does that mean defeat without any options?" Unless a full-fledged necromancer suddenly graced the House of Marvus with his presence after a century of mediocrity, or their founder, Velen von Marvus, does not rise from the dead in person, in that case, their chances of defeat are simply negligible. Sylvester said that in that case, the war would be won entirely by his family. In the dungeon, Mr. Pullen fell to his knees and asked the young lord for forgiveness. Leon von Marvus thought that Sir Pullen was one of the few loyal vassals remaining in the House of Marvus, and the only one who had openly opposed Kerschel. The young man decided that he must recruit this man at any cost. Leon told Pullen he could get up from his knees. The head of the family added that they had a lot of work to do and would need Pullen's help. Pullen was surprised. What help could a man like him be? Leon von Marvus told Pullen to start by taking a bath, cleaning himself up, and coming to the head's office for a chat. There they would discuss all matters. Pullen swore to serve the young master with endless devotion. The demon lord asked the young man what he would do next. The choice was up to the contractor. Pullen appeared in the office and said that he was afraid to even think about anything risky. How could he go to a meeting with the Sylvestras, pretending to be Kerschel? Pullen noted that it would take extraordinary artistry to convincingly imitate his behavior. Leon von Marvus read a spell from the book and asked if that would be enough. A magical creature appeared in the room. The creature turned into Kerschel. Pullen asked what was going on. How could the head of the family remain so unshakable? He had created an undead creature out of his own uncle. The other vassals had, of course, informed him in advance, but it was still unbelievable. It turns out that the rumors that he, the head of the family, had mastered necromancy were true. Pullen thought that during the heyday of the Marvus family, they could have had anything they wanted. Why had the heavens been so cruel to them for so long? Pullen figured that controlling the dead Kerschel would let them fool the Sylvestros' house for a while, but they'd inevitably figure out the scam sooner or later. The undead are incapable of accurately recreating a person's manner of speech, handwriting, and behavior. Leon von Marvus said that this would have been the case if it had been Kerschel's own body. However, before them lay the body of a doppelganger he had been lucky enough to encounter. It is a monster capable of copying a person down to their personality, memories, and even abilities. Pullen said that in that case, he was extremely surprised and believed that everything would work out for them. Leon von Marvus remembered the girl in the basement whom he had stabbed through and who, as a result, turned out to be a monster. It was that doppelganger. It was then that Leon von Marvus asked what this monster was called. The demon lord explained that it was a doppelganger. Fluffy explained that this monster could copy a person down to their personality, memories, and even abilities. This insidious creature likes to imitate travelers who have fallen behind the group. At the same time, the original is destroyed. and the monster devours the victim's unsuspecting companions. Leon von Marvis was already thinking about how this monster could be used in the future for his own personal interests. Leon activated his unique necromancer abilities and brought the destroyed girl back to life. The demon lord thought it was nice to leave his faithful servant for his precious offspring. Leon asked the furry beast if he could work with the doppelganger. The demon lord replied that he had no objection. The furry creature warned that this creature could only copy those whom the necromancer had encountered personally. A target that was more powerful in terms of magic could not be recreated by the doppelganger in any way. The demon lord asked if the contractor understood this. Although the young man was talented, he was still too young and inexperienced. Even if Leon was able to seal his uncle's soul, its loyalty would remain in question if he was unable to maintain his grip for a long period of time. The soul would inevitably turn to nothingness. The demon lord suggested leaving the Marvis house only if the young man found a clear way out of his predicament. Leon von Marvis declared that he would never turn his back on his family. The young man understood that in his absence, the innocent staff of the estate would be destroyed or subjugated as a result of the Sylvester invasion. The demon lord asked if the young man was willing to risk his life for them. The answer was yes. Fluffy did not understand why he had answered that way. Was it really just because of some exaggerated sense of duty to his family? For what? However, at that moment, there were more important questions. Questions that could not be put off. The demon lord then told the young man to go and turn that scoundrel into an undead. Leon would definitely find a use for him. Leon asked if the demon lord knew this creature. Fluffy replied that it was one of Velen's favorite puppets. It would be very useful in its current form. However, its personality was slightly annoying. Leon said that this soul should heed his call as the heir to the Marvis clan. He was calling it back to the world of the living. A strange, slightly annoying creature appeared in the flesh. Marvis told Crow to wake up immediately. How long could he lie around doing nothing? They had their first contractor in many centuries. Crow had to take on a normal appearance. They didn't understand what he was hissing about. Crow tried to take on human form, but he only partially succeeded. He said that this demon lord was too pompous for a mangy cat. The demon lord became angry and threatened destruction. Crow completely transformed into a human and said that he was already undead. He could no longer be destroyed. Leon von Marvis and Crow looked at each other. They were like two peas in a pod. Pullen said that if there was a way to recreate Kerschel down to his smallest habits based on memories, then it would be entirely possible to deceive Sylvestrov with his undead shell. Pullen noted that this trick was very effective. He wanted to see it with his own eyes, whatever the cost. Leon von Marvis said that this was exactly what he wanted to hear from Sir Pullen. Pullen said he had one more question that was bothering him, and he couldn't help but ask it. It was obvious that the Sylvesters would request official permission for another attack on Marvis land. But for some reason, he felt that Leon von Marvis intended to stay here despite the threat, although fleeing would leave him with a much better chance of survival. Leon von Marvis remembered the words of the demon lord, who had suggested that he leave the Marvis estate only if the young man found a clear way out of his predicament. Leon replied that it was his duty as head of the family to defend the estate from enemy occupiers. Pullen said that in that case, he would follow the head with complete zeal, but still wanted to know the reason behind this decision. Leon admitted that he himself had thought long and hard about this decision, about how to get out of the situation that had arisen. The young man said he couldn't claim to have had any ulterior motives. He simply wanted to become a worthy head of this house. First and foremost, he wanted to understand what it meant to be worthy. The young man added that the answer was still not clear, so he decided to at least buy himself enough time to find that answer. This also meant that he would prevent any attempts to take anything away from them. Leon von Marvis believed that as long as he did not repeat his father's past mistakes and defended what he had again and again, he could be sure that one day he would find the answer to the question, what was he fighting for after all? These were all the thoughts the young man had on the matter at the moment. Crow said, "Who would have known that the house had fallen so low? The contractor has a lot on his plate." The demon lord said that for Crow, this young man is a master. How dare he treat the contract with such disrespect? Leon noted that Lord Marvas himself was not too concerned with formalities. The demon lord replied that he was like that, and added that the contractor was not very strong in terms of social cues. Leon admitted this and asked how Marvas found out about it. The demon lord said that he sensed it, and added that Crow was once Velen's familiar. Simply put, Crow had been passed down to the young man as an inheritance. The demon lord explained that Crow was a loyal servant and killer in the service of Velen. Leon said he understood everything. He believed that the ability to transform was quite useful for the task of an assassin. Crow said that he was the perfect assassin and would be useful to the contractor. Unlike that damn cat with an inflated ego. Marvis declared that he was not a cat and added that he could send Crow back into the abyss for his insolence. While Marvis and Crow were sorting things out with their fists, Leon said that Crow's abilities were exactly what he needed at the moment. The young man asked if Crow could pretend to be his deceased uncle. Crow replied that it would be no trouble for him. Crow said he was ready to hear what he needed to do. Marvis warned the contractor that Crow didn't understand jokes and that he needed to be serious and to the point when communicating with him. There was a knock at the door, and Pullen said that a letter had arrived from the Sylvesters. He hurried to deliver it himself. For ages, the House of Marvas has neglected its ducal duty. How shameful to feast idly, reaping the fruits of the sweat, blood, and tears of its loyal subjects. The House of Sylvester, under the capable leadership of Count Alan de Sylvester, challenges the House of Marvas to a fair fight between noble houses. If the Duchy of Marvas surrenders in a timely manner, there will be no full-scale war, and its people will be welcomed with open arms. If this demand is not met, their army will arrive within a month, destroying everything in its path. In the name of His Imperial Majesty, and with his wise permission, the letter was signed by Count Alan de Sylvestre. Leon von Marvas said that they would have to wait a whole month. Marvas asked if the letter was frightening in its suddenness. The Demon Lord said that there was little time left. Of course, it was possible to flee and postpone the battle, gathering strength. Leon von Marvas replied that he meant exactly the opposite. The young man added that he was not sure he could endure a whole month of waiting. The Demon Lord told the unbalanced contractor that the enemy army numbered in the hundreds. This was a completely different scale of threat compared to his uncle. Fluffy asked if the young man was still going to openly confront the Sylvesters. Leon von Marvas expressed confidence that everything would be fine with them. After all, this time there was no need to spare anyone. He could take everyone's life with a clear conscience. Rumors spread throughout the city that Sir Kirkle had disappeared overnight. This was a bad sign, considering that the previous head of the family had recently passed away. People hoped that the young lord was all right. The townspeople did not think that the Sylvesters would storm the gates anytime soon, but they were wrong. Pullen reminded his interlocutors that a careless word could sink a ship. Following Pullen across the town square was the young head of the Marvas family with a fluffy animal on his shoulder. The townspeople saw the young man and bowed respectfully. They said they had only allowed themselves to exchange news gleaned from social media. The people expressed their condolences to the head of the family for his loss. After all, it is such a tragedy to lose an uncle in times like these. It is very sad. The depth of suffering is unimaginable. Leon von Marvas replied that his uncle was quite alive. He had simply fallen ill suddenly with an unpleasant ailment, but would soon recover. The young man thought it would be a good idea to create the appearance that his uncle had not died. Leon believed that if you had to deceive your enemies, you had to deceive your friends first. Leon told Pullen that they needed to make sure that the surviving vassals did not speak out, like the other witnesses. Pullen asked why my lord had visited the city center. Leon von Marvas said that he appreciated that, but there was something he wanted to see for himself. The young man added that he sensed a powerful surge of magic in one of the buildings. Leon added that it would be better for Pullen to wait for him outside. The protagonist told Pullen to seal the door behind him. The young man added that Pullen should not allow a single living soul to enter or leave. Inside the building there was chaos, with trash and broken chairs scattered everywhere. Several people were cleaning up the room. Leon von Marvas saw a man with animal ears and asked if it was him. The Demon Lord said that it was undoubtedly him. The strange creature was among those cleaning the room, scrubbing bloodstains off the floor. Marvas thought it was a pity to let such incredible talent go to waste. He said that none of the young man's vassals had a keen eye, and there was nothing that could be done about it. Leon von Marvas approached the young man and asked for a moment of his attention. The young man bowed his head and apologized to the young lord. There had been a disturbance at their establishment due to rowdy patrons. They would be most grateful if the lord would visit another time. The woman kicked the young man and shouted at Walter not to speak to the gentleman that way. The woman apologized to the young man for having to deal with the lowly beast man. It was completely accidental. The woman called the assistant an insufferable mongrel because he didn't even understand who he had just been talking to. The woman added that they were in the presence of the youngest gentleman of the Marvas household. Walter apologized and said that he was still new, so he did not recognize the gentleman. Leon von Marvas repeated that he wanted to take a minute of his time. The woman said she would consider it an honor and that she had plenty of time. Leon von Marvas remarked that he was not speaking to her. He had business with this young man. Walter, of course, was very surprised. Walter did not understand why the young Mr. Marvas needed him. Leon von Marvas used his unique abilities, and all of Walter's wounds were healed. Leon von Marvas said that he was asking for the last time if the young man would give him a minute of his attention. The woman intervened again and said that this beast man was her personal slave. He had no right to dispose of his own time. Everything the young master needed had to be asked of her. Leon von Marvas thought that the owner of the establishment was not present when he came for his uncle's soul. Apparently, she knew nothing if he had gotten rid of the witnesses. Leon said that, in that case, he would have a few questions. The first question was, since when had slavery been permitted in the duchy? The second question was, it had been quite some time since his predecessor's death. Why did people continue to treat him inappropriately? Leon von Marvas asked the woman, did she really not want to recognize him as the rightful ruler of the Marvas lands? The Demon Lord said that the contractor had put it perfectly. The young man may look young, but it is extremely rude to treat the bearer of an agreement with a demon without proper respect. Leon von Marvas said that he was not only interested in this beast man. If she had other slaves, he demanded that they be freed immediately. She was given only 10 minutes, and she should not expect any mercy after that. The woman asked if the young gentleman was prepared for the consequences. The woman sarcastically remarked that she had once again neglected proper etiquette. Leon von Marvas said he was willing to forgive her if she admitted her mistake. He had heard worse. Walter asked the Lord to what he owed such mercy, for he was but an unworthy slave. The mistress of the establishment called her servants to her aid. The men were armed with whatever they could find. The armed men pounced on the young gentleman. Leon opened the book and uttered a spell. The young man stretched out his hand, and demonic mana flowed from it. At that moment, undead monsters appeared in the room. They immediately fought back against the mistress's henchmen. The armed men were filled with fear and terror. They began to scream and try to find a safe place. Leon von Marvis asked the goblin for his sword for a while, explaining that his own sword was slightly worn. Leon von Marvis also joined the fight and, wielding his sword, began to wound the armed men. After a while, the armed men were destroyed. The owner of the establishment wondered with surprise where this boy got so much strength. Leon von Marvis, addressing Walter, said that although he considered himself an unworthy slave, this was far from the truth. From now until the end of time, Walter would be indispensable to him. The Beastman did not understand what these words meant. How could he be of any use to Lord Marvis? Walter considered himself nothing more than a vagabond, wandering the vast expanses of the continent. Walter remembered how, since childhood, his peers had bullied and humiliated him, calling him the scum of the Beastmen. Even as a child, he did not understand why human children were so cruel to him and why they enjoyed watching him suffer. Back then, he was just a child who didn't understand how the world worked. But now Walter understood everything. He asked people why they couldn't just leave him alone. They had no reasonable grounds for making his life hell. There were only species differences. Walter didn't understand why they did it. For this reason alone, he became the object of their hatred. One fine day, he suddenly realized that he had been too naive to understand this before. Once, in a fit of rage, Walter exceeded the limits of self-defense. After that, he decided that he really was the heartless monster that everyone thought he was. Walter decided to run away from people. The owner of the establishment asked what the young man was doing there. Did he really think that his teenage rebellion would make Kerschel give up his title? The woman added that the Lord's useless offspring could not stop anyone. Leon von Marvis said that her words were even more true than she thought. However, he did not intend to remain a useless offspring of a lord who did not even try to object in the face of injustice. The young man noted that he would soon become the head of the family, worthy of the proud house of Marvis. Leon added that there was no place on his land for people like this woman. He called on the undead again. The woman was finished, and our hero turned to Walter again. Walter thought that this man might be a killer with blood on his hands. However, for some reason, he felt no fear towards him. Why was that? Leon asked Walter if he wanted to join him. He could use this guy's skills. Walter noticed that he was a descendant of demonic wolves. This was the most despised species even by Beastman standards. Walter assumed that he would be treated with contempt for the rest of his life. How much longer could he endure being treated like a wild animal? Leon assured him that it would never happen again. The protagonist noted that he did not know much about the situation of the demonic wolves and the intrigue surrounding him. However, if the young man's life was burdened by unfounded prejudices, he could let them know about them, and from that moment on, he would no longer have to endure them. Walter would become a full-fledged vassal of the House of Marvis. Walter teared up, bowed his head, and said that he would be happy to serve his lord. The large palace was located in the middle of the city. An envoy arrived there. His Majesty was Esteban von Arheim, Emperor of Arheim. Next to him was Louis von Arheim, the Crown Prince of the Empire. Louis inquired as to the purpose of vassal Yildiraz's request for an audience. Yildiraz replied that a letter had arrived from the noble house of Sylvester. Louis remarked that as Prince Regent, he was concerned with the affairs of the people and the duchies. Was he now to be burdened with the problems of the counts as well? His dear father would not be pleased. Yildiraz said that he was only eager to share the good news. Yildiraz understood that it was the Crown Prince who currently wielded power in the empire. He could not afford to fall out of his favor. Louis thought for a moment and smiled, because the question concerned the House of Marvis. Yildiraz noticed that it concerned the object of the Crown Prince's deepest contempt throughout all these years, one of the three families of darkness. He suggested taking advantage of this opportunity and supporting the House of Sylvester in order to get rid of their common enemy once and for all. However, it should not be forgotten that the Marvis clan possessed the power of necromancy. Open war against them could spiral out of control. Yildiraz said that the Lord was, as always, perceptive. However, there was no worthy successor to this power left in the Marvis family. The power of the House of Sylvester had grown to such an extent that they could easily compete with the Marvis. The Crown Prince said that this was excellent. The plan could be carried out, for now was the most opportune time to get rid of these grave robbers. Yildiraz promised to carry out this mission in the name of the great empire. Louis thanked his father for his generous decree. Finally, he would be rid of this thorn in his side, a relic of a bygone era. Louis said, "Long live the emperor, his legacy is in safe hands." The Crown Prince noted that very soon everything would pass to him, and he would dispose of it as he saw fit. Leon von Marvis gathered his loyal subjects to discuss pressing issues. Pullen noted that the common people still did not particularly trust the Beastman. He suggested carrying this artifact with him and hung the pendant around the young man's neck. Pullen added that his lordship and he highly valued Walter as a loyal vassal, but for now, public opinion could not be ignored. Pullen said that it was not worth creating unnecessary problems for his lordship. Thanks to the pendant, the ears on his head and the tail behind him disappeared. Leon von Marvis said that he would now like to talk to them. He had a reason to discuss several important matters. Leon added that first, he had to insist that everyone swear allegiance, not just with words. Were they ready to devote their endless loyalty exclusively to their master? Pullen shed another tear and swore to devote his entire life to his master. He would serve the house of Marvis faithfully until the end of his days. Crow told the new lord that he was impressed. The young man had thoroughly won over the old man. Submission and domination were the key principles of House Marvis. Walter said he shared his feelings and bowed his knee before his lord. Leon von Marvis said that these were their principles, not his. Crow asked who the young master was talking to now. Leon von Marvis suggested that, to make things official, they sign a contract sealed with mana. If he refused, he would consider it a lack of desire to join him. A contract sealed with mana, or a pact, transforms the mana of each party into a pattern that binds and intertwines the fates of both with an unbreakable bond. It allows secrets to be shared that can only be taken to the grave. Leon von Marvis suggested proceeding if there were no objections. Leon von Marvis waved his hand, and using his unique abilities, created the necessary conditions for the contract to be concluded. A contract saturated with concentrated mana appeared before the young people. The Black Lion said that as the patron of the Marvis house and the demon who lent this name to their clan, he would witness this magical pact. The lion declared that he would allow those who swore to serve his contractor to bind their souls with the power of Marvis. Lev said for all to see, the Lord of the Undead has returned. Leon von Marvis said that was enough drama. These were his loyal subjects, and they would treat him with respect. Lev acknowledged that the agreement had been made. The price for breaking it was one's soul. No betrayal would go unpunished or be forgiven. Pullen said that such blasphemy was not even in his thoughts. Was this really the demon Marvis with whom the founder had made a contract? That would explain how the young lord had acquired the power of necromancy. Walter felt an overwhelming concentration of mana. The question arose, who was this Mr. Leon really? And what about this fearsome black lion? Walter surmised that this cute little cat was actually very complicated. Pullen immediately covered Walter's mouth with his hand. The demon lord was surprised. What had he just heard about himself? Pullen tried to defuse the situation and said that Walter was amazed by the impressive image and formidable presence of Mr. Marvis. Young Walter had never seen such an impressive sight before. The demon lord said that no one should disclose information about his existence and other matters to people. Mistakes were unacceptable. They were at war, and knowledge could determine life or death. His appearance was visible only to those to whom he had revealed himself. Marvis suggested that the aristocrats of this world were very interested in Kerschel. Walter remembered how the mistress had received a letter and had to deliver it to Lord Kerschel. The demon lord said that this was their next target. Leon von Marvis asked where the letter could be found. Crow said he knew where the letter was. Crow grinned and added that he never forgot to collect military trophies. He had a heavy chest in his hands. The chest contained gold and diamonds, untold riches. Marvis reminded Crow that he had a petty soul. Considering that he had destroyed the entire building and killed its owner, Crow decided to take everything he could get his hands on. Leon von Marvis approached the chest and carefully examined its contents. Leon von Marvis took the letters out of the chest and said that this was exactly what they were looking for. The demon lord admitted that Crow could sometimes be useful. Crow asked if that was a compliment. Leon von Marvis decided to read the letter aloud. In it, Alan asked the enemies of the House of Marvis to listen to him. The noble House of Sylvester hereby declares that, following the will of His Majesty the Emperor, their duchy is at war. Despite the impressive power granted to them by the title of Duke, they neglect their duty to His Majesty, Emperor Louis von Archheim. This neglect of duty is a serious crime, and he calls them to account on behalf of the crown. Alan indicated that they had 1 month. If they raised the white flag and surrendered, the declaration of war would be revoked, and the House of Marvis would be proclaimed the House of Sylvester as punishment for their sins. If they choose to resist, they will have to prove their innocence in fair combat. The letter was signed by Lord Alan of the House of Sylvester. The demon lord asked, "A month? Isn't that too short?" Leon von Marvis said that he didn't care about the time, but he had an amusing idea. Now that he could control the undead with his mind, a whole world of fun had opened up before him. Leon said he had a special mission for Crow. The messenger reported that the declaration of war had been successfully delivered to the House of Marvis. The messenger added that he couldn't describe Kerschel's expression. He literally hung there looking pathetic, and they almost had to put him out of his misery on the spot. Alan laughed and suggested that Kerschel was now in a real state of hysterics. Alan added that they needed to keep Kerschel alive. Kerschel is a useful fool. Let the power of the Marvis clan remain in his inept hands for now. Alan inquired what had happened to the boy who was the rightful heir. The assistant replied that there was no significant news about him. It was quite possible that Kerschel had already dealt with him himself. The assistant asked, why bother about such a young boy? What can he do? Alan asked what was the most unfair thing that could happen to a person. The assistant replied that he was not a scientist and did not know such wisdom. Alan said that if you encounter an overwhelmingly powerful enemy against whom you have no chance, resistance is futile. You can only watch as the world mercilessly collapses. There is no suffering worse than this. Alan asked what could cause such injustice. The answer is simple, only innate talent. Talent so incredible that it makes one tremble at the mere sight of it. The assistant was surprised. Did my lord mean to say that an insignificant young man could possess such talent? Alan noted that he was referring to the stream of Velen von Marvis. There are no such people now. However, given the pedigree, nothing can be taken for granted. One must always consider the probability. Crow, recounting what had happened, said it was a magnificent sight. Human speech sounds strange coming from his true form, but now, having absorbed memories, he imitates it with incredible accuracy. Crow said he could offer more than just a little magic, unlike some fluffy creatures. Watching Crow and Marvis's latest showdown, Walter asked Pullen if it was always this noisy here. Pullen advised the young man to keep quiet. That way, he would have a better chance of living longer. Leon von Marvis handed Walter a sword taken from the wall and said that there was only a month left. It was time to get started. Leon asked the young man to demonstrate his talents during that time. Walter asked, if his talents were not put to use, did that mean he was not an assistant? Leon replied that this was indeed the case. Otherwise, what use was a prophet to a vassal who could easily perish? Walter said he was ready to overcome any obstacle in his path to earn his rightful place beside his lord. The young man asked, if he proves himself to be the most skilled soldier, could his lord grant him one wish? Leon promised he would. Pullen said that in that case, young Walter needed to find suitable combat training. The limits of his abilities would immediately become apparent if he trained with the worthy knights of House Marvis. The Demon Lord said that Walter was not the only one who needed training. Leon was also far from his true potential. Leon von Marvis said he readily believed this and added that in that case, there was no time to waste. Leon von Marvis and Walter tested their unique combat abilities on training balls. Leon von Marvis also showed that he could summon undead creatures. The undead appeared in armor and was armed from head to toe. Walter was not afraid and entered into confrontation with such a formidable opponent. The young man possessed unique skills, and the undead had no chance of withstanding his onslaught. At the end of the battle, Walter approached his master and knelt before him. Leon von Marvis welcomed Walter to the Marvis household. Now he is one of them. From now on, Walter is the foremost knight of his army. A month later, the day of the declared war between the noble houses arrived. Alan de Silvestri said he had a message for the current head of the Marvis clan. Alan noted that, despite his gracious offer of a peaceful resolution, his rivals stubbornly refused to listen to reason and did not want to lay down their arms. This foolish decision would result not only in their own destruction, but also in the destruction of their innocent subjects. The Demon Lord told the young men not to be provoked. He personally could clearly see the fear that had settled deep within the enemy soldiers. Their threatening cries were merely a reflection of their doubts. Alan declared that the House of Sylvester has the advantage on all fronts. The Demon Lord said that this was not the case. We must not forget that the enemy's plans have been exposed. Pullen acknowledged that if Kershaw were still alive, the House of Marvis would have simply raised the white flag at the first demand. It turns out that his death alone shook the composure of his rivals. Fluffy added that humans are fragile creatures. Any fluctuations in events often cause endless confusion. Why hasn't the enemy surrendered yet? Do they have some kind of trump card that makes them so confident? At some point, these doubts will begin to overwhelm them. Even a steady hand can tremble in battle. Pullen was forced to admit that this was true, but even trembling hands can prevail through sheer numbers. Marvis said that his distinguished contractor would overcome the full force of this army. Fluffy said there was no need to worry. Lord Leon was much stronger than he appeared. Marvis thought that even he was amazed by the young man's absolute talent. Leon von Marvis activated his unique abilities and filled the space with his mana. The undead were summoned. The undead immediately rushed at the approaching opponent. A serious confrontation ensued. The air was filled with the hum of clashing swords. The undead were invincible and celebrated their victory over their numerically superior opponent. Fluffy thought, even though this was the weakest undead that a necromancer could summon, it had been barely a week since he had learned to control his magical power. However, the young man was already able to read the flow of mana with his eyes closed. The depth of his talent was astonishing. Crow said that the current contractor was truly a rare talent. Like the rising star of the well-known founder, he was capable of proving himself once again in blood. When the time came, he would get everything he wanted. Crow asked, even the delicious peanuts he loves so much? Fluffy replied that not only peanuts, but even almonds and pistachios. He is capable of mastering the most forbidden dark magic, the terrifying power of turning back time. Leon von Marvis said that it was over. They had won. The young man asked what training they would do now. Crow said that he was also ready to proceed with further trials. The Demon Lord said that now they could discuss the young man's other skills. Fluffy asked if he knew much about dark magic. Leon replied that he had studied a little as part of the basic program. The Demon Lord asked if the young man was referring to the poor skills his uncle had shown off. He should forget about that parody. Leon von Marvis said that much depends on the person. Considering the speed with which the founder of Velen conquered the Eastern continent, it would be foolish to assume that only the undead helped him in this. In essence, necromancy is just one branch of dark magic. This means that it is the supply of dark mana and skill that determine the power of the undead army. Pullen thanked the founder and his followers for this. Marvis was surprised. Did that mean he didn't count? The Demon Lord added that he was not his follower. They were friends. They always fought their enemies side by side. Marvis added that Crow, unlike him, was only hiding behind the guise of a contractor. Crow replied that he had no intention of hiding from a ridiculous kitten. Leon von Marvis told the two to stop sniping at each other. It would be better if they showed him the spells they wanted to teach him. Marvis said that before that, they would have to fulfill one condition. To do this, they would have to risk descending into their own subconscious. If the young man did not know, the hidden depths of the mind were a kind of vessel. This vessel contained enormous reserves of magical power. Once Leon learned to control this unbridled energy, noble warfare would seem like child's play compared to what he would be capable of. However, dark magic requires a great deal of mana. Fluffy added that the young man had no reason to worry. The demon lord added that he sensed a reserve of mana in the young man equal to that of his ancestor. Although it was unclear whether this was a good thing, Marvis thought that the young man had no choice but to take the risk if he wanted to restore his family's former glory. The demon lord noted that this process was not without risk. There was only one way to learn how to draw mana from the hidden reserve in a short period of time, but even he could not guarantee safety. Marvis thought he saw a glimmer of light in Leon's lifeless eyes again. Looking back, it becomes clear that young Leon was driven by only one desire at that time. Marvis said that first he needed to deplete his mana reserves to the limit. The young man was driven by uncontrollable curiosity. Then it would be up to his subconscious and potential to guide him. A primitive thirst for power is the greatest motivation. Leon von Marvis depleted his entire mana reserve and nearly fell to the ground. Pullen managed to hold his master back. Pullen said that his lord should not risk himself like that. Marvis shouted that no one should dare touch the boy. They had to show at least a little faith in their leader. Pullen said that although Leon was their leader, he was still just a boy. Crow noted that their contractor might turn out to be the most gifted of his predecessors. Marvis remarked that given the young man's abilities, which rivaled those of Velen in terms of potential, he would be fine. Walter shouted that he had done it, and now everyone could see the new master of the sword. Walter saw Leon unconscious and shouted that the master must not leave them. Pullen told Walter to calm down. Walter said that no matter what happened, he believed that the Lord would overcome everything. The demon lord thought that people were all alike. How was it that such incredible talent had been hidden all these years? No wonder the Marvis family had nearly died out. Leon von Marvis opened his eyes and found himself in complete darkness. The next moment, the young man saw the ruins of an old city and a man standing in the middle of the square. The man greeted Leon and said that he had a feeling they would meet. It was his father. Marvis Sr. suggested they take a walk. They had things to talk about. Leon silently followed his father through the city ruins. His father said that if Leon had come here, it meant he had decided to awaken the magical power that lay dormant within him. The young man replied that it was certainly not to tell his father how well he was doing. However, he had a circle of loyal subjects for whom he was responsible, and it was desirable for him to succeed. His father replied that his son was lucky, but as he already understood, he was looking at a figment of his imagination. He had met his end at the hands of Alan, so this form was just a magical echo. His father said that this was due to an innate lack of potential. Fate is cruel. The father added that in this case it did not matter. He could still be useful. Leon already knew that he had failed to enlist Marva's support, just as he had failed to cope with the Necronomicon, the sacred relic of their clan. His father said that Leon must take a different path. While he was alive, he developed spells capable of transforming all the particles of his ancestors' mana into his son's magical reserve. At first, Leon would only be able to control part of this reserve, but this reserve would undoubtedly help his son strengthen his position as head of the family. The young man said he remembered his father telling him that it was very dangerous to accept someone else's mana as his own. His father confirmed that there was a risk of it getting out of control and destroying the caster's mind. His father noticed that Leon was listening to him attentively. Magical energy is marked by its owner, so it cannot be easily transferred to another sorcerer. However, the young man was an exception. He couldn't understand much yet, but he just had to imagine that he was a blank sheet of paper. His father said that Lord Velen von Marvis, the founder of this family, was the only one who possessed mana of perfect purity. His father stretched out his hands and a clump of concentrated mana of the highest quality formed in the air in front of him. The man said that his son was blessed with this great gift of their lineage. Father said that his son was who he was and could not be any other way. The man looked up and said that their meeting was coming to an end. The father promised that they would definitely meet again in the future. He still had a lot to teach his son. The father handed the young man a glowing, concentrated ball of mana. Leon von Marvis thought that he had never felt such impressive magical power before. A glow appeared in the young man's chest, and he felt an incredible surge of strength and mana. A pendant appeared on Leon's chest. His father said that the name of this amulet was Greed. As the name suggests, it was capable of instantly consuming everything in the young man's path. His father told his son not to forget this. Leon promised to remember and never forget. His father said that they would meet again when his son's heart desired it most. Leon bowed and said he would pray for that day to come soon. The next moment, Leon disappeared from that location. The man thought that if fate so decreed, his son would shine like a rising star never seen before. It was a pity that he would not see it. No one knows where this power will lead the young man, to the rays of glory or into the abyss of doom. Leon von Marvis lay in bed, his assistants leaning over him. eagerly awaiting his awakening. Pullen asked those present if they were sure that their master would wake up. He did not question Marvis's insight, but the young lord was barely 14 years old. He had never even kissed anyone before. What if there were consequences? How would he look the former head of the family in the eye in the afterlife? The demon lord said that if the young lord could not cope with such a simple test, the moment of their reunion would come sooner than Pullen could imagine. Pullen must cast aside his pathetic doubts and wait hopefully for his return. Walter said that his master would surely succeed. He just needed to be patient. There was no need to worry. Crow remarked that the old servant was making too much of the situation. The next moment, everyone saw that Leon von Marvis began to radiate a cloud of mana. It was now clear to Fluffy why the master had been so long delayed. Walter asked Lord Marvis what kind of magical power these thick and dense clouds of mana were. Fluffy said that Leon was already on his way to them. They had to greet him properly. The demon lord warned that they must remain vigilant. He would return as a completely different person from the young boy everyone remembered. Leon von Marvis woke up, opened his eyes, and said that now everything was clear. He wondered why there was so much pressure on his chest. Could Marvis move aside? Walter continued to practice sword-fighting techniques, moving around the training equipment. Leon von Marvis brought a piece of mana, including to Walter. The House of Sylvester. 4 days before the war between the noble houses, Alan de Sylvester said that the time had come. The head told the great warriors to heed his words. Very soon, the centuries-old history of the once proud city of Marvas would be lost. Alan said that they would write a new history. All they had to do was follow him. The warriors glorified the noble Sylvester. The armed detachment, led by Alan de Sylvester, moved across the rough terrain. The road lay through an old abandoned cemetery. Alan told Kerschel that his companion had found a weakness in the formation of a handful of enemy soldiers. His insight was commendable. Kerschel replied that it was the least he could offer in exchange for Monsieur Sylvestre's generosity. Alan said that something still surprised him. He thought that these sentimental Marvises would be more zealous in guarding the graves of their ancestors. It would be even more foolish of them to place their forces in such an open space. Kerschel remarked that this was a house of necromancers, not strategists. He was inclined to believe that they were being cautious so as not to destroy the burial sites of their ancestors. Alan noted that their greatness had long been trampled into the mud, yet they were still desperately trying to maintain their former reputation. Alan asked in surprise why Kerschel had hesitated. Did he have something to say? Kerschel replied that he had nothing to say and suggested continuing on their way. Alan noticed an approaching army of rivals ahead. At the head of the army were Leon von Marvis and Walter. Leon von Marvis said that everything was going according to plan. He was glad that Alan was keeping his word. Alan said that he had come to witness the weakness and fall of the house, but instead he was greeted by 100 soldiers armed to the teeth. Alan assumed that this was a performance in his honor, and drawing his sword, attacked Kerschel. Kerschel's head flew off his shoulders and said that only his master had the right to point a sword at him. The next moment, the head was back in place. Kerschel noted that it was an original experience. Alan did not understand what was happening. After all, he had definitely cut his throat. Alan said it didn't matter. The head of the Marvis clan would pay dearly for his insolence. Did he really think he could defeat the Sylvesters with his pathetic mountain army? This was an insult to the greatness of his clan. Leon von Marvis said that the situation was completely different. Before he could be insulted, he would have to pose a threat. Otherwise, why agree to this fight? Leon von Marvis waved his hand and said he intended to put Sylvester's house back in its place. The young man summoned the undead. At that very moment, an army of armed undead emerged from the ground. Alan immediately realized that this was necromancy. Leon von Marvis said that Lord Sylvester could see the essence of what was happening. His words sounded as if he was surprised to encounter necromancy and was fighting against a necromancer. Alan remembered his words when he asked, "What is the most unjust thing that can happen to a person? It is to encounter an overwhelmingly powerful enemy against whom there is not a single chance. Resistance is futile. He can only watch as his world mercilessly crumbles. There is no suffering worse than this. What could be the cause of such injustice? The answer is simple: only innate talent. Talent so incredible that it makes one tremble at the mere sight of it. One must always consider probability. In the battle against the undead, the Sylvester clan's army was clearly losing. However, one of the human warriors behaved heroically and did not give up. Alan thought that in any case, he was just a boy. No matter how much talent he had, he was not ready for a brutal battle. The warrior saw Leon von Marvis in the crowd and rushed towards him. The young men's swords clashed, metal screeched, and the rivals' eyes met. However, it was not Leon von Marvis who stood before the warrior. He shouted in anger. Who dared to stand in his way? Walter defended Leon. It was he who stood before the enemy. He said that he would not let anyone near the young gentleman. That was his duty, and he would not back down from it. The undead continued to press their opponents, and the men were forced to retreat. Alan called on a squad of mages for help. He ordered them to join the battle. Alan swung his sword and ordered the Knights of the Vanguard to attack simultaneously. The attack resumed with renewed vigor, and now the undead began to retreat. Alan said that by nature he was a ruthless man. He never thought of anyone as a kindred spirit. Alan added that no one could match him in courage. The head of the house, Sylvester, asked if the young head of the Marvis family was ready to seek revenge. In any case, He would die here, filled with nothing but regret. Leon von Marvis said that his opponent was wrong about two things. He would explain everything now. The young man activated his book, the Necronomicon. Leon von Marvis said that he was not tempted by revenge. His opponent simply did not have the strength to take his life. That was all he wanted to say. A few days ago, the military camp was located on the edge of the forest in the mountain valley. Leon von Marvis and his assistants were holding a council. The demon lord said that in his centuries of existence, he had seen worse tricks, but this was too risky. Choosing this area as the location for the operation was a good idea, but everything else was not so good. Leon von Marvis assured everyone that there could be no better plan. The young man added that it would be foolish to make an irreparable mistake in the pursuit of caution when the optimal solution was right in front of them. Crow said he believed in the gentleman's plan. Crow asked what right a ball of wool had to give advice. Walter said that he also supported the master's plan, although, of course, he respected the wisdom of the Lord of Demons. Marvis suggested that no one cared about his opinion. In that case, he would not argue. Pullen promised to mobilize all the forces he could. He couldn't leave the master alone on the battlefield. Leon von Marvis said he wanted to ask the demon lord one question. Did he know anything about the negative consequences of using this amulet? It was an amulet given to him by his father. Marvis replied that he did not know. Perhaps it would lead to death. Crow remarked that it was a very pessimistic lump of wool. Marvis said that his father had not told the young man the whole truth, but that the amulet contained a power akin to poison. It would be difficult for the young man to withstand it in his current state. Leon von Marvis asked if the Lord of Demons wanted him to receive this amulet for some specific purpose. Marvis did not deny this and added that it would be in the future. For now, the young man was strong enough for his purposes. The gift he had received was too remarkable for an ordinary vessel. Marvis noted that the young man's followers were loyal to him, but they were not without flaws. The young man must understand what was on their minds. At any moment, they could turn against him, as happened to his father Rune. But what makes Leon believe that these people are worth risking everything for? Leon von Marvis opened the book and read the spell again. Alan asked, does his opponent really think he is incapable of taking his life? Leon von Marvis again released concentrated mana into the environment. Alan thought it was mana the color of the blackest night with an aura of pure darkness. He uses it with incredible precision and caution. Where did the young man get such control skills? Leon von Marvis told the loyal servants of the Marvis clan, wandering in the other world, to listen to him carefully. Alan's instincts screamed for self-preservation. Alan believed that in order to prevent the young man from putting on a show, he must be stopped at all costs. He could not be allowed to complete the spell. The true heir to the Marvis clan called his servants to arms. He demanded that they answer his call and fulfill their duty under his banner. Undead creatures began to emerge from the ground. There were so many undead that it was clear Sylvester's squad would not be able to cope. The demon lord, watching from the sidelines, noted the magnificent qualities of the commander, Leon von Marvis. Fluffy said that this guy was as violent and disobedient as his predecessor, Velen. The undead behaved aggressively and assertively. The humans suffered irreparable damage. Alan said it was a trap. The boy deliberately lured them to the cemetery. He has an entire army of undead creatures living in this cemetery at his service. Alan shouted for the young man to stop immediately. He was risking his life. Alan swore that he was willing to spare his subjects. Leon von Marvis remembered the demon lord's question. What makes the young man believe that these people are worth risking everything for? Marvis said that he would prefer the young man to refrain from taking unnecessary risks for the sake of some people until his talents were fully developed. He only had to gain the power that would allow him to feel compassion for others, let alone save their lives. Leon von Marvis asked the Lord of Demons, why wait for the fruit to ripen before picking it? You can pick it first and then let it ripen. Alan was forced to kneel before the head of the Marvis family. Alan asked, is revenge really the young man's goal? In that case, Sylvester asked for mercy, even though he knew he did not deserve it. Alan swore that he would never again stand in the way of House Marvis, and he would not say a word about this power to the Emperor. Leon von Marvis asked when they had become so close that Alan would ask for such a favor. Alan said that revenge only breeds a vicious cycle of hatred. Sylvester said that he had been forced to do so. He hoped for understanding, because it was their duty to do everything necessary for the prosperity of the family. Leon von Marvis suggested that there might be some truth in these words. The burden of responsibility as head of the family was very heavy. Alan felt hope and said that under this monstrous burden, he did not dare to resist and was forced to commit these atrocities. Leon von Marvis said that nevertheless, he saw no reason to spare his rival. Leon grabbed his sword and said that it was not out of personal resentment. He would take Alan's life solely out of cold calculation. There was no benefit to the Marvis family in his continued existence. Alan called the young man an arrogant scoundrel and said that he would regret it, but it would be too late. The power that the young man used so carelessly was not child's play. After these words, the head of the house, Sylvester, flew to the side. Leon von Marvis replied that he already knew that. The young man swayed again, his legs buckled, and black mana appeared around him. Walter rushed to his master, wanting to help. The demon lord told the young man not to move. It was just normal mana depletion. The talent of young Leon was certainly not inferior to that of his ancestor. Only one question remains. Will the boy be able to handle such enormous potential? A monster was growing inside him, one that no one could tame. It was a risky deal in exchange of every part of his being. Marvis saw a pattern on the chest of the destroyed knight and said it was a bad sign. Leon von Marvis was put back to bed. His subordinates waited for him to recover again. Pullen lamented again that he had let his master down. He should be thrown into a dungeon to atone for his guilt. Marvis said that no one would dissuade the old man. It would be a wonderful sight. Crow said that this stupid lump of wool was completely devoid of empathy. Marvis remarked that he was a demon, so he did not know that word. Leon von Marvis came to his senses and said that there was no need for a dungeon. Pullen could calm down. He had done an excellent job with the task at hand. Walter said that after losing their leader, the Sylvester clan would be on the verge of collapse. There was no need to worry about a new invasion in the near future. Pullen said that under Leon's sensitive leadership, the House of Marvis would get back on its feet. Pullen said that a new problem was looming, but he was ashamed to talk about it. The House of Marvis is almost completely ruined. They have an impressive debt. The Demon Lord was surprised. What's the problem with that? Isn't it solved by requiring the House of Sylvester to pay reparations? Pullen replied that this was usually the case. However, the ruling family had issued a royal decree prohibiting any demands for reparations against them. Pullen explained that the noble houses of Reinhauer, Sater, and Marvis were associated with dark forces, so the imperial family was trying to keep them in check. It was quite possible that the imperial family would simply refuse any request for compensation in order to prevent them from rising up. Leon von Marvis asked Pullen, "What is the amount of the debt at this point?" Pullen said it was 500,000 gold coins. Leon von Marvis thought that such an amount was almost impossible to pay. Pullen confirmed that unfortunately my lord was right. 500,000 gold pieces was practically impossible to pay, and this was a very big problem for the House of Marvis. A young man rode up to the city gates and said that he had finally reached the lands of Marvis. It was Richard Fdamel, senior apprentice of the prestigious Magical Tower of Magicians, founder of the Hermit School. A young woman approached the young man and said she was glad to see Mr. Richard. It was Carlin, the head of the southern branch of the criminal organization The Sleepers, a ruthless moneylender. Richard expressed his confidence that his school's debt to the Sleepers had been repaid. Carlin told the young man not to worry. He was not her debtor. Richard apologized. He had not yet fully recovered from the consequences of dealing with debt collectors. However, at that time, the very existence of the Magic Tower was at stake. Carlin noted that this is why they strongly recommend that customers read everything written in small print. The girl suggested that they wanted to meet the same person. Pullen reminded them once again that the total debt amounted to 500,000 gold coins. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. Everyone turned around. Who could it be? Pullen reported to the Lord that guests had arrived, a woman and a man. The young man thanked them for their hospitality and introduced himself. He was Richard, head of the Hermit School. The girl said she was the head of the southern branch of the Sleepers, and her name was Carlin. Leon von Marvis welcomed the guests to the Marvis house. Walter said that each of them posed a threat. Was Leon von Marvis sure this was a good idea? Crow noted that their master was much stronger than he appeared. There was nothing to fear. Leon was in control. Carlin said that rumors of Lord Leon's victory in the territorial battle had recently reached them. She dared to congratulate Lord Marvis on his victory. The girl expressed hope that they had enough military trophies to pay off their debts to the Sleepers. Leon von Marvis said that since the subject had come up, how much did they owe the sleeping ones? However, it should be noted that at the time of the loan, their family was in an outrageously low position with their creditors. Pullen noted that most of the debt would have to be paid by Lady Carlin. Leon von Marvis received information that Carlin, the head of the southern branch of the Sleeping Ones organization, is probably one of the largest criminal groups on the continent. These were the worst loan sharks they could have fallen into the hands of. If a borrower failed to meet their payment obligations, they would be sold to black magicians for experiments. Carlin realized that the young man was familiar with the intricacies of their work. She was flattered and suggested getting straight to the point. Leon von Marvis said he had to ask for the current payment amount. The girl stated that they insisted on immediate payment of at least 10%. After that, the remaining 90% could be paid as they saw fit. However, they had to remember about the 30% annual interest on the principal amount. In this regard, Carlin recommended paying as soon as possible. Leon von Marvis still did not understand where he would get 400,000 gold coins at once. Moreover, even this amount would not be enough. Interest for each year would add another 120,000. Who could have signed such an absurd contract? Pullen said it was the previous head of the Marvis family, Leon's father. Leon von Marvis thought that his father was not good with finances, among other things. Richard told Miss Carlin that she shouldn't have pressed so hard. Lord Marvis should be allowed to enjoy his victory at least a little. Richard seriously doubted that he had such an exorbitant amount of money at his disposal. Carlin was surprised that Richard was interfering in business negotiations. She hated it when people interrupted her during conversations with clients. Who knows what price careless words will cost, and whether it will lead to disaster. Richard said he understood and headed for the exit. He would return when Miss Carlin was finished. Carlin told the head of the Marvis household that if he was going to claim that there weren't enough funds or ask for a delay to raise money, he should think twice. The girl added that she had heard this too many times from his father. Leon von Marvis thought maybe he should quietly deal with this woman. The demon lord told the young man not to even think about doing that. This was not the kind of enemy who left any chances. Of course, Leon could try if he wanted to be torn to pieces in a second. Crow said that at this rate, they would be left with nothing. He was disappointed in the contractor. Pullen said that the former lord had acted with the best of intentions. Walter said that they would definitely find a way out. He was completely confident in the young master's wit. Leon von Marvis said he begged Miss Carlin to have mercy on them. Carlin and everyone present certainly did not expect to hear such words. Richard looked at the portrait of the founder of the family and thought that the journey had been worth meeting Leon von Marvis. Mana began to concentrate around our hero, and excess energy stood out. Richard sensed enormous reserves of mana circulating deep within the young man. If he could persuade him to join the Hermit's magic school, it would be a huge coup for the academy. Surely there was a way to win his favor. Richard activated his unique abilities and created an energy sphere in front of him. The image of the elder appeared in the sphere and asked the head not to disappear so suddenly. The elder added that the academy was in turmoil because of his absence. Richard said he would explain himself some other time. The head of the Hermit said that something else was important now. The elder was ready to listen to him carefully. Richard asked, "How many gold coins do they have in their coffers?" Carlin said she was very surprised. What pity could there be? Didn't Leon think that the sleepers were just a gang of thugs? The girl activated the glowing ball and directed it into the cup of tea standing in front of the young man. Carlin assured the young man that they were more calculating than one might assume. Under the influence of an external force, the cup broke and the tea spilled onto the table. Walter grabbed his sword and asked how she dared threaten his master. Carlin said that only those who failed to fulfill their credit obligations would know their wrath. Leon von Marvis announced that they had no gold. Objectively speaking, they had nothing. Miss Carlin said that now she understood why the young man was trembling like a frightened puppy. She added that she was ready to personally demonstrate what happens to defaulters. Richard entered the room again and told Carlin to stop. The girl was beside herself with rage. A glowing flame appeared around her. Richard told Carlin not to bury the future young talents of the Hermit. Walter noticed that the young gentleman did have a plan after all. Leon von Marvis told his assistants to leave. He needed to settle something with the guests in private. The negotiations continued in a different format. Only Leon von Marvis, Richard, and Carlin were present at the table. The demon lord was invisible to the guests, so he also expressed his desire to be present. The young man asked Richard, if he officially joins the Hermits, are you willing to pay 10% of his debt? Richard said he was willing to do so. In the recent territorial war with the Sylvestras, Leon had definitely used necromancy. Leon von Marvis asked, why did you decide that? The guest replied that otherwise the Marvas would have lost. Carlin surely thought so too, which is why she came here. The girl said that Richard was right. She also believed that their client, the head of the Marvas clan, had regained his former power, which is why she went hunting. Leon von Marvis asked, did they really think that the Marvis family would be able to pay off the debt? Carlin replied that she had had such thoughts, but she did not really believe that the young man would be able to pay off the debt immediately. Therefore, it would be better to postpone this conversation for now. Leon said Mr. Richard wants to hire him, and Miss Carlin wants to settle the accounts. The young man added that he still did not understand the reasons for their confidence. The power of the great necromancer might not return. The young man noted that other aristocrats or mercenaries could help him. Carlin said that in both cases, it would cost a lot of money. Richard remarked that this war could not be won with money. He would not believe it. Richard added that this was precisely why he first thought of necromancy. Marvis's unique power. This was precisely the opportunity for the return of necromancy. Carlin added that even if the young man possessed only a small fraction of the original powers of Velen von Marvis, getting close to the continent's as yet unrecognized genius was a good investment. However, the debt would not go away. The girl took out a gun, pointed it at Leon, and said that loan sharks were no joke. Richard asked if Carlin would mind if they talked in private. This talent is absolutely indispensable to the Hermit. Carlin said she didn't mind, but collecting debts was her priority. The girl left the room. Leon said he didn't really trust Richard. Leon von Marvis noted that Richard was not an ordinary person. Richard said that the same could be said about the young man. Richard added that Leon von Marvis had contacted one of the 72 demons. Fluffy turned into a huge lion and asked, who is this mage who can see me without any contracts? Richard did not answer, but his body began to transform. Horns grew on his head, and a tail appeared behind him. The demon lord realized that they were facing a dragon. However, he believed that all dragons had perished in the anti-magic war. Richard said that he was also curious as to why one of the 72 demons had suddenly approached humans. Richard said that he did not know the reasons, but it was definitely related to the first chapter. Leon von Marvis said there was no need to worry. Lord Marvis was on the side of humanity. He was different from the other demons. Marvis confirmed this. Although he is a demon, he does not share their views. Richard said that in that case, the lion had no reason to interfere in human affairs. Leon von Marvis asked what was required of him, apart from joining the Hermit. He needed to know what he was signing up for. Richard said that their school was intended for hermits. Leon von Marvis would receive compensation for his membership. In turn, he must strive to develop as a mage. Leon von Marvis asked, is that all? Lev said he didn't believe it. Why keep quiet? It's better to tell it like it is, he added. Richard said that these two are very sensitive, but he would have told everything even without their pressure. Richard stated that it is not possible to enroll in any other schools for any amount of money. These are all conditions. One reason is to suppress competitors. But there is another reason. Besides the hermits, there are two other prestigious magic schools. One of them is completely devoted to demons. Lev thought that they were up to something sinister after all. What are they trying to achieve, he wondered. Do they really want to revive the Demon King Bull, he asked himself. The Great War against the demons. Humanity's first full-scale battle with the demons. The demons are advancing, everything around is on fire. It was a tragic event in which King Esteban found eternal peace. Later, Richard arrived at the battlefield and obtained the necessary information using a magic book. Richard and his hermit gained access and studied everything thoroughly at the site of the battle. Richard said that during this fierce battle, the king managed to seal Baal. However, over time, the seal weakened. It weakened to such an extent that the demon could awaken at any moment. The young man added that he had heard that His Majesty had lost his mind. He was once great, but now they call him the Archduke, he asked, referring to Richard. Richard replied that it was true. Demons always find loopholes. However, Leon von Marvis himself must understand this, considering who he associates with. The young man thought that many representatives of other races, including dragons, had died in that war. Now it all makes sense. Richard is not lying, he concluded. Leon asked if the reason Richard did not want him to join other schools was because demons lurked in one of them. Richard confirmed this. Therefore, Leon von Marvis must join the hermits. With them, the young man would discover many new things. Marvis said that this would require a lot of money. Richard added that the hermit would not solve their financial problems forever. Leon von Marvis asked if there was a way to earn money regularly, because the debt to the sleeping ones was quite a burden. Richard said he knew one way, the Adventurers Guild. Carlin is a close associate of the guild's leader. If Leon successfully completes orders and earns a gold badge, he will be able to earn 1,000 gold coins per order. Leon von Marvis asked Richard to put in a good word for him with Miss Carlin. The demon lord said that the young man looked pathetic. Crow told Fluffy not to dare insult his master. He did it in the heat of the moment. Richard looked toward the door and said that Carlin was definitely eavesdropping on their conversation. He was sure of it. The girl opened the door and noted that Richard was very perceptive. Richard pointed to Marvis and said that he was a demon on the young lord's side. Carlin could meet him. Carlin replied that they would only bring trouble. The young people set off on their planned route, which ran through rough terrain. Carlin asked, "Do I really have to accompany them to the guild too?" Richard replied that it was the least she could do for the hundreds of thousands she would soon receive. Leon von Marvis asked what kind of place the Adventurers Guild was. The demon lord said he was also curious. There had been nothing like this in the past, so it was something new. Richard explained that it was a place where people went to request various services. You can take group orders and divide the profits among the group members. You could also work for yourself. That was the Adventurers Guild. However, if you are weak, you can die without a trace on your very first assignment. Conversely, if you do well, you can get rich. Marvis remarked that it was like a lamp for moths where they burn themselves. Richard objected that it wasn't all that bad. The Adventurers Guild is neither a good nor a bad place. With their recommendation, you can easily become a knight or a mage, even in another country. It's the most lucrative job for those who have skills. Leon von Marvis said he wanted to know more about the gold badge and ranks. Carlin asked, "Does Richard really think he can boss her around?" The girl explained that there are 5 ranks in the guild: copper, silver, gold, platinum, and titan. The distribution goes from weak to strong. By receiving a rank, an adventurer gains access to missions with corresponding pay. Leon von Marvis suggested that the best way to earn money was for those with a titanium badge. Richard said that this was certainly true, but unlikely. He didn't even mention it. There are barely a dozen titanium badge holders on the entire continent. The tasks they are assigned are valued at tens of thousands of gold. There aren't that many wealthy clients in the world. Carlin said that it would be good to get at least a copper badge to start with. The young people approached the city gates. The girl added that the laws of the empire made it somewhat difficult for newcomers to advance. Richard suggested starting with a small test and noted that they had already arrived at their destination. Leon von Marvis went inside and was surprised. Is this really the Adventurers Guild? The girl sitting at one of the tables decided that the guild had been visited by problematic clients. The young people, paying no attention to anyone, proceeded deeper into the hall. The adventurers fell silent and turned their attention to Miss Carlin. The girl was, as always, unperturbed. The adventurers recognized her and noticed that she was staring at them with greedy eyes. They didn't want to lend money to someone like that. What is this woman doing in the guild building? Could it be that she is with Mr. Richard, the head of the hermit school, they wondered? The adventurers couldn't understand how the young man had become the head of a magic school. One of them declared that the world was definitely unfair. Richard looked around. Everything here was new to him. "It seems like everyone here hates me," he said. Carlin said that Richard should not concern himself with people like these. Leon von Marvis asked where the man they were looking for was. He added that he didn't sense the presence of any incredibly powerful people in this place. The demon lord replied that this was not the case. Could it be that the contractor doesn't feel the mana aimed at us at all? Leon thought. At that moment, the young people were indeed in the center of concentrated mana directed at them. Leon said he could sense something. At that very moment, a girl with a blade in her hand jumped at him. The girl stretched out her arm and put the blade to our hero's neck. Carlin didn't lose her composure and pointed her gun at the attacker's head. Carlin noted that Raleigh had become more aggressive since their last meeting. The girl looked back and reminded him that she had asked him not to call her by her name so thoughtlessly. Leon von Marvis asked Raleigh, "So you're the strongest here?" Raleigh asked the young man who he was. The demon lord thought that they were facing a real monster, perhaps much stronger than anyone else present. The young man introduced himself. "My name is Leon von Marvas, head of the House of Marvas." The young people went into a room isolated from prying eyes and continued their conversation. Raleigh said that she had heard rumors about a change in the head of the Marvas family. The girl added that she did not expect to see the head of the family at such a young age. Carlin noted that his magical potential was incredible, and she could vouch for that. The owner of the establishment asked what the aristocrat had forgotten in her modest abode. "The adventure seekers." Carlin replied that circumstances had forced them to do so. Raleigh said that it was very strange for her to see this young man traveling with a demon. Carlin's friends were becoming more and more frightening. Marvas demanded that the girl apologize to the contractor immediately. Leon von Marvas explained that he had his reasons. He had to pay off his debts and was looking for work. Carlin said that they were interested in the Adventurers Guild, where one could work anonymously. Wasn't that her most appealing trait? Richard added that he saw no reason to refuse him. The young man should be given a chance. Raleigh noted that the two were very convincing, but that missions could be deadly. Leon von Marvas stated that death was a constant companion of the House of Marvas. Moreover, Richard had already informed him of this. He added that death had more dire consequences than not paying one's bills, and that Carlin was nowhere to be found anyway. Raleigh agreed and added that she would give the young man a chance. She poured the contents of the cup onto the table, and the liquid took on an intricate shape. Leon von Marvas saw mysterious stripes in front of him in space. Marvas said it was something like teleportation magic. It was a rather complex compound formula, but it was recreated with incredible ease. The demon lord suggested that she was an extremely gifted sorceress. Huge knights appeared behind Raleigh. The girl said that the entrance tests were quite simple. Among the statues presented, only one contained mana, and it was real. It had to be found. Raleigh added that the task had to be completed in half an hour. If the young man failed, he would have to return home. Leon von Marvas said that he would certainly try. There was no harm in trying. Raleigh said she was starting the countdown. Carlin had to prepare the hourglass. Carlin noted that she would only help this once. The clock began its countdown. Raleigh added that these statues were quite nimble. Leon von Marvas prepared for battle. The statue was surrounded. Leon von Marvas dodged an unexpected attack from one of the statues. Richard suggested that Raleigh had set too difficult a test. Even experienced wizards would have difficulty passing this test. This young man's talent is outstanding, but he is still too young. Carlin suggested that Leon was a young man who knew all too well what happened to the weak and innocent. The girl noted that his chances were slim, but suggested simply watching for now. The demon lord thought that the statues themselves were not very strong, but finding a real golem was almost impossible. The mana embedded in the golem was too insignificant. Crow said that the task was not easy, but even Leo understood that the contractor would fight. The contractor did indeed fight and dodge the attacks of the huge statues. Raleigh was curious to see what the young man would do to prove that she would accept him into the guild at such a young age. Even the great talents of these lands are capable of breaking down. Leon von Marvas decided to call on his skills for help. The young man activated mana extraction, considering this option to be the most effective. The observers watched the developments with interest. Leon von Marvas said that the demon lord had taught him that he would not always have abundant magic spells at his disposal. One must be able to cope with what one has. The young man summoned the spears of darkness to his aid. Those present could not believe it. Are these really the spears of darkness? Carlin said that the young man's mana reserves and control were impressive, but the purpose of the test was to find the statue in which the mana was embedded. It seemed that the young man had failed after all. Richard said that Leon had only one way left to pass the test. If he figured out how to use this method, he would be bound to find the hermit. Leon von Marvas summoned the wandering spirit of the afterlife and told the spirit to hear the call of a direct descendant of the Marvas family. Leon ordered the spirit to open its eyes and rise. The ground beneath their feet shook. Richard noted that Leon had a plan from the very beginning. Mana is identical to life force, which means that a creature filled with it is considered alive. Consequently, after its destruction, it can be raised with necromancy spells. Few would have thought of such a solution. Richard suggested that this guy would go far, contrary to mistaken expectations. Carlin acknowledged that the young man was an outstanding sorcerer. At first, she thought that the most impressive thing about him was his mana, but he also found an incredible use for it in a short time. Raleigh asked the young man how he did it. Leon von Marvas replied that he had simply destroyed everyone else and raised the only living creature. Nothing more. Raleigh asked why the young man decided it was alive. Leon von Marvas explained that according to his knowledge of golems, they are considered alive. Leon von Marvas pointed to the survivor and said that this golem was real, it possessed mana. The young man asked if he had passed the test. Raleigh said that he was simply incomparable. Leon replied that it was just a little tactical thinking. the minimum expected of the head of a noble house. Raleigh said that the young man had passed and that she would give him a silver membership badge. Carlin couldn't believe it. Had Raleigh really agreed to give out a silver badge at the start? Raleigh noted that the great Marvas had a very distinguished contractor, and she offered her congratulations. The demon lord said that considering who his master was, it was not surprising. Crow remarked that the fluffy creature couldn't even take a compliment. "What good is he anyway?" he exclaimed indignantly. Walter appeared in the room and was very surprised to see the golem. Most of their appearance was of magical origin. However, there are cases when a real living entity with a core is transformed into a golem. Using this unique trait, Leon von Marvis was able to find the real golem among those created by magic. Walter said he had no doubt. The gentleman was bound to succeed. Raleigh admitted that this was an unprecedented case. She hated to admit it, but the young man had everything it took. Leon von Marvis thanked the guild leader for his words. The young man inquired about the average payment for a silver badge mission. The demon lord thought that the young man had a terrible thirst for money. Carlin said that it depended on the specific mission, but it was about 300 gold coins on average. She added that compared to the amount of his main debt, the young man had better hurry up and earn his gold badge. Richard acknowledged that it was a promising start. He thought it would take years before the guild would condescend to give a silver badge to a newcomer. He acknowledged that stability was Raleigh's credo. Raleigh said that the young man would receive his first mission and accompanying instructions tomorrow. In the meantime, she suggested that he return to her quarters and rest. Leon von Marvis thanked Raleigh for her time. Walter noted with surprise that Raleigh had restored the golems with a snap of her fingers. Richard thought that the amount of mana was impressive, but her control was no less astonishing. He knew that the guild leader was a real monster. Richard said he was calling a break. Raleigh remained alone in the office and recalled the young man's battle. The guild leader couldn't forget the mana spears and how the young man wielded them. Raleigh thought the test was over, but the candidate suddenly revealed a completely unprecedented method that allowed him to pass it. The task of recognizing a golem filled with life force was truly no difficulty for the young lord. However, at the end, he seemed to hesitate, just for a moment, but still. I wonder why. Could it be that Leon von Marvis wanted to hide his power? The Marvis clan had always stood on the brink between life and death. After a long decline, they finally got a real monster. There was something that bothered Raleigh the most. The girl couldn't forget his lifeless eyes. Where was his gaze directed? What was he thinking about? At the morning meeting, Raleigh gave information about the first mission to the silver member of the guild. The young man took the scroll and read it. Chalice, in the city, the head of the religious sect of Ardenism, a worshipper of Arden, the goddess of creation. Leon von Marvis asked if he needed to find and capture this priest. Raleigh confirmed this. Chalice is a city south of the capital. Rumors of the priest's corrupt misdeeds were already spreading throughout the world. The young man must complete the mission with all his might and receive 100 gold coins. Carlin wondered if Raleigh was being too harsh on the newcomer. The guild leader said that given his skills, he should be able to handle it. Richard suggested that dangerous traps were possible, but this mission promised advancement. Leon von Marvis declared that he would do his best. Raleigh said that if the young man failed the task, he would be demoted to bronze rank. Raleigh added that the two of them could help the young man as much as they could. And Carlin said she wasn't going to wipe the boy's nose. Richard said they would be happy to do so. It was an honor for them to see what the young lord was capable of. Leon von Marvis bowed and thanked Sir Richard and Lady Carlin. His father had taught him that any help should be accepted with gratitude. Crow remarked that my lord had spoken well and was good at communicating with people. Marvis noted that it was an innate gift for any demonic race to bend people to their will. Walter pointed out that Lord Leon was not a demon, but a human being. Leon von Marvis said that he would not let them down because they desperately needed the money right now. The priest entered the temple and saw the girl standing in front of the statue of the saint. The priest apologized to his daughters. Only one of them will rise as a divine miracle virgin, embodying the blessing of the holy will of the Creator. In order not to interfere with the sun, the only one in its ascent, the second is doomed to oblivion. But in the end, both will become one. To achieve this, one must perish. The girls were twins. Faith on the continent is basically divided into two opposing teachings. One is directed toward the goddess, the creator of the world, and the one behind the creation of the philosopher's stone. Her name is the winged goddess Arden. She is worshipped by the Arden Church and the servants of light. The second doctrine is devoted to the devil and his army of 72 demons, including Baal, the cult of the devil's resurrection. With the exception of a few outcasts of the human race, most people lean towards the Arden faith. Among them are the chosen ones, whom the goddess has endowed with divine power and who are revered throughout the continent. Holy virgins who perform miracles. The coachman drives the carriage along a country road, following a set route. In the carriage are Leon von Marvis and his companions. Earlier, some young people approached the coachman, who was in a tavern, and asked him to take them to Chalice. The man was in the guild tavern at the time. So many people witnessed the request. The man said that it would be difficult to get there because of all the religious unrest. Even pilgrims had stopped visiting this place. The coachman asked why these people needed to go there. Richard replied that it was a long and uninteresting story. Richard looked at the girl, and Miss Carlin agreed. Carlin took out a bag of gold coins and threw it on the table in front of the coachman. She said that the gold explained everything the coachman needed to know. If he did not agree, they would be happy to find another. She was sure that there were less demanding drivers to be found. The coachman said that if safety was guaranteed, he would take them there. The glitter of gold clouded the coachman's mind, but after a while he began to feel uncertain. The city of Chelis, ruins and debris surrounded it, an unfortunate victim of the religious strife that had swept across this land. The newly appointed cardinal swore to protect the archbishop, but in the end, he could not withstand the pressure that had come crashing down on him. It was all because of holy power. The long absence of a new saint who could perform miracles was the death knell for the already shaky faith in Arden. At this rate, rumors of the disappearance of divine blessing only grow stronger. Leon von Marva said that as far as he understood, their goal was to expose Archbishop Carden's corruption crimes. Walter noted that even that sounded quite problematic. The demon lord declared that he cared little for saints. Marvis added that with Leon's current power, all these moralities should not bother him. Richard expressed his hope that this would be the case. Over the centuries of the demon lord's imprisonment, the human race had become significantly stronger. Not strong enough to defeat them, but it would be unwise to underestimate humans. Carlin added that this was fair, considering that they had come for the priest's soul. There were hardly any people on the entire continent who had not been touched by the faith of Aiden. The girl emphasized that faith had been struggling since the disappearance of the Holy Virgins. Richard suggested that the whole problem was that the Holy Virgins had historically only appeared in the lineage of priests. It couldn't be otherwise. However, this time, it was much more serious. This time, the priest had twins instead of the canonical single child. It is not surprising that all the foundations of the church are crumbling. Only one descendant can inherit divine power. Walter suggested that the power could not be divided between the sisters. Fluffy said that any supernatural power passed down through the family cannot be divided between two people. It can be assumed that one of the sisters faces inevitable death. The devil thought that no matter how much he watched this guy, he seemed very strange. Leon von Marvas was simply incomprehensible. The coachman announced that the carriage had arrived at its destination, the holy city of Chelis. His Excellency was informed that representatives of the guild that had accepted the request had arrived. The priest inquired whether it was true that they were not in collusion with Imperial intelligence. The assistant said that the Boundless Lotus Guild had assured him of this. The priest noted that the confidentiality of this matter was a top priority. After all, this charade was necessary to save his daughter. The assistant welcomed the guests and introduced himself as the Archbishop's chief steward, Glazer. Richard inquired whether it was Glazer who had requested an investigation into the Archbishop's corruption crimes. The butler confirmed this and added that he did not expect the head of the hermits himself to honor them with the request. Richard said that he was not the one carrying out the request. Glazer asked who else could have been entrusted with this task. Leon replied that he had been entrusted with the task. The butler wondered if the young man was too young for such work. After all, the matter had to be kept strictly secret from the Archbishop. Leon von Marvis showed the silver badge of the Adventurers Guild and added that the guild trusted him. He said that before getting down to business, he had one question. Had the Archbishop's two daughters, who had disappeared without a trace, resisted their father's will? The butler did not expect the young man to ask such an uncomfortable question about the twins. Glazer said it would be better to discuss it in a secluded place, as the story would take quite some time. A secluded place was found, and the conversation continued. The twins were present during this conversation. The butler looked at the young man and was surprised at how far the Holy See had gone. Chelis's influence had indeed weakened recently, but sending such an inexperienced boy on a mission was not the right thing to do. Leon von Marvis, noticing his interlocutor's concerns, told him to put aside his unnecessary doubts right now, before they moved on to the main topic. Leon added that only time would tell whether he would be able to provide the necessary assistance. Glacier thought that he was dealing with a telepath. The butler thought that this spell could be used by magicians of at least an advanced level. Leon von Marvis said there was no need to be hypocritical. Everyone here knew that the request had been initiated by His Excellency himself. So, how about laying all the cards on the table and explaining the ins and outs of the problem to them? Glazer said he understood the young lord. The butler noted that he wanted to explain all the details to those present. Sisters continued to pray in the temple. In the girls' hearts, two halves of something whole shone brightly. The priest wondered if the prophecy was true. His hands trembled. The archbishop wondered what awaited his beloved daughters. The old woman told the Holy Father that the divine power of the saint had been divided between the girls. However, in order to use it fully, only one girl was needed. The priest became angry. He did not want to sign the death warrant of one of his own daughters in order to obtain the full divine power. The elderly woman asked the priest for forgiveness. A young man appeared before the priest in the temple. The young man apologized for the intrusion. He said his name was Caliban and that he was the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Knights. Caliban declared that by the authority given to him by His Majesty, he was announcing his will to Bishop Chelis. The son of the Empire, Emperor Esteban von Arkham, had given the order that there could be no two sons under this sky. The Holy See must undoubtedly understand this. Upon reaching adulthood, one of the bishop's daughters would continue her life as a miracle maiden. The other will submit and serve as an addition to the Holy One's divine power. By burning her in the fire in the name of purification from sin, the false saint. The priest objected. His Majesty is a father himself. How can he demand that his child be burned? Caliban said that His Majesty is a father to all his people. He takes this sacrifice as close to heart as the Archbishop. Caliban turned and said he was leaving. His presence was no longer required here. The Archbishop fell to his knees. Why was the goddess sending him such trials? The Archbishop turned to the goddess Arden for help. First, she took the twins from his care, and now she wants to take one of them away. The priest asked what sin he had committed to deserve this. The guests listened to this story. Richard noted that for many decades there had been no miracle maiden capable of inheriting divine power. And now the bishop had twins who had equal rights to Arden's blessing. Therefore, the divine power was divided. The butler said that he wanted to save the lives of both of His Excellency's daughters. That was why the request had been sent to the guild. Glazer added that he understood perfectly well that this was a crime against the emperor's will. Leon von Marvis said that he had listened to the story and wanted to speak directly with the victims of the tragedy. The young man clarified that he wanted to talk to the girls alone. The others left, and only the three of them remained in the room. Leon von Marvis addressed the girls. "Is there anyone among you willing to sacrifice your life for another?" The demon lord asked where the contractor's tactfulness had gone. The young man replied that sometimes tactfulness comes at the expense of effectiveness. Leon said that he was ready to search diligently for a way for both of them to survive, but that this would not spare their family from the emperor's wrath. Therefore, in the worst-case scenario, one of them would have to make a terrible sacrifice. Leon clarified once again, "Is one of you willing to make a sacrifice of her own free will?" People came up with the lofty nickname Holy Wonder Maidens, although there is nothing grandiose about them. One of the sisters said that they were nothing more than bearers of a curse from birth. Once upon a time, demons attacked Earth. People fled in fear, seeking salvation. Sacred virgins were needed at all times. The priests did not know what they could do to counter this demonic threat now, without divine light. The knight protecting the priest said that His Excellency had better leave. It was dangerous to stay here now. The Archbishop declared that the devil's spawn would not deserve his forgiveness in this life or the next. Those who turn their backs on divine will get what they deserve. The priest sat by his wife's bed. The woman said that the goddess Arden was protecting them. The Archbishop thought it was an honor, for their child would become the next holy maiden. However, great honor usually comes with great responsibility and duty. The priest admitted that this frightened him. He was afraid that his child, although receiving the proper honors of a holy virgin, would also be used as an instrument of faith. The woman told Caperton not to worry. She would raise their child to be strong enough and teach her herself. The woman asked for permission to name her daughter Alicia. The name was given in the hope that people all over the world would be able to enjoy paradise on earth, Elysium. Unfortunately, not everyone is given the opportunity to enjoy the mother's wisdom in person. A difficult childbirth exhausted her strength. The woman gave birth to twins and left this world without even having time to greet her daughters. The storyteller said that their tragic fate could not be denied. From birth, they were accompanied by misfortune, and it was inevitable that it would mark their end. It was a cruel joke of fate that could not be remedied. Such was the trial sent to them by the goddess. Truly, that was the case. Leon von Marvis listened silently to the sister's story. One of the girls said that she humbly bowed her head. However, each of them agreed to disappear. The girls began to explain to each other the reason why each of them had to leave this world. One of the girls said she did not want to hear such things from her sister. Leon von Marvis said that he would not pretend to understand much about the matter, but he wanted to summarize. Were they both willing to sacrifice their lives? Then he did not understand what the problem was at all. The demon lord was surprised. Had the contractor forgotten? He had to find a way to save both lives, not leave them to fate. If both died, the young man would receive no reward at all. Leon von Marvis said that the Lord of Demons was, as always, perceptive. His wisdom could not be denied. Leon von Marvis told the girls that he would only accept an outcome in which they both survived. The sister said that the young man would be rewarded for his efforts. The girls asked only that their father not suffer. It didn't matter what happened to them. The Archbishop was not to blame for anything. He had always done his best in his position. Leon von Marvis said he understood. In that case, the girls should tell him about the trials they had endured. The sister said that one of them had only 2 days left. Until there was another plan, she would make the sacrifice. Leon von Marvis thought that there was no time left to think. He intended to find out if there was any reasonable way out of the situation. Richard suggested that they first make sure that the girls had the marks that distinguish saints. Leon von Marvis asked the girls to show him the marks. The girls said that their place was very unusual, so everyone except the lord and lady had to leave the room for a few minutes. Carlin said that wherever these marks were, she would insist that this mage be shown the door. Richard was indignant. What did Carlin mean? After all, he was the only archmage here. Carlin explained that she could easily recognize the distinctive marks, but she would not allow anyone to stare at the girls. The sisters showed their marks to Leon and Carlin. The young man admitted that it was definitely impossible to extract or transfer the power of the Sacred Virgin through magic. The demon lord said he saw only one solution. It might take time for people to accept it. Leon von Marvis declared that one of them would have to die. He saw no other way. The demon lord noted that he had never seen such a look in the young man's eyes before. He assumed it was anger coming from the depths of his heart. Louis said that the Holy Wonder Woman must be presented today. Caliban confirmed this. 20 years have passed. People will applaud her ascension. Caliban noted that this day is overshadowed by the preliminary burning of the witch for this purpose. Lewis noted that this was because the previous holy maiden had given birth to twins, but they had already waited too long for them to grow up. Leon von Marvis asked the Lord of Demons, "Isn't virtue about giving life to those who want to live?" Marvis asked the young man to clarify what he meant. Leon von Marvis said that one of the girls was lying. He was sure of it. The young man added that perhaps he was the only one who could see it, given how deeply connected he was to death. However, one of the girls desperately wanted to live, while the other was determined to die for a good cause. Leon said he couldn't stop thinking about it. Who should be allowed to live in the end? Who should be doomed to death? Marvis wondered if it was too late to be asking such questions. Leon von Marvis said that he had never been taught how to behave in such cases. The Crown Prince greeted everyone and introduced himself. His name was Duis von Arkheim. Lewis said that with the authority given to him by His Majesty the Emperor, he was going to witness the appearance of the new Holy Virgin. The townspeople began to cheer the prince, but the young man asked them to calm down. Louis noted that today they would be enveloped by the darkest and most hopeless night that people had ever seen. Nevertheless, darkness would give way to light, and the world would receive its miracle, a maiden. For this to happen, they must burn the nameless witch. The prince said that there could not be two suns in the sky, just as there could not be two holy maidens chosen by the goddess Arden. And yet the Holy Father had two daughters in order to sow discord on the continent. This is clearly the work of the devil. In the name of His Majesty, justice must be restored before everyone's eyes. The witch must be punished. The Crown Prince looked at the sisters and said that they were very beautiful. He added that if one of them were not a witch, he would be willing to take her as a concubine for her face alone. Louis patted the priest on the shoulder and walked past him. The Archbishop asked the young man if there was any hope of saving his daughters. Leon von Marvis replied that it was almost impossible. However, since the subject had come up, he had something to ask His Eminence. The girl told her sister not to cry. She had always known that she would have to sacrifice herself for the common good. Her sister replied that they had done nothing to deserve such a fate. Could their very birth be considered a sin? The sister added that the ways of the goddess were inscrutable, and yet they were obliged to follow her will without hesitation. Only then would the prophecy be fulfilled. They could not falter. It would be easier than the bitterness that had befallen them at birth. Now at least they had a choice. Caliban ordered the witch to be bound and placed on the pyre. The sisters said goodbye with tears in their eyes. One of the girls fell to her knees and begged forgiveness for being insincere. She was grateful that her sister would die in her place. Leon von Marvis appeared behind the girl and began to activate the concentrated mana, using his unique abilities. Under the external influence, the girl lost consciousness and fell to the floor. The demon lord asked the young man if this was really the best solution he could come up with. The young man answered in the affirmative. Even if it was far from the concept of best, he saw no other way. The girl was tied to a pillar in the middle of the square. The sentence was about to be carried out. The executioner, torch in hand, set fire to the place of execution. The fire began to engulf the entire structure. The Crown Prince said that this was the moment of the true saint's ascension. To some extent, it was the prince's duty to suppress the voice of doubt. Caliban said that no one would dare to question the prince's greatness. The entire empire would see that those who defied the rules would meet only destruction. Dawn was near. The girl screamed in pain. Her body was engulfed in flames. Leon von Marvis and his team watched silently. Carlin said that Leon's methods shocked her a little. Was this really the only way? Richard admitted that it wasn't the best ending, but overall it wasn't a complete failure. Leon von Marvis reminded him that the bishop wanted his daughters to live. The young man did not even presume to judge the depths of the archbishop's despair. He did not know His Eminence well as a person, but the priest wanted both girls to survive, no matter what. Even if it meant sacrificing himself, he was happy to see them both until the very end. It was a mystery to the young man now, but he was sure that one day he would understand this indescribable feeling, an unexpected moment that weighs heavily on the heart. The girl standing at the stake realized that somehow he had recognized those cold eyes. She thought everything was fine. It was justice. If anything, it was the punishment she deserved. Unlike her older sister, she was not so pure of heart and feared death more than anything else in the world. Therefore, she preferred to hide behind the kindness of her words. The townspeople saw the flames engulf the girl's body as she screamed in pain. The prince demanded that more oil be poured on the fire. The girl begged forgiveness for her weakness. 2 days earlier, in Bishop Carden's office, Leon von Marvis asked the bishop whom he would spare. Someone who desperately wants to live, or someone who is willing to sacrifice himself for the sake of a greater cause. The priest asked if the young man understood this at a glance. Leon confirmed this, although it was difficult for him to explain in words. The priest suggested that the young man truly possessed the insight to discern such things. Carden said he would spare the daughter, who would find peace after her death. In the end, what happened happened. One of the sisters was burned at the stake. Leon von Marvis asked his companions what the point of this was. Why did the priest want to save the one who had decided to die? The Lord of Demons replied, "Isn't the answer obvious? He wanted to teach her the greatest lesson of all, the true value of life. After all, nothing changes the fact that the survivor will have to live for the sake of the deceased, as well as for herself. But what if they could decide for themselves? The one who chooses to die will understand the gravity of that choice, and better than anyone else, will comprehend what it means to sacrifice herself for another. Whereas the one who simply wants to live will learn nothing from it. One of their vassals once said that gratitude is a feeling that fades with time. If you give everything away for free, an act of kindness quickly turns into a trap of exploitation. Walter thought, if such lawlessness continues, who will be left to direct their anger? What have these young virgins done to deserve such cruelty? Richard said there was nothing to be done. The continent desperately needed a miracle maiden. No matter how skilled they were as sorcerers, they were not free from the Empire's tenacious grip. Now the whole world is watching the newly minted saint. Carlin said that their work was done. The saint's power had finally become complete. Leon von Marvis was surprised. Was the saint's power still divided? Only half of the saint's mark glowed on the survivor's chest. Archbishop Carden suspected that something had gone wrong. The Crown Prince said that there was someone here who enjoyed second-rate tricks. Caliban noted that the witch had been executed, but the holy power was still fragmented. It was necessary to immediately arrest both the bishop and his henchmen. The archbishop said that this was beyond his comprehension. The girl they saw was the one he had chosen. Louis said he had not imagined that Carden could be so insolent. He had been given time out of respect for the priest's authority. How could he repay him with such an act? The Crown Prince ordered the priest to be executed. Caliban objected to the prince. How could they execute the spiritual leader of the entire Arkham Empire? And who knows, maybe he had hidden the real miracle girl somewhere. Louis suggested that the archbishop had surely hidden her where she could not be found. How could he resort to such tricks in times of despair? The Crown Prince added that they had endured too long the turmoil caused by the absence of the saint. Faith no longer blinded them. Louis repeated his order. Execute the archbishop. Caliban told the priest not to blame him. He had brought this trouble upon himself. Carden replied that it was he who had sacrificed his own daughter, as he had been commanded. Caliban remarked that if what the priest said were true, the holy mark would have already been reunited. Caliban swung his sword. The priest looked at him with resignation. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. The girl stood in front of her father and protected him from the sword blow. Carden cried out in despair, "What has she done? He does not deserve such a sacrifice." The girl said that this sacrifice was not only for her father. It was better to die for something than to continue living without a purpose. She had long been searching for a purpose in life, but not for personal gain. That is why she wanted her younger sister to live. She wanted to escape the emptiness of existence. Leon von Marvis believed that one should not punish someone who did not deserve punishment. The daughter said that this also applied to her father. The girl added that His Excellency never saw them as his daughters, but only as a tool to support the power of the church. She told her father to face the truth. He only cared about his own comfort. Deep down, he never treated them like his own children. The girl, losing strength and falling, said that this was the perfect retribution for the priest. Perhaps at least her death would have meaning. The priest rushed to his daughter and picked her up. The girl was unconscious. The bonfire burned out, leaving a charred body in the square. Leon von Marvis opened the Necronomicon and told the two lost souls he had picked up to listen to him. Leon von Marvis solemnly declared that the girl's worldly duty was not yet fulfilled. In the name of Marvis, he conjured them. Carlin understood what necromancy looked like in action. The young man asked if they would respond to Leon von Marvis' call and continue to exist in the world of the living, albeit in the form of undead. One of the sisters asked, "Will the young man really bring us back to life?" The other was surprised. Is that even possible? Leon von Marvis replied that if existence as undead could be called life, then he would bring them back. It was up to them to decide whether to regain their form at the cost of losing their warmth and beating hearts. Leon von Marvis added that whatever the girls chose, he would follow their will. The girls asked what the gentleman would require in return. The young man replied that, as harsh as it might sound, he asked them to become his loyal subjects. The girls said that it was not rude, but honest. It would be much more suspicious if the gentleman did not ask for anything in return. Leon von Marvis said he took that as consent. The young man added that he conjured these two lost souls in the world of the dead to serve him, the true heir to the House of Marvis. Were the girls ready to swear allegiance to him until the end of their existence? The sisters exchanged glances and gave a positive answer. The young man declared the contract sealed. He expressed his hope that their agreement would give the girls the comfort they had so long and desperately sought. Leon said that he truly wanted them to find what they desired when their term of service came to an end. Archbishop Carden continued to sit near his daughter's body with an expression of deep sorrow on his face. The Crown Prince and Caliban continued to watch the priest. Caliban felt a sudden sensation of a powerful magical discharge somewhere nearby. What could it be? Could there be another powerful mage nearby besides Prince Louis? The Lord of Demons asked the young man how he could take subordinates without even consulting him. Upon his return, he would receive a lecture that would last a lifetime. Leon von Marvis said that he had managed to keep the girls alive, so to speak. Walter acknowledged that it was a very skillful approach by his lord. The demon lord explained that in order to raise mindless creatures, such as evil spirits, as undead, they must first be branded. The thing is, they are too unpredictable, so branding works better than subjugation. Leon von Marvis asked the Lord of Demons how best to subjugate a sentient being to his will. Fluffy replied that it was necessary to convince the spirit to serve voluntarily, using its attachment to the world of the living. Attachment and resentment usually prevent them from crossing over into the afterlife. A necromancer can help them resolve their earthly grievances and, in return, borrow the power they possess. In other words, it is subjugation. Leon von Marvis said he understood everything, and now it was up to him to decide whether to grant their request or not. The demon lord noted that the stronger their resentment, the more powerful they themselves are. The young man must remember this well. Necromancers are not just vultures eager to exploit the powers of the undead. Leon von Marvis opened the Necronomicon and said that as Lord of the House of Marvis, he was calling upon them. Alicia and Helen must answer the call of their lord. The next moment, one of the girls appeared before Leon von Marvis. The young man was surprised. He had summoned both of them. Why did only one of them come? Fluffy said, "Isn't it obvious? They were originally meant to be born as one person. After their death, their spirits merged and became one." Walter suggested that something had changed in their behavior. Something was definitely wrong. Leon von Marvis asked who was standing before him, Alicia or Helen. The girl said that at the moment, he was looking at Alicia. Leon asked if they could change whenever they wanted. The girl confirmed this. Alicia noted that there was one problem. Helen refused to serve this dandy. The girl said she would rather return to her charred body. Richard said that it was just a change of souls. Helen had hidden her true self while she was alive. Helen looked at Richard and told the handsome man to keep quiet. She was now talking to His Excellency. Leon von Marvis asked what skills the girl could offer him. The young man noted that useless undead would be returned to the other world. Helen said that the gentleman expressed such frightening things in a very mundane way. However, he had nothing to worry about. Soon he would realize that they were more than capable of satisfying him in every way. The girl took the young man by the chest and moved close to him. Helen asked if he would be interested in this method. Raleigh admitted that the mission was over. She would never have thought that it could end like this. Carlin said that His Excellency could confirm that the mission had been accomplished. Now they wanted to get paid. Richard admitted that the mission had been well staged. It took a lot of courage to raise his daughter as an undead right in front of her father. Helen indignantly asked what the magician was looking at. She belonged only to Leon and no one else. Marvis acknowledged that the girl was very energetic, considering she was holy and had returned from the dead. Leon said he liked her better that way. Walter noted that all's well that ends well. The girls were alive, of course, with some reservations. Raleigh agreed to count this mission. Now the young man could officially be assigned the status of a silver-ranked adventurer. Raleigh said that the payment would be sent directly to the Marvis mansion or credited to his crypto wallet. Leon expressed his hope that this mission would not be the last. Raleigh promised that the young man would be the first to know if a mission worthy of him appeared. Carlin said she could vouch for those words. Raleigh doesn't make promises lightly. If Lord Marvis had anything to worry about, it was the timely repayment of his loan. Leon noticed the blatant hypocrisy he saw in Lady Carlin. The Demon Lord said it was necessary to move on. There are two personalities inside this lady, Alicia and Helen. First, it is necessary to find out what powers the newly minted servants possess. Carlin said that they were forced to insist on providing as many services as possible to Lady Raleigh Finelli. Caliban kneels before the Emperor and his son. The magician says that His Excellency refuses to eat or drink, completely immersed in despair. The loss of his daughters had greatly affected him. Louis wondered why the priest was so upset about a couple of children when he was still capable of fathering a dozen more. Only a weak man would allow despair to consume him. Louis asked, did the priest really not care how badly he had let His Majesty down? A precious opportunity to give the world a miracle girl had been wasted. Caliban told the prince that it was all his fault. If the prince was willing to give him a chance, he would gladly devote himself to serving the empire. Louis suggested that Caliban's mission had been thwarted by a dark magician of unknown origin, and he hadn't even come close to unraveling the mystery of his identity. Caliban sadly confirmed that this was the case. Considering that the spirits of the potential saints had disappeared without a trace, he believed that they had been intercepted by outside interference. Caliban noted that there was no mage on the entire continent capable of controlling such power, except for the legendary necromancer who had disappeared long ago. Leon von Marvis and his squad were outside the city. The Archbishop's daughter was with them. Raleigh told the young man to confess immediately. What power did his new servant possess? Leon von Marvis confessed that two souls dwelled within the girl's body, each endowed with its own power. Raleigh was, of course, surprised to hear such news. Leon told the guild leader that he was ready to demonstrate this. Could Raleigh organize a suitable target? The girl asked how strong the target needed to be. Leon von Marvis replied, extremely strong. Leon von Marvis told the girl that he wanted to demonstrate Alicia's powers first. At that moment, Alicia appeared before the young people. Alicia apologized to the gentleman and said that her younger sister was being rude. Leon von Marvis replied that everything was fine. He had called Alicia to demonstrate her skills, not to reprimand her for her behavior. Alicia said she was ready to demonstrate whatever the gentleman desired at any moment. Chief Raleigh summoned aggressive monsters to demonstrate the girl's skills. Richard said that it was a squad of forest trolls. These monsters are known for their rapid regeneration. Considering that Alicia is still learning to master her abilities, it might be difficult for her. Carlin noted that Leon von Marvis had already demonstrated more than once that he was no stranger to recklessness. Walter said he believed in the gentleman. Crow added that his faith was also unshakable from the outset. Leon said that these trolls were very difficult to deal with. Would Alicia be able to handle them? The girl assured him that he had nothing to worry about. The trolls rushed at Alicia, swinging their fists. Leon von Marvis opened the Necronomicon and performed the necessary actions. Alicia found herself holding a mace in the form of a staff. The girl swung her weapon, scattering the trolls in different directions. The Demon Lord said that such a crude display of power left no doubt about her professional competence. Crow admitted that he was shocked. She was truly a femme fatale. Alicia mercilessly crushed the skulls of her enemies with this club. The surviving trolls stopped and did not dare to attack the girl again. Leon von Marvis told the girl that this was more than enough to demonstrate her strength. The young man added that it was now the turn of his younger sister, Helen. Helen's soul appeared in the girl's body. She said that she had not expected the gentleman to ask for this, but she loved to show herself in all her glory. How could anyone not want the whole world to know how hard she works? Helen said that these nasty monsters deserved a good beating. At the same time, the girl threw a chain at the troll. After a short time, the troll was defeated and usurped. Helen said that the monster should say thank you because he gave his life for her beloved master. Everyone present looked at the girl in surprise. The Demon Lords said that this girl was a real incorrigible maniac. The young people finally returned to the lands of Marvis. The Demon Lords said that the first mission had been successfully completed. They could add to this the replenishment of their subordinates. In general, the excursion was a success. Leon von Marvis said that he completely agreed with the Demon Lord. In addition, he felt some improvement in his skills in the art of necromancy. Walter regretted that their companions could not stay longer. Richard said he was glad to personally welcome Lord Marvis, the rising star of the Hermit School. Carlin reminded him that Leon von Marvis still owed the Sleepers organization a large sum of money. The young people shook hands. Their journey together had come to an end. Richard said that unfortunately, he could not be away from the school for long. Carlin added that she still had many debtors from whom she needed to collect money. Before leaving, Carlin turned to Walter. His master's outstanding genius overshadows the young man. However, it should be noted that he too is gifted with a talent that most can only dream of. The head of her organization would certainly be impressed by this young man. Richard said that Walter had better pray that he never meets this lady. Richard explained that she was a real monster. In this organization, the employees are just like their boss. The leader of the Sleepers is on a completely different level of cruelty. Richard also recognized Walter's enormous potential. The young man was capable of achieving anything he desired as long as he remained loyal to Lord Leon. Walter thanked Carlin and Richard. He admitted that he did not often hear kind words about himself from others. Leon von Marvis said that this young man was definitely the most outstanding of his subjects. Leon added that Walter's potential could exceed all his expectations, and he planned to help the young man reveal his full potential. Richard smiled. When Lord Marvis spoke with such confidence, it was wonderful. Now it was time to say goodbye until the next time chance brought them together again. Leon von Marvis acknowledged that it was best to say goodbye with a smile on his face. Carlin hurried them along and said it was time to move on. If Leon was now a full member of the guild, she hoped that paying off the debt in a timely manner would not be a problem. Richard said that there was no need to part on such a tense note. Carlin remarked that there was hardly anything she hated more than small talk and company. The girl again expressed her hope that Leon would be able to pay his bills when they next met. She wished him a safe journey. Leon von Marvis watched Richard and Carlin walk away. The townspeople were very happy to see that their lord had returned. It meant they had not been abandoned. Leon von Marvis did not understand why people looked so surprised. Pullen saw his master from afar and rushed toward him with cries of joy. Suddenly, the young man heard a loud female voice directed at him with indignation. The girl asked why Leon had left the estate for so long. Leon was surprised. Could it be Diana? Leon von Marvis suggested discussing it inside. The Demon Lord agreed. The Demon Lord said that this girl was a childhood friend of the young man. She was also the heiress of the noble house of Varisha. Leon von Marvis, his assistants, and the heiress of the house of Varisha gathered around a table to discuss the situation and the current circumstances. Leon von Marvis said that the girl was a remarkable spirit summoner. She was always ready to help him. Crow said that the gentleman was a real Casanova. Did he really want another beauty in his entourage? The girl said that she was extremely puzzled. She never thought she would see Lord Leon, who was like a brother to her, in the company of a demon. What should she think now about such an unholy alliance? The Demon Lord said that the girl could think whatever she wanted. Pullen admitted that it was a long story. Crow added that there was nothing that could be done about it now. Walter told Lady Diana that it was difficult to explain. Diana replied that she still didn't understand. Why get involved in such difficulties? Diana asked how Leon had come up with the idea of leaving the estate without giving any reasons and joining some guild on his own. His subjects were completely desperate, believing that the Lord had abandoned them in difficult times. Leon admitted that he had no excuse and thanked Diana for looking after the estate in his absence. Diana said she couldn't abandon Pullen to his fate. Besides, she had been told that Leon would soon return to power. Leon von Marvis asked if there was another reason Diana had come to see him. The girl replied that she had come to make sure that everything was in order, because there was not much time left. Leon understood what she was talking about, didn't he? Diana told the young man to bend over and slapped him. This was punishment for forgetting such an important matter. Leon von Marvis wondered what important matter she was referring to. Diana explained that it was about a gathering of aristocrats. All the noble houses were invited to a grand celebration. In addition, they must attend the ball as partners, because they are engaged if Leon has not forgotten. The butler reminded the young gentleman that the day of the gathering of aristocrats was approaching. The young man said that it was very tiring. Couldn't his older brother attend instead? He didn't understand why it was necessary. The butler clarified that 3 noble families of darkness must be present at the gathering. Moreover, it was a wonderful opportunity to prove that the youngest descendant of the Reinhauer family was not an outcast in high society. Pullen helped his master, Lord Marvis, prepare for the important event. Diana Varicia stood nearby and watched the process. She was the future marquise and rising star of the House of Varicia, a longtime ally of the House of Marvis. She was our hero's betrothed. Helen was disappointed. How could her master do such a thing? She thought he was the only faithful man in this world of debauchery. Diana told Helen to calm down. Their engagement was just a formality. Diana added that a self-respecting aristocrat would marry a more mature man. She was only interested in mature, wise men. The demon lord said that Diana was behaving inappropriately. Crow noted that everything must be done for the good of the master. Pullen explained that Leon and Diana had been like cats and dogs since childhood, bound by obligations. Their respected houses were proud of generations of friendship, which meant they were forced to survive in such a close relationship. Leon asked if Milady could let go of his collar as a sign of respect for their close bond. Diana said it was foolish to believe that the young man would change after becoming the head of the family. She was disappointed. He was still the same boy she knew. Leon von Marvis remarked that someone who changes with the wind cannot be trusted. Diana said that Leon was sharp-tongued as always. The girl told Leon to use his eloquence to calm his frightened subjects. She added that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Diana fell silent abruptly, remembering the young man's father. Diana turned around and apologized to Leon. The young man said she had nothing to apologize for. His father had no regrets until the very end, and neither would he. Diana noted that Leon was as stubborn as ever. But even so, he couldn't miss the upcoming events. She understood the young man because she couldn't stand them either. Be that as it may, the House of Marvis had defeated the Sylvesters in the war between noble houses, thus justifying its ducal title. It was time to introduce themselves to the public and establish social connections. Leon von Marvis said he agreed. He had not failed to notice the contempt with which the other great houses treated them. Walter said that the master would finally receive the recognition he deserved. Crow noted that this was wonderful. The master was wise enough to choose the best. Leon von Marvis said that he would definitely join the upcoming celebration. The whole nation is rejoicing and celebrating. Everyone is in high spirits. One of the guests asked if it was true that the Sylvester family had lost the last territorial battle. He had heard rumors that Count Alan had suffered a crushing defeat. Another guest asked who exactly the Sylvesters had lost to. The man replied that the Sylvesters had lost to the Marvises. Could it be that the Manhwas had won? But in recent years, things had been going badly for them. Where did they find the strength to fight? The guests saw that Leon von Marvis had arrived. That meant they could ask him personally. Leon said that it was even noisier here than he had expected. He still didn't like lavish receptions. Diana said that she didn't like it either, but that it was the duty of aristocrats to appear carefree. Leon von Marvis smiled and thanked Diana for the reminder. The girl had known Leon since childhood, but their last meeting had confused her. His zeal to fulfill his duty as head of the family is so great that he would now jump into the lion's mouth for his home. Does he really want to become such a person? Leon asked his companion if the others could manage on their own. Walter said that their talents had yet to blossom in all their glory. Diana said that a 14-year-old boy should worry about his own talents. The young man noted that in terms of social status, he had already surpassed Diana. A young man approached the young Lord Marvis and greeted him. Leon von Marvis asked what this man wanted from him. The young man replied that he didn't really need anything. He was surprised. Had this guy really defeated Alan? Although he was only a count, by aristocratic standards, his military power was comparable to that of an entire duchy. The young man said that he had heard strange rumors about the young man's victory in a noble war against Count Alan de Silvestre. It even sounded strange. Leon von Marvis asked what was so strange about it. The young man said that Marvis was too arrogant, especially towards that girl. He apologized and added that it was difficult for him to even imagine. If the rumors were not exaggerated, the young man would be happy to appreciate Marvis's strategic thinking. Leon replied that he had taken Alan's life. Leon von Marvis repeated that he had destroyed Alan de Silvestre, and that was all. That was his duty as head of the Marvis clan. As for strategy, he could not share it here. Leon von Marvis added that if the young man ever stood in his way, then he would see how well his opponent had mastered the art of tactics. Young Lord Reinhaver watched the dialogue. He decided that finally there was some worthy entertainment. The guests were surprised. What was all the noise about? Apparently, the young Lord Marvis had decided to make a fool of himself. Another guest remarked that the Marvis family had already attracted a lot of ridicule. Leon von Marvis looked silently at these guests. The Demon Lord said that they could talk as much as they wanted. It meant nothing and was not even worth paying attention to. Leon decided to interrupt the conversation. His interlocutor said that Lord Marvis was recklessly provoking others. However, if it was a mockery of the Barella family, then he was obliged to hold Marvis accountable. Leon von Marvis said that it was not a mockery. If anything, it was his interlocutor who was the first to mock Marva's victory. The young man added that Lord Marvis responded with an outrageous remark, which in these circles was tantamount to a declaration of war. Diana suggested that the young people calm down. She said that Lord Riva, being a representative of a branch of the Beryl family, had no right to speak on their behalf. He was not even an heir, but for some reason he had picked a fight with the rightful duke. Diana added that by aristocratic standards, this was a clear sign of disrespect. Was Lord Rivai prepared to answer for this with the full force of the law? Rivai said that one victory does not change much. The young man added that this also applies to Lady Diana Varisha. The girl replied that she might have been frightened by this ominous warning if it had come from a frightening person, but fortunately, he was not worth it. A young man approached the disputants and told Riva to spare everyone his screams. Rivai was indignant. Who dared to insult him from behind? Leon von Marvis thought that suddenly there was no trace of truth left in this guy after he turned around. Who was this guy? His appearance seemed familiar. Reinhover asked if Riva was so stupid that he had forgotten who was in front of him. The demon lord told the contract to be careful. This guy is the most dangerous of them all. Reinhover wondered if Rivai deserved to be crucified in front of him. Walter asked Pullen if Leon and Diana could handle it on their own. Pullen replied uncertainly that they should be able to handle it, even though it was their first social event of this scale. Walter said that didn't sound convincing. Pullen admitted that he was worried because their master was sometimes too carefree. Pullen added that Leon could be involved in a scandal, and they wouldn't even know about it. The assistant added that, fortunately, Lady Diana was accompanying the young master. She was capable of handling his brashness. Walter asked what Sir Pullen knew about this girl, apart from the fact that she was his master's fiancée. Pullen admitted that it was nothing really. Diana was more like an older sister to the young man. Besides, there was a significant age difference between them. Pullen added that they owe this girl a great deal for taking care of the dreamy boy for years. Their relationship is more like family than romantic. Pullen said that Diana was the last reason for doubt at this event. He had heard rumors that the sleeping dragon of Arkheim's high society would be attending this gathering of nobles. Walter thought that this was the first time he had heard of this person. Pullen said he was a cheeky young gentleman whom everyone avoided. He belonged to one of the 3 noble cities of darkness, like Lord Leon, the younger son of the Reinhauer house, whose family had long since eclipsed the weakened Marvis family. His name was Knox von Reinhauer. Reinhover told Riva to remember that name well if he wanted to keep his limbs intact until the end of the evening. Rivai apologized and said that he would not have raised his voice if he had known that he was in the presence of a descendant of such a distinguished family as the Reinhovers. Knox poured wine on the frightened Riva's head and said that he was a boring dandy, just as he had thought. It was a waste of good wine in his time. Reinhover left the overturned glass on the frightened young man's head. Riva once again sincerely apologized and begged for leniency. Leon von Marvis asked if they knew each other. Reinhover was surprised. He thought Marvis had already heard of him. Diana named the young man Knox von Reinhauer. She added that he was a young gentleman of the great house, which opposed the noble houses of light. He certainly expressed his contempt in the worst possible way. Knox was surprised. Was that all the girl could say after he had offered her a helping hand? Knox looked at Leon and assumed that they would soon become very close. Leon von Marwes replied that if it was in the interests of his house, he agreed. Reinhover said that he was an exemplary head of his family and added that they would meet soon. Diana remarked that this young man was the black sheep of his family. She expressed doubt that they would meet often and advised him to be cautious around him. Leon von Marvis asked if that was all Diana knew about him. The demon lord said that Reinhauer was somewhat similar to Leon in nature. He was as unrivaled a genius as the contractor. It was just a pity that he was hidden in the shell of a scoundrel. Leon von Marvis said that he thought so too. He had never felt such intense and dense dark mana before. The assistant asked Knox why the master had helped the young man. The girl was surprised. Her master preferred not to get involved in trivial matters. Knox told her to see for herself, and then she would understand. Reinhauer was sure that soon there would be no one left on the continent who did not know his name. Knox noted that no matter how he behaved, with dignity or not, it would be an unforgettable sight. Reinhauer said he wanted to go home because he was very tired here. Diana told Leon to go with her. Although it was a formality, it was better for him to play the role of her fiancé in public. Leon von Marvis asked what he should do. The girl asked if Leon remembered the basics of dancing. Surely his father had taught him. The music started, and the young people began to dance together. Diana noted that Leon was well trained. There was still something left in him of the charming boy she had known. The girl said that he was not her type. Leon von Marvis asked what she meant. Diana told the young man not to think about it and not to take the steps too seriously. He could just make it look like he was dancing. Leon thought that his father had also taught him that a lord of a noble house must present himself in the best light in any endeavor. The young man pulled his partner close and looked intently into her eyes. The girl thought that he was as zealous a head of the house as ever. Was it necessary to pull her so close out of a sense of duty? Diana said that Leon was still immensely diligent in all areas, even the most unexpected ones. She would like to say the same about her companion, but she was not as flexible as she used to be. The girl told Leon to be quiet. That would be enough for him. The guests were frightened. What was that noise outside? Didn't they understand how a fight at a gathering of aristocrats would affect them? Someone said that it was a one-sided beating, not a fight. The young people saw Pullen kneeling. In front of him, trying to protect him, stood Walter with a sword in his hand. Opposite him was an armed man. Diana said she wanted to hear a clear reason for this disgrace. The instigator was Lord Riva de Barella. He said that Lady Varesha had arrived just in time. The girl noticed that she was not going to repeat herself twice. What was the cause of this scandal? Ravai was surprised. Wasn't that tone too authoritative for a girl who didn't have a powerful lord behind her? The demon lord said that this guy had started acting like a big shot after the White Wolf left the scene. Aristocrats go crazy over anything. Leon von Marvis told Riva to explain in detail what exactly his subordinate had done wrong. Rivai hesitated and didn't know what to say. His assistant asked if everything was all right with his master. Rivai yelled at his assistant and told him to shut up immediately. He was a completely useless, insignificant clown. Rivai remembered how it was. Walter said that aristocratic gatherings were simply a convenient opportunity for young ladies and gentlemen to socialize and make connections within their league. Pullen agreed and added that now, given how much the reputation of the Marvis family had weakened, such events were especially important. He also noted that this was another reason to thank Lady Diana. It was extremely kind of her to accompany the gentleman to the reception. Walter suggested that they cherished each other greatly. Pullen confirmed this, as they had been together since childhood. Rivai asked them if they were also from the Marvis house. Pullen saw that two people were blocking their way. He was surprised. Why would the young heir to the Barella house do that? He noticed the insulting tone of the noble gentleman. But why this provocation? Rivai said that these were big words for a little butler and called Coleman's assistant to come to him. Walter looked back and saw an armed man approaching them. Rivai ordered Coleman to finish off these two scumbags. Coleman was surprised. This was the Duke's house. How could they do such a thing here? Rivai said that lousy aristocrats deserved only contempt, and that was enough questioning. Coleman, addressing his opponents, said that the price of disobedience was death. A young man must draw his sword if he considers himself a knight. Pullen told Walter not to give in to provocation. They couldn't afford another confrontation yet. They couldn't add to Mr. Marvis's problems. The next moment, Pullen received a powerful blow to the stomach and cried out in surprise. He clutched his stomach and sank to his knees. He told Walter that he was fine and that now they had to think about his lordship. Walter looked up and saw that his opponent had come dangerously close. The young man quickly drew his sword and held it out in front of him. He said he would not cause Mr. Marvas any trouble. Walter said he wanted to protect Pullen. He was as dear to him as Sir Marvas. Rivai, looking at the groaning Pullen, said that was very sweet. He added that the two should regret their loyalty. Coleman attacked the young man, but Walter easily parried the attack. At that moment, Diana appeared and said she needed to know the reason for this disgrace. What could Lord Riva de Barella say in response? The guests thought, is that scoundrel from the House of Barella causing trouble again? Now they would be able to find out whether the Marvis victory over the Silvestras was just a lucky coincidence. The girl asked, isn't it obvious? This boy could hardly muster the strength to fight. Rivai asked our hero if he would like to engage in a friendly sparring match. Those present should enjoy it. Leon von Marvis replied that he accepted the challenge. Coleman approached Leon with his sword drawn. Leon von Marvis said that he had expected more from Walter. Walter apologized and said that he couldn't help himself, so he let his master down. Leon replied that that wasn't the point. Coleman swung his sword and lunged at Leon von Marvis. Leon stepped aside and Coleman remained standing in place with a bleeding wound in his stomach. It all happened in a flash. Rivai, Diana, and Walter watched in amazement. Was such a thing possible? Leon told Walter that he hoped the young man would fight with all his might for Pullen. He added that he wanted to announce one fundamental principle of the House of Marvis. At that moment, Coleman lost his strength and was already on his knees. Suddenly, undead creatures appeared out of nowhere. The undead appeared behind Rivai and held a blade to his throat. Leon von Marvis said that if necessary, they would destroy everyone without hesitation. This applies to both the prosperity of their house and the safety of their loved ones. The young man added that he didn't care who stood in his way. Even if it put him at risk, he wanted everyone to follow this principle. Rivai cried out, would Leon really look down on him? He saw the prince in front of him, got scared, dropped to his knees, and started begging for forgiveness. Riva said he didn't know the prince would come down in person. Prince Alan told Riva to forget about the ceremony. Rivai said that it was a great honor for him that the prince remembered his name. The prince said he didn't want to hear any more words. Alan remarked that he had witnessed a certain scene involving Riva and that it had amused him. Riva asked if it was about the quarrel between Lords Marvis and Reinhauer. The crown prince confirmed this. He said he was not one to resist curiosity, so he wanted to ask right now. Alan asked why the two houses of darkness had suddenly united against Riva. He found it hard to believe that they had gotten along so well until now. The prince added that he had received strange news about the Marvis house's victory in the recent noble war. Riva admitted that it was indeed rather strange. Alan said that with a little help, Riva could lift the veil of secrecy surrounding the true intentions of these families. Rivai thought, from the moment Reinhover sailed away, little Marvis became nothing more than a toothless tiger cub. He could easily be removed at the crown prince's behest. He decided that such an opportunity should not be missed. The crown prince's wishes were law to him, Now Riva was in the hands of the undead who commanded Leon von Marvis. He realized he had made a mistake and said that it was a grave sin for the lord of the house to dismiss it. Was it fitting for such a figure to interfere in the petty quarrels of servants? Leon von Marvis said that where Riva saw insignificant servants, he saw his standard bearers. Riva asked, even in that case, why go so far for them? Leon reminded him that if necessary, they would destroy everyone without hesitation. There would be no exceptions. Leon von Marvis left his opponent and walked away with the undead in the other direction. He told Walter to take Pull to a doctor immediately. Diana said she was on Leon's side, but it would be better if the young man stopped. The girl noted that a member of a branch of a noble family posed no real threat to the Marvis family. This was too high-profile a case to bring to the public's attention. It would be wiser to back down. Suddenly, Riva's assistant grabbed Diana and held a knife to her throat. Riva laughed and asked what Mr. Marvis would do now. Everyone must retreat immediately, or he would not hesitate to test the limits of this hypocritical farce. Riva asked if the young man didn't want his toy to get scratched. Leon von Marvis thought that in Lady Diana's case, the toy was himself. Riva could use an eye exam. Riva said he knew perfectly well that Leon would not allow even the tip of the girl's little finger to be hurt. Lord Marvis must withdraw his undead and disperse amicably. Leon said he was ready to repeat himself. Not only had Riva harassed his subordinates for no reason, but he had also decided to threaten Lady Diana. Was this guy really that stupid? Leon said that his servants would not be limited to just one hand. Riva felt an ominous chill fill the air. Leon asked if Riva was deliberately defaming Lady Diana's honor. The demon lord told the contractor to hurry up. Often, silence is an admission of guilt. Leon von Marvis said that he understood the demon lord. Silence means guilt, a wise lesson. The young man added that in that case, death was the only fitting punishment. Riva shouted that in that case, the girl would also die. However, Diana snatched the knife from the attacker and stabbed the villain right in the neck. Leon von Marvis, ignoring this, began to summon the undead again. His bleeding assistant fell. Riva understood that now he had no way out. Diana did not understand how this was possible. She had heard rumors about Leon's unexpected increase in power, but she had no idea that the scale was so great. The demon lord said that the young lady held a special place in his contractor's heart. Diana admitted that she didn't quite understand those words. Fluffy added that this was something new for him. Until now, he had never seen such a riot of emotions on the young man's face. The guest said in alarm that a crime at a gala evening was unheard of. Moreover, Marvis had used necromancy. His magical art seemed still raw, but definitely frightening. In high society, Marvis was seen in only two guises: with terrifying power that made any noble house tremble in fear, or as an outcast awaiting inevitable downfall. The crown prince witnessed what happened. He saw the undead summoned by Leon von Marvis surrounding him. Alan clapped his hands and praised the young man. He said that Leon von Marvis had put on an entertaining show. Leon said that he assumed that for the vast majority, this spectacle was unpleasant. The prince's tastes were quite specific. The prince laughed and said that he was not offended by these words. Rather, he was inspired by the fact that he had personally witnessed the return of the art of necromancy to the land of Arkheim. This art had been dormant for centuries in the unskilled hands of the young man's predecessors. The prince asked how Leon had managed to master what no one else had been able to before him. Leon replied that people say he is gifted, although he himself does not think so. He added that he cannot judge himself. All he knows is that his power enabled him to withstand the enemy's onslaught. That is why he stands here as the head of the Marvis family. The prince said he would pray that this gift would not be considered an enemy of the imperial house. Leon von Marvis said that he also had a dream, that nothing would threaten the house of Marvis. The Lord of Demons said that the contractor was magnificent. More than one noble house may soon come forward with their claims. The power demonstrated would silence them for a while. During this time, it would be possible to strengthen their position. The young man asked what they should do now. Fluffy said that the prince was definitely up to something sinister. He could sense it with his nose. The prince reeked of demonic powers, just like him. Leon von Marvis said that he really did sense an ominous aura. A demon was involved. After a while, the commotion subsided. There was not the slightest reproach from Beryl's house. The protagonist returned home. The demon lord suggested that Prince Louis had personally hushed up the matter. He definitely had something up his sleeve. Leon von Marvis suggested that their path might become more difficult. They needed to replenish the treasury, taking into account the enormous debt, not to mention the repairs to the mansion. The young man said it was time to follow Lady Diana's advice. They needed a competent treasurer. Diana said that the more the young man tried to patch up the holes in the budget, the more he would accumulate debt. He was not going to leave behind a mountain of unpayable debts. Crow said he had an idea. The gentleman should become an archmage in the field of necromancy. Then he could pay off his debts for eternity. The demon lord said that Crow's ideas were one more delusional than the next. He would not allow the contractor to be a cash cow for loan sharks for the rest of his life. Helen wondered if they could even afford a treasurer. A good manager costs a lot of money in any country and on any continent. Leon von Marvis admitted that they would have to shell out some cash. The demon lord said that they needed to worry about pressing problems. They would have to make some sacrifices in order to succeed in the future. Leon von Marvis said he would try to find a worthy manager for the Marvis household. The young man suggested that an announcement would have to be made. Aristocrats and commoners are not so different. If a person's skills are noteworthy, he would be happy to hire them. The young man added that he would be more satisfied with a modest worker. Fluffy said that sounded like a miser. Crow was indignant. How dare a ball of wool mock the Lord when he was saving money for his house? The Demon Lord said that they spent a lot of money on peanuts for Crow. There's no sign of saving money here. Crow reminded him that this was his reward for the past journey, and it was not up for discussion. Leon told Helen to bring Pullen to him. The Marva's council needed to be convened. Prince Alan said that this Leon was definitely an interesting young man. They had more in common than the young man thought. The prince had the mark of the demon clan on his chest. The townspeople in the central square read the information on the bulletin board with interest. It turns out that the House of Marvas needs a treasurer, but since when do they have the money for that? It says that the head of the house is willing to hire anyone, regardless of their background. But most of them can't even read. Such people cannot be allowed to handle the estate's affairs. A girl who apparently needed a job approached the bulletin board. As always at this time of day, Leon von Marvis was holding a meeting with his subordinates and close associates. The Demon Lord said that they needed a treasurer and that they were willing to pay a meager salary of 1 gold coin for the job. Pullen noted that they could not afford any other option. While they were under the close supervision of the imperial family, they were not allowed to demand compensation for winning the noble battle of the houses. Although Leon had earned an impressive sum, most of the money would go to pay off the estate's debts. Leon von Marvis confirmed that they only had about 100 gold coins in reserve. That would barely last a month. Crow was upset. Was another crisis looming? Crow also demanded a contract. Lord Leon owed him some fresh nuts. Walter said that there would still be many willing to take the position of treasurer. It was worth interviewing them before making a final decision. Leon von Marvis noted that he agreed with Walter. Talking about it wouldn't help. Action was needed. The young man said he was ready to look at the candidates. The candidates were to be interviewed at the training ground. People stood all over the square, waiting for the selection process to begin. The girl looked back. Someone had deliberately nudged her shoulder. The young man standing behind her asked if she had any complaints about him. The young man was surprised. Who would have thought that his competitors were such low-class scum as this girl? The girl recognized him. It was Alcar de Nagisi, the third son of the Nagisi family from the same small province where she lived. He was an obsessive suitor who had been pursuing her for some time. The girl suspected that this guy might stick to her. She said that he shouldn't care what she was really doing. Alcar said of course he cared. What man would let his bride run away so far? What does Siren think about this? The girl removed the young man's arm from her shoulder. Alcar said that her origins were too lowly for her to forget the past and start a new life. Siren retorted that he was no better. Did he really think that his status gave him the right to get everything he wanted? Alcar noted that the girl was right. He was going to get a simpleton like her. Cyrene said she did not belong to him. One day she would surpass him in every way. The girl asked what difference it made that she was a commoner. Did that make her lowly? She was the one who decided her own fate. Alcar asked if she would be of much use to a noble house. She could only be a companion to the head of Marvas. The girl said that it was still better than giving herself to a scumbag like Alcar. The man became angry and swung his fist, wanting to strike her. However, he felt unknown forces and explosive energy rush past him. Alcar was frightened. What was that? Leon von Marvis appeared in the square and said that serious passions had already flared up during his trial, but he would not tolerate disorder. Leon von Marvis introduced himself to those present from the podium. The head of the house suggested proceeding with the trials without delay. He wanted to quickly determine the future manager of the estate. The Demon Lord saw Siren and thought that at least one worthy contender was present. Perhaps they would not be wasting their time. Among the skills Leon had acquired through his deal with the demon was one special ability, a piercing gaze that allowed him to see into a person's soul. This trait was inherent to the demon. Demons always know exactly what inclinations their victims have and tempt them with sweet promises, taking advantage of their inner insecurity. Once the victim's will is broken, there is no escape. The next object to attract the attention of the demon Marvis was a young girl. She possessed an iron will, stronger than anyone else on the field. Leon announced that the exam for the position of the new manager of Marvis lands was beginning. The first task was to clearly understand the full depth of the difficult situation. The map that everyone was given showed the entire territory of the Marvis clan and its neighbors. The young man assumed that everyone present was generally aware of the current financial difficulties. However, thanks to their connections with other noble houses, they would be able to overcome this crisis by selling resources and special goods. The young man said that 10 minutes should be enough to put forward a proposal to solve the problem. Siren looked closely at the map that was offered to her. The girl immediately determined that the land of Marvis was located on the southern border of the continent. They had low trade potential in terms of special products or natural resources, with the exception of a single mine. Even that is difficult to develop due to budget constraints. There is also a shortage of labor. Alcar watched Siren closely. The girl understood that it was quite difficult to find an incentive that would attract many young people here. Hiring knights and mages was out of the question, given the lack of funds. The girl considered the only advantage that could still be counted on. Alcar believed that she would soon realize that a village girl had no place among honest people. Alcar also looked at the map and tried to come up with something. He pushed himself not to lose focus. The young man looking at the map thought it was all nonsense. Leon von Marvis said that anyone who gave up could leave, but if anyone had any decent suggestions, he was ready to listen to them. One of the young men raised his hand and said he would like to take a chance. The young man went up to the podium and showed his plan on the map. The Marvis estate had always been considered an impregnable fortress with a small piece of land attached to it. There were few options for production or extraction here. The young man said that an idea had occurred to him. There was a mine in the mountains on the estate that had barely begun to be developed. What if they dug deeper into this mine? What if it was full of rubies, sapphires, and other precious stones? Leon von Marvis asked where they would get the funds to develop this mine. The applicant admitted that he did not know the exact amount of money in the treasury, but hoped that there would be enough for the excavations. In any case, money could be borrowed from the capital or from a trade association. Leon said, "What if the option of borrowing money is not considered?" The young man apologized and admitted that he had not thought that far ahead. Leon von Marvis invited the next candidate to take the podium, but there were no others. Then Siren said she could do it. The girl believed that such an opportunity only comes once in a lifetime. She had to seize it before the chance slipped through her fingers. Cyrene felt the disapproving glances of those around her. The men were puzzled. What was this girl doing here, especially one so young? Things must be really bad at the Marvis house if even girls like her were allowed to participate. Their problems began long before this young man took the chair of the head. There was nothing to be done about it. Leon activated the demonic skill associated with his gaze. He decided that this girl was a worthy candidate. The demon lord sensed the same potential in her as he did in Walter. An uncut diamond. Leon said he would listen to her proposal, but first he wanted to hear her name and title. The girl introduced herself as Siren and said she was an orphan from a shelter. His newly acquired ability to discern talent proved to be a pleasant bonus to his contract with the demon lord. For the first time since signing the contract, the young man clearly felt the benefits of this gift. Fluffy said that from now on, the contractor would have to command and nurture countless vassals and subordinates. Only in this way could he regain at least a fraction of the former glory of his ancestor, the one who was once called the Lord of Lost Souls. The young man noted that he did not doubt the wisdom of his lord, but still, they should not recruit just any rabble from the streets. They needed the best of the best to restore the house. The demon lord said he would grant the young man the power to separate the wheat from the chaff. Leon von Marvis looked in the mirror and realized that he had acquired a new skill, judging by his glowing eyes. The young man assumed that his gaze would now bring clarity in selecting allies. Fluffy said that the more outstanding their talent, the brighter the glow he would see. Leon von Marvis looked out the window at the knight's training. The demon lord asked if the young man could feel the difference. Leon von Marvis said that he saw many different colors, white, scarlet, orange, and many others. The demon lord noted that the brightest ones had the greatest potential. Leon von Marvis said he understood. In that case, he should look closely at the participants who shone brighter than the rest. Leon said that, as always, he had another question. Even with such powers, was there any hope for the miraculous restoration of the House of Marvis? What talents did he have at his disposal for this? Fluffy said that the young man would soon understand everything himself. The demon lord wanted to watch this process with pleasure. The protagonist noticed a faint golden glow around the sirens. The demon lord said that in exceptional cases, one could encounter a black glow, symbolizing dark connections. Leon von Marvis thought that this perfectly matched the situation with that person. Cyrene told herself not to doubt. She decided to briefly state her opinion on the current situation in the Marvis household. As the head had already noted, no unique goods were produced on this land, and there were no valuable resources for trade. Therefore, the first priority was to find new sources of income. The applicants were surprised. Hadn't this already been discussed? What could be expected from a commoner? She would have been better off giving up right away than wasting their time. Leon von Marvis told the applicants to be quiet. He would not tolerate squabbling and idle chatter. The young man reminded them that they were all still on probation. Siren said that the abandoned mine was indeed a valuable asset, but as long as there was a labor shortage, it remained only an asset. The biggest difficulty was the shortage of young, able-bodied migrants. The girl noted that it was necessary to use the Lord's main asset, the undead, which had led him to victory in the last war. Leon von Marvis' ability to command hordes of undead could be used outside the battlefield. The applicants were surprised. Was she serious? How could she suggest spending my lord's strength on digging in a mine? This girl simply did not understand how nobles hated to dirty their hands, whether with a sword or magic. Cyrene expressed her opinion and waited for Lord Leon von Marvis' verdict. She noted that my lord's greatest desire was to restore the nobility of the House of Marvis. In that case, he cannot rely on standard methods within a limited time frame. Cyrene told Leon von Marvis to trust her and promised that he would not be disappointed. Leon von Marvis took out a token and told the girl that she had passed the exam. As for her proposal, they would discuss it in detail a little later. The other applicants were devastated. How could this have happened? How did this girl pass the exam when they hadn't thought of it before? There were other attempts to interest the Lord, but they were unsuccessful. The day came to an end and the sun began to set. Pullen announced that the first stage of the examination for the position of the new administrator of the glorious lands of Marvis was now closed. The second part of the exam would take the form of a private interview. All the candidates were now free to go. Siren held the token in her hands. She couldn't believe it. Had she really passed the first stage of the exam? However, this was not the end. She couldn't let her guard down, as she still had a lot to prove. It was getting dark in the city. Evening had fallen. The girl was walking home along a deserted street. Siren felt that at least 4 men were following her. She took out a knife. Such a large number of people was unusual for such a remote area. It could only mean one thing. A man approached the girl from behind and tried to grab her. The stranger grabbed the girl by the throat and began to choke her. Siren began to suffocate. Siren found herself captive to the robber. Alcar appeared in front of the girl. He said that Siren needed to know her place because he had already warned her about this. Siren told him to stop immediately. He couldn't do that. Alcar said that he loved her frightened face. Besides, she couldn't fail to understand how ridiculous it was to call her names in such a remote place. Alcar added that there was an easier way. She had to give him the token and give up her dream. Siren refused. She would never bow down to people like him. Siren managed to break free from her captor and pushed him aside. The girl held the knife out again and threatened Alcar. The villain grabbed Siren by the arm and tried to snatch the knife from her. He said that it was necessary to get a bride with good manners. Alcar called his comrades for help, and more people emerged from the darkness. Alcar told his henchmen not to worry. Siren would survive. The criminals attacked the girl. Suddenly, demonic energy appeared in the air, and everyone jumped back in fear. Leon von Marvis appeared nearby. The young man said he hoped he would not have to destroy his loyal subjects. Leon snapped his fingers and said that this was the unfortunate duty of the Lord of the House of Marvis. Undead creatures appeared next to the bandits. The villains were frightened and screamed in fear. Siren asked in surprise what my lord was doing here. Leon replied that he was fulfilling his duty, as befits the head of House Marvis. The young man clarified that the Lord's duties included both searching for talented subjects who would serve the estate and protecting them from such threats. Alcar was frightened, fell to his knees and begged his lord for forgiveness. He said he had no idea that the Lord had such designs on this girl. Alcar's henchmen fled in fear in different directions. The instigator of the hooliganism continued to beg for mercy. Leon was surprised. What intentions was this guy talking about? He was drawing some very strange conclusions. Leon von Marvis assumed that Alcar de Negisi wanted to harm his subject. Alcar swore that he would never even look in her direction again. The young man added that his statement was insane. Leon von Marvis suggested that if someone else had stood up for this girl, Alcar would have sent his gang of scoundrels after both of them. Leon von Marvis said that he was interested in the answer to one question. Did Alcar enjoy oppressing the weak and cowering only before the strong? Alcar once again apologized to my lord. He promised that it would not happen again if the gentleman allowed him to live. The undead swung his sword. Leon said that the answer to his question was obvious and that it was not worth listening to him. Leon von Marvis once again used his unique abilities to achieve his goal. The young man addressing the girl said that after everything she had been through, she had had enough trials. The demon lord noted that Leon had destroyed his subject right on the street. Leon von Marvis said that for the good of the House of Marvis, he would do anything. Pullen reported that this young man was very ill-tempered. He would disappear without a trace, so the Lord need not worry. Crow said that it was great to rid the world of bad people. If this continued, only half of humanity would survive. Leon von Marvis said that he was glad to hear that the problem had been solved. Leon von Marvis welcomed Siren to the Marvis household. The girl thanked him and said she would do her best, but asked him not to call her Miss Siren. There was no need for formalities. Leon von Marvis said that he was accustomed to treating others with respect. Did it really make the girl uncomfortable? Pullen told the lady not to pay any attention to it. The gentleman's manner of speech was very different from that of most nobles. Walter noted that he too was initially struck by such respectful treatment of subordinates. The girl would quickly get used to it. Leon von Marvis suggested moving on to pressing matters. As the new estate manager, Siren would now have a lot of work to do. The young man added that he was impressed by the proposal to involve the undead in agricultural activities and construction. Siren thanked him and added that she was not sure about the feasibility of the project. It needed to be tested on a simulator. Leon von Marvis said that this was his concern. He was the lord of these lands and it was up to him to decide what tasks to assign to the undead. Leon von Marvis added that all that was required of the girl was competent advice. He would take care of implementing it on the estate. Siren looked at the gentleman and thought that he possessed remarkable composure. She would never have thought that such a young boy could express his thoughts so clearly. The girl thought that this man probably had to grow up quickly after the tragedy that resulted in him executing his own father. Leon von Marvis asked Lady Siren if she had any questions. The girl was ready to give her all and even more to help the Marvis family regain its former glory. Helen said she would not tolerate foxes sniffing around his lordship. Siren just smiled in response. A young man sitting at a huge table in a large empty room listened to his subordinate's report. He believed that the revival of the fallen house of Marvis was useless. The assistant told his lord that for generations they had suffered from a lack of innate talent, sealed away for the common good. It was impossible for this to suddenly change. The young man said that a way had indeed been found. An incredible genius was capable of overcoming all the limitations of his ancestors. They would have to hurry to carry out their grand plan. Siren said that she wanted to start by addressing the first issue on the agenda. She proposed discussing the development of a mine on the territory of Marvis. Cyrene added that this would require data on the number and duration of undead under the Lord's command. The girl added that she was interested in the limits of the Lord's powers. Pullen asked why not agriculture? Why was the development of mines by the undead a priority? Cyrene explained that from a profitability standpoint, this was the best way to achieve the goals in the shortest possible time. Crow said he was impressed by the report. Profitability was good. Cyrene looked at the fluffy creature and thought that it was one of the 72 demons. However, it looked like an adorable lion cub. Cyrene noted that mining was an incredibly dangerous occupation. Careless excavations will endanger the lives of many people. The flip side of this coin is the untold riches that may lie within. In the case of the undead, the first point is irrelevant. Helen asked again, does the use of undead mean that living citizens do not have to do such work? And does it also reduce the risk of a mine collapse? Cyrene confirmed this and added that, in any case, the mine must first be carefully inspected to get an accurate idea of the minerals that can be extracted from it, as well as their market value. Cyrene said that agriculture is also an important part of being a landowner, but in order to maximize efficiency in relation to the required investment, it would be wiser to trade the most expensive goods at their disposal. Leon noted that this was very insightful. He particularly agreed with the girl's intention to test his strength first before proceeding with the development of the mine. The girl suggested that the Lord's recent demonstration of strength was far from his full potential. The Demon Lord vouched for the young man and said that his contractor's talent was much greater than that. Walter said that whatever test Siren came up with, the master would exceed all her expectations. The girl suggested getting straight down to business. She was struck by how confident everyone was in their master. Still, it was better to see once than hear 100 times. Leon von Marvis said that they would need a much larger field. Siren was surprised. How could one man control such hordes of undead? Leon von Marvis added that this was the result of investing half of his mana reserves. The Demon Lord reminded the contractor that their goal was excavation. Such a large number of slaves was not needed until the next war. Crow said that this was an entire army. He had never met a necromancer with such talent. Siren asked how long the master could keep this number of undead in working order. Leon von Marvis replied that he could guarantee 6 hours a day. If the number was reduced, then up to 10. Siren was extremely surprised, because most sorcerers cannot cope with even one summoned creature. Summoning itself is a costly process that thoroughly exhausts the sorcerer. Walter reminded her that the gentleman was a very distinguished mage. Leon said that if that was enough for a demonstration, he suggested moving on to the mine. The young man believed that an army of undead was useless unless it could be put to good use. Alan said that all these kinds of darkness must be eradicated in their empire. In this regard, Eldarus' help would be invaluable. It was extremely important to prevent their influence from growing. Eldarus said that by the time he was finished, they would not stand a chance. Crown Prince Alan said that was fine. He had heard that the Marvis family was too deep in debt to develop the mines. They had to make sure that situation didn't change. The girl standing around the corner overheard the conversation between the prince and his assistant. She guessed that her brother had not allowed the Marvis family to claim reparations after winning the war between the noble houses. She was Princess Penelope von Arkheim. The assistant told the princess that Alan's intentions toward the Marvis house were very bad. Containing the dark bloodlines was a necessary evil for the good of the empire. It was Echidna, the eldest daughter of the House of Light, who served the princess. The princess agreed that it was strange. But why was her brother so fixated on a specific weapon of darkness? Echidna also wondered about this. Penelope said that it was necessary to find out what her brother was planning. He could be planning anything, but he must not be allowed to ascend the throne. Echidna said she understood Her Highness. The girl added that she would make sure of it. The undead worked day and night in the mine. They didn't even need rest. As a result of this backbreaking labor, many crystals were mined. Leon von Marvis asked if these measures would be enough to start with. Siren confirmed that they would. The girl said that it should be enough for the initial expenses. As soon as the mine was operating at full capacity, the estate would definitely get back on its feet. Leon von Marvis said that he even envied Miss Siren. The girl was surprised. The young man added that he always recognized abilities that he himself did not possess. He meant sincere admiration without any ulterior motives. Leon was sure that in the future, Siren would become simply indispensable to all of them. Several days passed. The undead continued to work tirelessly. The number of crystals continued to increase. Diana assessed the crystal reserves with a glance and was pleasantly surprised. Diana asked what they were. Leon von Marvis replied that they were all sapphires. The girl asked what he had done to dig up a whole mountain of gems in a few days. Leon replied that it was all thanks to the undead. Since their last meeting, he had acquired a wonderful assistant. It was her idea. Serene came closer and said she was glad to meet Lady Diana. Diana asked if this girl was now responsible for the finances of the Marvis estate. Siren confirmed this and added that due to her lowly origins, she lacked knowledge. Diana said she was not interested in her origins. Diana asked how the girl had come up with such an innovation as involving the undead army in the work. Diana added that she would be happy to offer her a place in the house of Vericius. Leon von Marvis said he was categorically opposed. He would not allow Diana to poach his subordinates. Diana said she was just joking. Leon seemed to have already grown fond of his new assistant. Pullen wondered if the House of Vericius could protect such a large number of sapphires. Pullen added that they had very few craftsmen and were experiencing difficulties because of this. Diana said that they could easily take on this part of the work. She even offered a deal. Leon von Marvis asked what Diana would require in payment. The girl said that she was interested in the exclusive right to supply Marvis gems to other noble houses. Even at first glance, these gems are of exceptional quality. This means that noble ladies from all over the continent will soon be lining up for these jewels. Cyrene said she would like Lady Diana to discuss the details of this deal with her. Cyrene added that before negotiating, she would like to receive a sample of the final product. Diana wouldn't mind, would she? Diana acknowledged that Leon had hired an excellent employee. Diana said she agreed. She had no intention of taking away the last of Leon's money, which he desperately needed. Diana apologized to the gentleman for interrupting him and said she was ready to accept any punishment. Leon von Marvis said that this was not a punishment, but a reward. After all, Siren was acting in the interests of the House of Marvis. Pullen suggested signing the contract as soon as they received the samples and could decide whether the deal was necessary. Diana said that the Vericia house would cover the processing fee as a gesture of goodwill. Cyrene said that was very kind, and she thanked Lady Diana from the bottom of her heart. Leon von Marvis saw a lot of gold in a bag in front of him. The trade agreement was successfully concluded. It even allowed the House of Marvis to pay off part of its debt. Pullen said that this would be enough to pay off a fifth of the amount they owed to the Sleeping Ones. The Demon Lord said he expected nothing less. He had a nose for good contractors. The door swung open and Walter appeared in the doorway. He said that an urgent matter had arisen. The dam at the northern gate of the territory was damaged. If action was not taken immediately, the water would flood the homes of many innocent citizens. Leon von Marvis pointed to the bag of money and asked if it would be enough to repair the dam reliably as soon as possible. Leon von Marvis told Pullen to send word to the Adventurers Guild. Money was needed again. The young man said he urgently needed a high-paying mission. The next day arrived. Leon von Marvis expressed his hope that he would return as soon as possible. This time, he needed enough gold to resolve the difficult situation. His assistants silently saw their master off. They waited hopefully for his return. The Demon Lord said that this time the contractor really had to go himself. He needed to strengthen his skills in commanding an army of the undead. Pullen was to guard the estate during their absence. Crow added that Pullen should calm down, because everything was being done for his own good as well. Walter asked, "My lord, are you sure you don't want to take him with you?" Leon von Marvis said that Walter would be responsible for Pullen's safety. This mission could take a long time. Leon von Marvis reviewed the mission requirements. A silver token or higher is required. Do not take on the task if you are not confident in your abilities. There is a high probability of death if you fail. The mission's target was the lair of Terrell, a corrupt alchemist maniac. The task is to track down the alchemist's secret laboratory in the abandoned magical catacombs and put an end to the villain's existence. Details of the mission can be clarified before admission to the School of Hermit Magicians. You can consult with a researcher named Lanny. Lonnie expressed hope that the next candidate would fare better. She did not want to send another one to their death. Richard asked why she was sighing so heavily. The girl said she was sighing because of the mission with the alchemist Terrell. Richard realized that she was talking about the poor fellow she had hired from the Adventurers Guild. The girl expressed hope that this time someone capable would respond. Richard said that she knew their guildmaster. Raleigh would undoubtedly find the right person for the job. The girl herself relied heavily on his judgment, but the current candidate was too young. Richard heard that the candidate was a 14-year-old boy. He asked what the candidate's name was. The girl replied that he was a young adventurer named Leon von Marvis. Richard thought that the young lord was not shy about taking big steps. This is not the easiest task for the holder of a silver badge. The girl asked if Richard knew this young man. Richard replied that he did, and very well indeed. The girl asked if he could handle it. She was already considering withdrawing the request. Richard said there was no need to do that. Let everything take its course. This young man had proven himself to be more reliable than anyone else. He was far from being a child who would rush back in tears. Leon von Marvis and Helen moved along the planned route. The girl asked if saving her and her sister from a tragic fate was his mission. Leon von Marvis replied that it was probably so. The Master of Skills noted that resurrection as undead was a kind of salvation. Helen said that she and her sister were grateful to him with all their hearts. They wanted to live, even in this form. After all, their past life in the service of the Lord could hardly be called a life. Maybe they weren't living in the full sense of the word, but at least they were free in their feelings and faith. They couldn't have dreamed of greater happiness. Helen said she would like the gentleman to appreciate her a little more and more deeply. The girl wondered what Leon von Marvis would say to that. Would he want that? The Demon Lord told the witch to leave the young man alone. It would clearly take decades for the contractor to become interested in anyone. No tricks would help here. Marvis suggested taking a look at this holy bewilderment. It was definitely the look of a dead fish. Helen said she couldn't disagree. A proposal was made to set up camp for the night, as the sun would soon set below the horizon. The Demon Lord asked why Leon had taken on the task of this madman from the Magic Academy. Leon von Marvis replied that he had simply taken the highest-paying job. There were no other reasons. Fluffy told the contractor to tell him the truth. Leon should abandon his foolish habit of trying to deceive demons, because they must share the hidden truth. Leon von Marvis confessed that his father had come to him in a dream. He gave him an amulet and shared some wisdom. He also said that they would meet at the right time. Leon added that he was now desperately trying to restore the former glory of the House of Marvis, but he had no idea what to do next. The path ahead was shrouded in fog. The young man added that if they were going to the Magic Academy, he would like to find out one thing. He wanted to ask the dragon, who was able to grasp the nature of magic, what spell his father had cast on him and what he should do to make the promised meeting happen. Marvis said he understood the young man's goals, but even a demon like him cannot foresee the future. Marvis added that he also had questions for Richard. Marvis did not remember if he had mentioned the young man's father before. However, Rune knew in advance that Leon's uncle would lead him to his death. Nevertheless, he accepted death with his head held high. Leon von Marvis realized that his father had foreseen his own death. Marvis agreed with this, but added that Rune could hardly have known that such an evil fate would befall him. Because of this, he was extremely curious about how things really were. Why didn't he run away, and what was he trying to protect? Did he wish for anything with all his heart in his last moments under the guillotine? The Demon Lord told the contractor not to worry. At the end of this journey, they would find out everything. Marvis added that the young man had enough strength to get to the bottom of the truth. Leon von Marvis thought that it was precisely these forces that had led his father to his death. However, Kerschel and Sylvester did not have enough power to openly overthrow him. He was not a particularly outstanding sorcerer, but he was still the first in many years to hear the voice of his master. Rune did not deserve to be killed by these scoundrels. Marvis wondered why Rune had accepted death with open arms. Could it be that what he desired lay beyond the boundary of life and death? Step by step, our hero finally arrived at the old castle at the foot of the mountain. The young man went inside, and Marvis said that they had finally arrived. It was the main building of the School of Hermit Magicians. Everything here was imbued with the spirit of sorcery and magic. Leon said that now they needed to find their important client. Marvis asked if there was anything else besides the name, such as an address. The young man was asked what had brought him here. The girl didn't want to seem rude, but this was no place for children to wander around. The young man would have to leave. Richard came down the stairs with his companion and told Lord Leon not to be shy and come in. The girl was surprised. Could this boy really be a guest of the founder himself? But why did this young man look so young? Richard said that Leon was an honored guest of the school and should be treated with respect. He had been sent here by the Adventurers Guild to deal with a small problem. The girl apologized for her ignorance and offered to accompany the young man. The Demon Lord said that these people were quite foolish. She knew nothing, yet she looked at him as if he were dust beneath her feet. Marvis added that the only thing worse than that was that this empty-headed bookworm was standing up for them. Richard introduced our hero to Lonnie, a researcher at their school. The girl said hello. Lonnie did not think that their mission would be entrusted to such a young talent. However, the head told her a lot about the young man, so she resigned herself to it. Leon von Marvis asked what awaited him on this mission. Richard said that the young man was straightforward as always. Richard suggested discussing it inside and invited the young man to come in. Lonnie said she had to warn him about a more pressing issue. She noted that the difficulty of this mission should be changed. Leon looked at Marvis and suggested that even the Demon Lords might not know about this. Leon von Marvis said that he was at least willing to listen and then decide whether he would agree to the changed assignment. Leon von Marvis realized that Lonnie had submitted a request to the Adventurers Guild, deliberately underestimating the level of difficulty in order to pay less. However, for some reason, she decided to reveal all the details to the contractor on the spot. In other words, the girl was luring him with decent compensation. Is the target also a former member of the organization, Terrell, a fallen mage and alchemist? Lonnie confirmed this. Therefore, she will not skimp on compensation. If the truth came out, no one would take on this case. Lonnie admitted that her finances leave much to be desired. Richard said he was in no position to interfere. He would save this option as a last resort. Leon von Marvis was surprised. What was the point of revealing the details of the mission now? Wouldn't it be better to keep quiet until the very end? Lonnie replied that they couldn't entrust such a difficult mission to people with a clear conscience either. Besides, there was always a chance of success. A person who had come a long way often did not want to leave empty-handed. Leon von Marvis told Lonnie to admit that it was a trap, not a mission. Richard said that if Lonnie was so concerned about the level of difficulty that they had to resort to deception, then they should simply offer adequate compensation. He is confident that Leon will gladly accept this compensation and do everything in his power to succeed. Leon confirmed this. Leon von Marvis said that he was not concerned about the level of difficulty, but about a commensurate payment. Lonnie said that money is not the most important thing. After all, his life could be at risk. The girl admitted that she did not know the true extent of the young man's skills, but she knew for sure that the mission would be more difficult than the average for a silver medal. This is because Terrell is the embodiment of a monster whose power grows stronger every day. Lonnie added that, to be honest, she was to blame for his fall from grace. She was very ashamed to have to involve such a young man in this business. Leon von Marvis looked at Lonnie and suggested that she genuinely cared about him. Considering that the target was rapidly gaining strength, the young man told Lonnie not to worry. He would handle the matter. In the evening, left alone, Lonnie fell into deep thought. She couldn't understand who in their right mind would refuse a larger sum in such circumstances. Lonnie remembered the words of the adventurer who told her not to worry. The young man promised to take care of it. The girl thought that, considering how deeply the school's founder trusted him, he was another monster, just like that gray-haired boy. Lonnie remembered how her colleague tried to calm her down, saying it was just a normal nosebleed. The young man said he didn't have Laney's talent, but he was also an alchemist. He would prove that innate talent was not everything in magical research. The young man with the bouquet of flowers said he was grateful to the gods for their meeting. The young people wanted their love to last forever. Then they would not have to face the nightmares of circumstances, doomed to a miserable life in the slums and persecution, as if they had done something wrong. Lonnie did not understand what had come over Terrell. Lonnie did not understand why Terrell had abandoned her and left. In the square, Lonnie approached our hero and asked him to do her a favor. The girl asked for permission to accompany him. Lonnie said that the abandoned magical catacombs were a secret refuge that even an experienced tracker could not find unless he was a mage. But with her help, Leon would not have to wander for long. The demon lord assumed that Lonnie was telling the truth. Her guidance clearly indicated that she was an exceptional sorceress, and the young man would soon see this for himself. Leon von Marvis thought that this girl radiated a passionate storm of emotions. That was a plus. Leon assumed that people like her would not back down, and she certainly would not run away in the face of danger, but would meet it head-on if necessary. Leon von Marvis agreed and said that the girl could join him, but he had one condition. Leon said that wherever they ended up, and whatever happened to them, her identity must remain a secret. Silence on this matter was a priority. Lonnie must not say a word. The girl said she agreed. She did not understand what dark secrets this young man was keeping if he demanded such secrecy from her. Leon von Marvis said that in that case, they would leave immediately. He had a debt to pay, so it was better to hurry. If they didn't hurry, he would continue traveling under Lady Carlin's escort. The young man begged and pleaded not to be left behind like this. Lonnie was all he wanted. Terrell came to his senses and noticed that he was sitting on the ground. He thought that the regrets of his normal life had long since evaporated, but it seems that there is still a long way to go. The young man took the syringe and injected its contents into his vein. Terrell said that the demonic summit awaited him. He needed the favor of the Grand Duke. He had to prove himself. Terrell believed he was ready to do anything. Nothing else in this world had any value for him anymore. Terrell decided that he needed more demonic blood for his achievements. Lonnie was surprised at how this man managed to determine the right direction without a moment's hesitation. The Impel Forest is a vast and dense forest of incredible length. Most travelers get lost as soon as they set foot here. Lonnie assumed that there was something behind his confidence. Leon von Marvis tried to distract the girl from her thoughts. The young man called out to her and asked why Lonnie was so lost in thought. Lonnie thought that the young man had sensed her questioning gaze, but that was no reason to look so threatening. Lonnie assumed that the ominous feeling was not coming from him. Lonnie, being a mage, felt that the ominous feeling was coming from behind her. Behind her was a ghost, behind whom was an armed Alicia. Alicia attacked the ghost with all her might. Lonnie thought it was simply unbelievable. Could a ghostly monster really be defeated by physical weapons? However, according to theory, only weapons imbued with holy power are capable of such a feat. Alicia smiled modestly and said she was pleased to meet her. Leon von Marvis suggested that he would not be able to keep the secret for long anyway. The young man added that this was Alicia, his companion, a devout believer. Leon said that she was also his loyal servant and an undead. Lonnie said that she understood. Her undead nature spoke for itself. Lonnie asked the Lord if he was a necromancer. The demon lord said that it was even amusing. Did she not believe in the obvious? Leon apologized for not informing her about it in a timely manner. The young man extended his hand and said that he was Leon von Marvis, necromancer of the House of Marvis. Lonnie apologized for her ignorance. She should have known this beforehand. Leon replied that he was not one to demand respect solely for his name. Lanny thought that this young aristocrat was condescending. Leon told her not to take this as an excuse to belittle him or the dignity of his noble house. Lanny changed her mind and decided he was a tyrant. But what else could she expect from a man who traveled in the company of evil spirits? Hiring him might turn out to be the last mistake of her life. Marvis told Lonnie not to be afraid. The demon lord said that unlike his contractor, he was very generous. Crow said those were very big words for a ball of fluff. Lonnie was completely confused as she watched the fluffy creature and the other strange being argue. Alicia noted that Lord Marvis had not said there was no need to be afraid for no reason. The girl added that these two often quarreled over trifles, but they wouldn't hurt a fly. Lonnie thought that she was most afraid of this girl of all. Leon suggested getting back to business. He said that a powerful magical trail could be traced in this place, but it would most likely lead them into a trap. Lonnie said that the catacombs couldn't emit large amounts of mana. The girl doubted that their trail could be detected at all. Marvis said that her doubts were unfounded. Marvis added that this young man was his chosen contractor. The necromancer's heir always had a way of tracking down his prey. However, if his words proved to be true, then his sensitivity to mana must be simply incredible. Lonnie was surprised. Did Sir Richard know this from the very beginning? Lonnie asked what Leon meant when he said it was a trap. What led him to that conclusion? Leon replied, first, the flow of magical energy is continuous. This is clearly a decoy. Their goal is probably to throw them off the trail. But why, that remains to be seen. Terrell was once an alchemist. Now he is nothing more than the embodiment of a demon. Alchemy requires less mana than ordinary magic, but it requires considerable preparation. Leon suggested combing the area for clues to his true location, and added that the target would do everything possible to complicate their search. Leon suggested getting down to business without further ado and activated his magic spears. Alicia repelled the attack of the approaching beasts. Alicia warned Leon to be careful. The young man replied that there was no need to worry about him. He was always ready to fight his opponents. Leon called Helen and said he was counting on her. Helen indignantly asked how these puppies dared to stare at her master. She would teach them a lesson right now. Helen swung her chain and the animals fell into a trap. The animals were bound by the chain. Helen noted that the collar suited them well. Leon said that the witch had done an excellent job. He and Crow would now take care of the rest. Leon noted that the damage was only half of what it would have been originally. He was impressed with Crow's work. Crow replied that the master had not seen everything yet. Lonnie was surprised. Was Leon now practicing magic? So his arsenal included more than just summoning the undead. At that moment, the protagonist activated his unique magical abilities. It seemed incredible. What powerful energy for a 14-year-old boy. Leon acknowledged that they had done a good job. Helen said that it was the least she could do for the gentleman, and he shouldn't worry about it. Crow added that a loyal subject tried harder than a ball of wool that did nothing but growl. Marvis declared that he was the chief strategist of this operation. Leon said he had a feeling the enemy was trying to lure them closer. Terrell saw this detachment and wondered why Lonnie was here. How was that possible? The young man guessed that her appearance was inevitable. It had to happen. Terrell said that his fate was in her hands, but he shouldn't fool himself. He wouldn't give up his life so easily. First, he would show Lonnie how wrong she was. Terrell said he wanted his love to come to him. The squad entered the temple, and our hero assumed that they had arrived at their destination. Leon noted that the path had been deliberately made difficult to complicate their passage. Marvis suggested that the ancient tracking devices were remnants of some sophisticated alchemy. Lonnie said it was his doing. Terrell shirk. At school, he was known for his alchemical talents. Leon said that now was the perfect time to ask such a question and inquired about the relationship between Lonnie and Terrell. The young man suggested that they were more than just colleagues. Lonnie said she knew it would come up sooner or later. Leon asked her to explain why she insisted on accompanying him personally and to reveal the extent of her knowledge about the target. The fact that Terrell Shirk was a student at the hermit school was all that was known so far. The demon lord told the elf to confess what trials await them. They must be prepared for anything. Lonnie replied that she understood them. They had every right to know the truth about this mission. As they crossed the long hall, she would try to briefly recount the whole series of events related to Terrell. Perhaps it would surprise everyone, but they had been husband and wife. Just a few years after she became an orphan of war, Lord Richard graciously took her in. Once when they were out walking, Lanny, frightened, grabbed Richard by the hem of his robe. The mage asked what was wrong. At that moment, some bullies were beating up a young elf nearby, demanding money from him. Richard looked at the young man and said he was quite an interesting kid. There was no trace of fear or self-preservation in him, not even tears. Maybe he's defective in that regard. Lonnie asked Richard to take the boy with him. The mage asked if the girl had awakened her instinct for pity, but she didn't think that pity alone could save everyone in need. If the girl wanted to save him, she needed to present convincing arguments. She must put aside her pity and point out the reasons why this boy should be saved, just as he once found a reason to take Lonnie into his school. Lonnie said that this young man could one day become a good security guard. Richard replied that this was of no value to him. Lonnie suggested that the boy might have a kind heart. Richard said that this was nothing more than speculation. Lonnie said he was kind of cute. Richard was surprised. Were those all the reasons the girl could see? Lonnie thought for a moment and asked if the teacher remembered the book she had recently received. The girl added that everyone who had read this book remembered the words of the wisest philosopher in the county. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go with someone. Richard said that Lanny had done a great job convincing him, and now he would keep his promise. The mage approached the bullies and told them to quietly step aside. He would not allow them to harm the boy anymore because he was going with him. The bullies asked if this guy had decided to play the hero. He'd better step aside if he didn't want to end up beaten up. Richard said that sounded tempting, but another time. The thing was, his companion had her eye on this victim. The villain got angry and tried to punch Richard. However, something went wrong. Richard said that it wouldn't hurt to teach these guys a lesson in manners. The mage blocked the bully's punch. His hand hit an invisible wall. The villain realized that he was facing a mage. That was all he needed. Richard said that this wouldn't kill them and directed an energy charge from his fingertips at the bully. The villain, having received the energy charge, was forced by external forces to fly far back. The other bullies decided not to tempt fate and ran away. Laney immediately rushed to the boy. Richard thought that this was exactly how a father felt when his daughter rejected him for her boyfriend. Lonnie approached the boy and asked him his name and why he was being beaten up. The young man replied that it was because he was weak and asked the girl to ask her questions one at a time. Lonnie said she wanted to know a lot and suggested he answer her questions in order. Lonnie held out her hand and suggested that the boy go home with her. Richard told the girl not to call the school home. Lonnie added that they would take him to a better life elsewhere, and so a special bond was formed between them. The young people studied various magic techniques and the art of potion making together at school. Despite frequent quarrels, they became close friends. Richard said that they were like an old married couple. The young people demanded that the teacher immediately take back his words. Lonnie once asked if Terrell was only interested in alchemy. Terrell said that he had not realized before how pathetic he was. This happened on the day they first met. Terrell added that he realized something when the teacher stood up for him and saved him. Equality, compassion. None of that matters when you are in the power of those who are stronger. He is not gifted in magic or fencing. Alchemy is all he has. Lonnie, recounting the story, noted that they supported each other's dreams as if they were their own. Once, the young man boasted that he had finally succeeded in clairvoyance. Richard noted that he had predicted earlier that the two would marry. They even swore eternal fidelity to each other. Terrell told the teacher not to tease them. They themselves were surprised by this turn of events. Lonnie remarked that it was all because of his attractive appearance. Terrell said he would take that as a compliment. Richard asked if that meant they would be getting married in 3 months. Terrell smiled and said that the teacher was right. They were happy to have the school's blessing. Richard said that if the two of them were happy, then naturally he was too. Richard looked intently at the young people. He hoped that his premonition would not come true this time. However, their happiness did not last long. Terrell committed a serious crime at school. The tragedy struck almost immediately, as soon as they had exchanged their wedding vows. Lonnie asked what Terrell had done. The young man told Lanny to rejoice. Now she had the powerful husband she deserved. Lanny screamed at him not to say that. Lonnie asked if Terrell couldn't even see what he had become. The girl said it was not too late to ask Mr. Richard for help. She was ready to go with him to see him. Terrell had grown horns on his head and wings on his back. He said it was too late. Lonnie concluded her story by saying that Terrell was ultimately consumed by his thirst for power and became a monster who would not hesitate to destroy even his own comrades. Needless to say, he ran away before she could try to capture him. Thus, the mission she entrusted to Lord Leon came about. The Demon Lord said that he had suspected something like this. Now it was clear why the reward was so high compared to ordinary monster hunting. Their target was a half-demon with supreme intelligence and the ability to grow stronger. Lonnie added that Terrell was getting stronger even as they spoke. If they didn't stop him now, there might not be another chance. Leon von Marvis told Miss Laney not to worry. The young man activated the magic circle and stood in its center. After a while, Leon said that he had located Terrell. The Demon Lord suggested they hurry up. He added that the stench of this creature was simply unbearable. Leon agreed to leave immediately. Terrell said in surprise that it was simply impossible. How did they do it? After all, this place was a veritable labyrinth of mana, designed to hide him until he gained his full power. A labyrinth of such size was simply impossible to bypass. Terrell looked at the young people and couldn't understand how they had managed to find the right path so quickly. Leon von Marva stopped the girl and said that she was not allowed to go any further. Terrell was surprised, but the mirror through which he was watching the young people suddenly shattered. Terrell did not understand what had happened and what to do next. An image of a demon appeared above Terrell and told the contractor to run away immediately. The demon said that the abyss was approaching the contractor and that it was impossible to defeat it. Terrell was surprised. Was Lord Baal himself telling him to run away? But he had never once chosen the path of a coward in the face of the enemy. The young man decided to prove that he was quite capable of doing so. Lonnie was the woman to whom he had sworn eternal love, but if he had to take her life, he would do so without hesitation. Baal said that the contractor had misunderstood everything. The demon said that the woman was completely unimportant. However, what accompanied her brought inevitable doom. Terrell, frightened, said that the protective barrier had just fallen. Leon von Marva said that he knew he would find this man here. After all, this was Terrell Schurch, the alchemist who sold his soul to the devil. At that moment, Terrell felt it with all his soul. He had to leave without hesitation. His master said that doom was approaching. He was definitely talking about him. Terrell said that now he clearly saw the reason for his anxiety. This guest was surrounded by a rather dense aura of doom. Terrell said that it was an all-consuming darkness, and he could not afford to take any risks. The half-demon activated a demonic spell. Lonnie shouted for Leon to step aside. She would protect him. The fog of darkness was a mid-level spell. A young mage like Leon might not be able to withstand it. Terrell told the young sorceress to be quiet and not interfere. The girl was exposed to the demonic spell. Lord Marvis told the child to look ahead. Terrell believed that the mist of darkness had already engulfed his opponent. Terrell said that this mist limited more than just visibility. The young man's arrogance would be his undoing. Leon von Marvis said he would ask one last time, was he really standing before the alchemist and demon worshipper, Daryl Schurch? Terrell understood that it was too late to run. There was only one thing left to do, although it was somewhat premature. He admitted that it was him and asked who was in front of him. The protagonist said his name was Leon von Marvis and added that he had been promised a generous reward for Terrell's life. Terrell thought he was looking at a greenhorn. He wondered how he had acquired such power. Terrell said that they were not so different from each other. Both had resorted to higher powers to become who they were. Terrell asked if his opponent would deny it. The young men stood facing each other, the tension mounting. Lonnie screamed at Terrell not to do it. It was still possible to fix everything. Terrell said that Lanny had come too soon, but he would get everything he wanted one way or another. Lonnie wondered what Terrell needed that was so great that he turned to a demon. In the end, he would still become the monster he once despised. Terrell asked who Lonnie had become. She had brought some unknown person here for money, and all to destroy the one she had sworn eternal love to. If a monster is defined by the desire to destroy and the thirst for power to achieve that goal, then Lonnie was just as repulsive a monster as he was. Lonnie said she was tired of these double standards. Terrell asked if the world that had turned away from him because of his weakness didn't have double standards. Terrell asked what the child had done wrong to find himself at the center of war and suffering. Even if he was picked up by someone with power, the weak are still forced to dance to the tune of the strong in this rotten world. Terrell added that in order to survive like him, there is only one thing to do. On must strive for unquestionable power by any means necessary. With that, Terrell activated his demonic spears, directing them at his opponent. Leon von Marvis objected to Terrell's statements. Leon confirmed that he had made a contract with a demon, but not for power and supremacy, but for protection. Armed undead warriors appeared around our hero. Leon added that this devilish contract was the smallest sacrifice he was willing to make. The Black Lion thought that the magical dungeon had come at just the right time. The number of undead that the young man summoned at once was impressive. Moreover, all these undead were of excellent quality. This could not be denied, an incredible depth of potential. Terrell asked what the difference was, since in the end his opponent still craved power. Leon replied that the difference was enormous. Leon noted that Terrell destroys and corrupts everything in his path. Only those who crave to take from others resort to such methods. Terrell said he was very interested to see what would happen if all the evil in the world began to sharpen its claws against this guy. Would he be able to remain noble? He was simply justifying himself with the lofty words of the authorities. Leon was surprised. Did Terrell really consider him a powerful lord? The protagonist said that it was precisely because of his weakness that he had to destroy his father with his own hands. Leon added that he had no other choice, so he doesn't dwell on it. But can the same be said about Terrell? With that, the protagonist took out the Necronomicon. Leon said that Terrell betrayed Lonnie and his colleagues from the hermit school. Does he really have no regrets? The undead, having received their orders, took decisive action and headed towards Terrell. Terrell called the undead pathetic puppets and tried to resist them. Terrell couldn't understand what kind of demon was giving the boy follower so much power. Was he being protected by the archdemon himself? But what could he offer in return? Terrell asked what the boy had given in exchange for such power. Deals of this magnitude cannot be made without commensurate payment. The young mage must explain what is so special about him. Leon replied that there was nothing extraordinary about him. He offered the only thing he had. Leon said it was his existence. That was the only thing that could pass for payment at that moment. Terrell was sure that this was just childish bravado. He took out a potion and decided to strengthen his defenses, then slowly strangle his opponent until he told the truth. Helena approached Terrell at a dangerous distance with her weapon in her hands. Terrell noted that the reinforced magical barrier had been broken by brute force. But how was that possible? Seizing the moment, Leon von Marvis approached his opponent and delivered a devastating blow to his chest. Terrell flew backwards under the force of the blow, gasping for breath and coughing up blood. He considered this absurd, for he could not be defeated so easily. Terrell shouted that he would offer 100 living souls in exchange. The Black Lion shouted that this guy shouldn't dare to bark at him. Terrell thought that this was not just an archdemon, but one of the greatest demons of another dimension. Marvis asked if this puppy knew him. Terrell replied that of course he knew Lord Marvis. But what could the Lord of Demons want from a youngster like him? Marvis said that Terrell could only blame his own limited imagination for his lack of power. Did Terrell seriously believe that his contractor's sacrifice alone had compelled him to endow this boy with such incredible magical potential? The power he had bestowed upon his contractor had been used with the help of his innate mana reserves. Terrell thought this was unfair. The countless lives he was willing to give up to get what he had, compared to this guy who was just lucky to be born talented. Terrell believed that this boy was undeservedly receiving such power. Terrell said that fate was ultimately the cruelest monster. Lonnie wondered in surprise, did he really destroy his own father? The girl remembered hearing about this before. The young head of the family who resorted to the help of a demon to win a territorial war. So he was the direct heir to the dark lineage. A young man who sold himself entirely for power. What had Leon von Marvis done? The demon lord said that instead of dwelling on the past, it was better to just enjoy the show. Leon still had more to show. Suddenly, a heart-rending scream rang out. Helen couldn't bear it and covered her ears with her hands. Crow told the gentleman to look up. There was a huge hole in the ceiling. Terrell said that this guy was born that way, but he got nothing. His blessings were simply rejected. A huge monster entered the room through the hole in the roof. Terrell said he wanted to introduce his opponent to the power he had developed himself. Leon von Marvis immediately realized that it was a chimera. Lonnie was surprised. Where did Terrell get this? Why does he need this creature? Lonnie screamed that Terrell must not be allowed to approach the chimera. Terrell said it was too late. The people consumed by the chimera screamed that this shouldn't be happening. Why them? Terrell said that they should thank him because he had given them strength through his body. Terrell ended up on the chimera and began to control it. Lonnie asked why Terrell did this. It was a disgusting abomination. The girl said it was forbidden black magic that cost human lives. The Black Lion said that by feeding this filth with his own soul, he had developed power through pain and despair. It was the most sinister magic in existence. Helen said that this was interesting. Crow noted that this was no joke. The young lord could suffer. Comprehensive support was needed. Terrell said that the battle would be his, even though the lord had urged him to flee. Terrell was going to prove to Bao that he was wrong. Terrell said he would take the soul of the young man, before whom even the archdemon trembled, and add his own. However, at some point, Terrell realized that he could not even move. Leon von Marvis told his assistants to step back. Terrell shouted that he was not hiding his thirst for power. It was not a sin at all. He activated his unique abilities and energetically attacked his opponent. Leon von Marvis was completely unaffected by this attack and told his opponent to remember one thing. At the same time, the protagonist held the Necronomicon in his hand. The Demon Lord thought, is Leon going to use the Necronomicon to its full power? In that case, everyone needs to get away quickly. Helen grabbed the elf and dragged her aside. She said there was no time to think. They had to do what their master had ordered. Leon declared that there was no soul in the whole world that was allowed to destroy without reason. Even he, a representative of the Marvis clan and guardian of the undead, did not dare to do so. Lonnie thought she had read about this spell in books. After all, it was Silk of Eclipse. It was a powerful spell, one of the favorite spells of the founder of the Marvis clan. Since then, no one had been able to use it. Khmer and Terrell found themselves at the epicenter of the spell, in the middle of a magic circle. The protagonist's assistants were undoubtedly impressed by the spell's effect on their opponent. After it was over, Lonnie asked the young lord if he was all right. Leon replied that he was feeling much better now. Marvis told the contractor that using so much mana at once was rather unwise. Leon replied to the demon lord that, unlike the undead, mana could be stored up. Leon also asked Miss Laney how she was feeling. At that moment, the elf remembered Terrell and his warm words addressed to her. Leon von Marvis admitted that he was unfamiliar with the hardships of love. At best, he struggled to understand joy, sadness, and other emotions of the heart. Leon added that nevertheless, he understood how Lonnie was suffering at that moment. It was obvious to him. Lonnie did not understand what had prompted Terrell to commit this madness. She never asked for a genius wizard by her side. Let him not stand out in any way. Lonnie loved him just the way he was. The Demon Lord said that it wasn't the worst attempt at consolation. Leon von Marvis replied that he was merely stating the facts. Crow noted that the young gentleman had reduced the girl to tears. Was he not a gentleman? Helen admitted that she liked bad boys. The Demon Lord asked if Leon had anything to add. Leon von Marvis asked Lanny if the destruction of the Chimera would be taken into account when paying the reward. Lonnie smiled and said that judging by the destruction caused, the reward would be increased, but first they had to return home. Upon returning home, it was announced that his lordship, Lord Leon von Marvis, had arrived. Walter greeted the lord and Pullen expressed his hope that the lord was not injured anywhere. Leon von Marvis said he was perfectly fine. Walter admitted that rumors of the mission had reached them before he returned. Walter had heard that even the bearer of the golden token would have struggled with such a trial. The gentleman had accomplished it at the age of 14. Pullen noted that it was very risky. The gentleman had almost exhausted his mana supply in one go, and now they had to worry about his mental state. Leon von Marvis thanked him for his concern and said that the mission had been straightforward and that he was worried about something else. Leon added that one thing annoyed him, just like when he met Alicia and Helen. The young man explained that this particular thing was driving him crazy. Pullen suggested moving on to more pressing matters and handed Leon a letter with a wax seal on the envelope. Pullen said that the letter contained good news. The young man had been accepted into the prestigious Elefante Academy. Pullen added that the young lord had grown up to be worthy of this educational institution. It even made him want to cry. The Elefante Academy was the most prestigious academy in the entire Arkham Empire. All the future heroes of the continent gather there to learn swordplay or magic. Leon remembered how his father told him that Elefante would help him develop his potential. Rune told his son that he had a talent as boundless as the sky itself, and that this talent would take Leon far. In Elefante, the young man would be able to meet peers. Their talent might even surpass his own. Rune advised his son to stay strong, as he might not be there for him at that moment. Leon remembered his father's words, boundless as the sky itself. Pullen suggested that the young lord cast aside the burden of managing the estate and immerse himself in student life. Pullen added that he would make sure that nothing would burden his lord. The Demon Lord remarked that Elefante was just a sandbox for the offspring of aristocrats who understood nothing about life and saw no reason for the contractor to linger there. Leon replied that he would do as he pleased. The Demon Lord added that the academy was a place where people studied from books. Given his complete and utter lack of knowledge on most subjects, he doubted that the young man was suited to an academic environment. Leon von Marvis said that he understood everything, but wanted to meet a young man there. Besides, he had a feeling that his father would have wanted him to. He didn't want to let him down. Pullen noted that this was well said. Under the guidance of the best mentors on the continent, it would not be difficult for the young man to restore the reputation of the Marvis family. The maid asked the young man if he was nervous. After all, this was the famous Elefante Academy. The young man said it was no big deal. He had the misfortune of moving into the body of the final boss. He just had to do everything possible to get through. Even with this sick body, he could still rely on Reinhofer's reputation. He would have to pretend until he achieved his goal. In other words, he would play the villain of the prophetic dream and fight against time itself. He will play Knox von Reinhofer until the very end.